Chapter 1 Uncle Joe, Can I Stay the Night? Bai Ji opened the door to the room. Men's and women's clothing was scattered all over the floor, and the two of them had been so carried away that they had dropped 5 or 6 unopened condoms on the ground. Pop! Her chest rose and fell with anger as she gave the man a hard slap. Su Tian is my best friend. How could you do this to her? The man's drunkenness was half-wakened. He wanted to defend himself, but the shape under his pants couldn't lie. Gigi, I was confused just now. I don't know what happened either. I woke up and found her half-naked on top of me. Bai Ji glared at Su Tian again. Several buttons on Su Tian's shirt had come undone, and half of the shoulder strap had come off, revealing her snow-white, round shoulders. She got up awkwardly from Lu Hao's lap and fixed the shoulder strap. It wasn't me who took the initiative, he was the one who pursued me. You know that I've always been addicted to it and I can't resist handsome guys, so. From today onwards, you two are out of my life. One slutty, one promiscuous, a perfect match. Bai Ji finished crying, turned around, and wiped her tears away with her fingertips. In the blink of an eye, the look of pain and despair had disappeared. Her grip on her phone tightened, and a gleam of pleasure appeared in her eyes. An hour later. In a red Porsche driving to the suburbs. Su Tian drives and complains, "Damn, I really made a big sacrifice for you this time. That Lu Hao, let me tell you, no way." Bai Ji smiles charmingly, "You guys didn't do anything just now, and you can tell it didn't work? No means no, what's that saying? Right, men in the arts are all weak, no dogs to talk about." No dogs to talk about. The two girls laughed and talked cheerfully, as if the scene of fighting over a man that had just played out was not about them at all, but was in fact a scene they had put on together. Su Tian, hey, we had a deal. I'll help you get rid of Lu Hao, and you have to help me get my future stepfather. Su Tian felt a little guilty when she mentioned the word stepfather. She knew that the deal was a bit unfair. She was only after an artsy young man who liked to act mysterious. And Bai Ji was going to seduce her stepmother's rumored soon-to-be husband, Zhou Song, the richest man in Jingbei City, who was 6 years older than her. This man was also Su Tian's father's lifelong friend. He was 34 years old, which was 14 years older than them. He was a real predator. It was said that all the women who tried to climb into his bed either revealed various nude photos of their past or suddenly had accidents the next day, either dying or becoming disabled. If she hadn't been desperate this time, she wouldn't have wanted Bai Ji to take the risk. Finally, the car arrived at the door of an English-style single-family house in the suburbs. Su Tian's voice trembled, "Gigi, if anything happens to you, you must call me. It doesn't matter if the seduction doesn't work, safety comes first, okay?" The girl who had just been sitting astride the man unashamedly and letting herself be photographed was now timid as a sheep when it came to mentioning Jotsong. Bai Ji acted very calm, "Don't worry, I will definitely not let your stepmother successfully marry him, so that you lovers can finally become brother and sister." After the girl finished speaking, she walked towards the villa without looking back. Bai Ji was wearing an elegant, pure white dress today. Walking in the night, she looked like a fragrant, rare yucca flower. Su Tian looked at her back and thought, "She is so beautiful, Zhou Song should show mercy, right? Right, my Uncle Joe likes obedient people. You are the pure goddess of our school, he will definitely like you if you act normally." Bai Ji said she heard that. But is she obedient? She took out a mirror in the moonlight and looked at her own clear, innocent eyes in the mirror, which still had a hint of red from crying. A creamy white silk scarf was tied around her slender neck. But beneath the scarf, the girl gave a half-smile, revealing half of her tooth. She had never been obedient. "Uncle Joe, my classmate is coming in." Su Tian had known Zhou Kongyi since she was very young, as her father had business dealings with him. Ever since she was little, she had called him Uncle Joe. Su Tian didn't dare to act together with Bai Ji, so she just dared to call, "Uncle Joe, my classmate is a once-in-a-century genius in our school, she is very obedient, she will just borrow the book and leave. She will not cause you trouble." Just as she finished speaking, Bai Ji opened the villa door with a loud bang. This was Bai Ji's first time meeting Zhou Kongyi in person. The man had his back to her, and from the back, she could vaguely see that he had a very good figure. He was over 30 years old, but he maintained excellent muscle tone, which showed that he was extremely disciplined in his exercise and diet. He was wearing a blue, high-quality shirt, and a piece of an expensive stainless steel watch was exposed from the left cuff of his shirt. His every move showed the most charming appearance of a mature man. He is many times more attractive than the immature student Lu Hao. Of course, the temptation is directly proportional to the danger. Bai Ji's voice was obedient and soft. Hello, Uncle Su Tian, may I ask which floor is the study? Zhou Tsong did not turn around. Bai Ji saw him flip through the financial report in his hands and casually tell the maid, take her there. His voice was very pleasant, like the first frost on a mountain, or mellow amber liquor, intoxicating just from the smell. Bai Ji said thank you in a soft voice. In the corner where no one could see, she let out a flirtatious smile. She liked this gentle, indifferent Buddhist disciple. She wanted to drag him down from the altar of Buddhism and let him go to ruin, and rip his blue shirt with a few missing buttons. Zhou Kangyi's study was also very large. After Bai Jijin entered the study, she pretended to be a book-obsessed girl and spent 2 whole hours upstairs without saying a word. In fact, she had already obtained what she needed, and with it, she would be able to successfully resolve the crisis at school next week. But since no one was rushing her, she might as well play around here for a while. Until her phone vibrated. Su Tian sent a text message, Gigi, it's been 2 hours, are you still alive? Aha. So did you sleep with my uncle yet? Bai Ji looked up at the door. Not yet. But it's coming. After a few seconds, she added. Pop. Suddenly, Zhou Kangyi, who was sitting in the living room, heard a sound of glass shattering from the study. The maid immediately wanted to go upstairs to check on the situation, but before she could set foot on the stairs, the girl came down on her own initiative, her eyes pleading. Uncle Zhou, I accidentally knocked over a glass of water and my clothes got wet. Can I take a shower at your house and stay the night? This time, she took the initiative to stand in front of Zhou Kangyi and speak directly to him. This was also the first time that Zhou Kangyi passively saw the appearance of the girl who came tonight. The girl's bare feet and the pure white skirt were soaked with a large area of watermarks, and half of the skirt was pressed against her body, vaguely outlining her slender and straight legs. She looked like a well-behaved and smart young girl. Su Tian said she was the same age as her, so she must already be in college, but because of her temperament, she looked much younger than Su Tian, and even just by looking at her, it was hard to tell if she was underage or not. But he knew just by looking that she wasn't as well behaved as Su Tian had said. Chapter 2 ZC Wise Cat. The thing was completely out of place with her skirt and temperament, and therefore looked particularly jarring. The man frowned slightly at the collar. Before you came, didn't Su Tian tell you that Shishu had no precedent for allowing outsiders to stay overnight? Bai Ji nodded, she told me. Then why did you deliberately knock over the glass of water? The man's smile grew colder. The tricks of a young girl of this age were not even trivial in his eyes. It was just a stupid prank. The maid also began to worry about the girl's situation. But surprisingly, instead of panicking, she even admitted directly. I'm sorry, Uncle Zhou, I did it on purpose. Because my ex-boyfriend kept harassing me and hacked my apartment's password, I really didn't dare go back tonight. My ex-boyfriend is called Lu Hao, you should be familiar with that name, right? Zhou Tsong also heard this name and his eyes gradually darkened. Bai Ji quietly observed his reaction. Sure enough, as long as he mentioned Lu Hao, he would not remain indifferent. She had clearly come prepared, but her innocent eyes showed no trace of observing him. Her pupils were clear and bottomless, still tinged with the red of grievance from catching Lu Hao in the act. She fidgeted with the waist string that came with the skirt, as if afraid that he would not agree. Uncle Zhou, can I borrow a guest room? Otherwise, I'll have to go to the police station and have him arrested. Please. Sure enough, Zhou Kangyi closed the file. After a long time, he spoke to the maid in a cold voice, take her to pick a room she likes. Bai Ji smiled. After going upstairs, she boldly picked the room next to Zhou Kangyi's. She knew that Zhou Kangyi would not let Lu Hao stay with a sexual harassment record. This is how these rich people in high places are like. Their reputation is more important than other people's families and lives. But it wasn't enough to seduce Zhou Kangyi with these tricks tonight. Far from it. Sure enough, Zhou Kangyi didn't come upstairs all night. It was almost dawn when Bai Ji sent a text message to Su Tian. Your uncle has agreed to let me stay over. Next time, let him touch me. After that, she decided to secretly leave a surprise in his bed. Bai Ji took the bus back to school. The bus's smart screen was broadcasting the news of Zhou Kangyi and Luo Fei's marriage. At the bottom of the screen were the details of Zhou Kangyi, which Bai Ji had already memorized. The richest man in Jingbei City, with businesses all over the world, a graduate of Stanford University with a master's degree in law and a doctorate in philosophy. Luo Fei's profile was relatively simple, 27 years old, founder of Venus Investment. Of course, the TV wouldn't write that Luo Fei had been the third party who intervened in Su Tian's parents' marriage when she was 19 years old. What's more, it won't be written how, in order to successfully marry Su Tian's father, Luo Fei killed someone else's father and husband at any cost. Bai Ji's fingers gripping the armrest turned white with each knuckle, and she thought of the image of her father being hacked to death with a butcher's knife and her mother crying herself blind. Her lips were bleeding from biting them, and she desperately held back the tears from falling. Her eyes were bloodshot. Getting married, is that it? Destroying someone else's family and still expecting to receive the blessings of the world with a flourish. How could they get away with it so easily? Lu Fei, Zhou Kongyi, Lu Jia, she won't forget any of them. Before Bai Ji went to school, she deliberately folded the quilt in Zhou Kongyi's guest room neatly. Zhou Kongyi's nanny praised her, saying that she was a well-mannered little girl. But what the nanny could never have imagined was that it was this well-mannered little girl who sneaked into Zhou Kongyi's room, which she had just cleaned, when the nanny wasn't looking. And she slipped something under his pillow. Zhou Kongyi saw the object she left behind at 12 o'clock at night. After taking a shower, the man had a few crystal droplets of water dripping from his head, sliding down his protruding Adam's apple and onto the top of his muscular chest. He had a face that was naturally full of lust, but it was usually indifferent and cold. Just as he turned off the light and lay down, a hard object poked him in the nape of the neck. Zhou Kongyi got up, turned on the light, and reached out to touch it. It was the collar around the girl's neck from last night. He stared down at this object that should never have been there. The texture was soft, and instead of the unpleasant smell inherent in leather, it had absorbed the unique scent of the girl. But on top, there was a row of hard golden studs. Just like her, it looked pure and innocent, but in fact it was full of ambition and sharpness. The man's finger touched the word marks engraved on the back with a laser. When he turned it over, the content was downright vile. ZCY's cat. His brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Under the pillow, there was also a note she had written. Uncle Zhou. I want to be slept with by you. Bai Ji returned to school, and all around her were discussions of Zhou Kongyi's marriage to Luo Fei. I heard that Zhou Kongyi also taught at our school at the beginning, but that was 10 years ago, and it seems that he went abroad and didn't get a diploma from our school. He is really handsome, and his fiancée is also very pretty. At first glance, she seems to have come from a wealthy family and is a celebrity. Bai Jixian laughed. Have you ever met a celebrity who was a habitual offender at the age of 19 and broke up other people's families? The more people who idolized Zhou Kongyi and Luo Fei's couple, the more she wanted to show the true face of Luo Fei to them. Bai Jixian saw Zhou Kongyi again at Su Tian's birthday party on a weekend. In the hall, she was waiting for Zhou Kongyi to appear while idly sucking on a cherry. A few older schoolmates walked up to her. Bai Ji? Why are you here alone? Aren't you Su Tian's best friend? Why aren't you two together on her birthday? Bai Ji casually replied, We've broken up. Wang Jiaomo's eyes flashed. Bai Ji's reply coincided with the news she had heard. She had heard that Bai Ji's best friend had stolen her boyfriend of just 1 week, and they had been caught in the act, thus ending the fairy tale of the school hunk and the talented girl. Similar rumors had been rife at school. Several people surrounded her, watching the show. Could it be that Lu Hao had fallen for Su Tian's rich daughter and kicked you, a poor student, to the curb? Ha, this is so interesting. I thought I could only see this kind of melodramatic plot in novels. Bai Ji looked at them indifferently without saying a word. She knew that Lu Hao was the school's most popular guy, and a second-generation rich kid with excellent grades. Many people would be jealous if she fell in love with him. But her goal from the beginning was never Lu Hao. Bai Ji twisted her lips into a smile. Now that he has dumped me, I'm no longer your enemy. Don't forget to return the classical texts you stole from me on Monday. If you lose them, Professor Zhang won't let you off lightly. Sure enough, Wang Jiao's face changed. What are you talking nonsense about? What do I have to do with the books you borrowed from Professor Zhang? Bai Ji didn't say it outright, but her beautiful eyes smiled coldly down at her. Wang Jiao was horrified by her gaze, and cried out like a thief caught red-handed, I know, you lost Professor Zhang's classics and are trying to blame it on me. I'm telling you, forget it. How do I know if you lost it accidentally or if you stole it? I'm going to tell Professor Zhang about this right now, and I'm going to make him fire you. Bai Ji's smile became even more charming. He won't fire me, because on Monday, I'll return it on time. Wang Jiao's expression of disbelief was revealed when she heard this. Return it on time? How is that possible? The book that Professor Zhang lent to Bai Ji is clearly in. Chapter 3 Tangled. Wang Jiao thought of another person who also had this book, and looked at her up and down. You're not thinking of going to find a second copy, are you? Bai Ji didn't answer directly. Wang Jiao suddenly smiled with some contempt. As everyone knows, the classics are precious and there are only 2 copies, with an incalculable value. One is in the hands of the leading cultural figure in the country, Professor Zhang Quanshui, and this one has now been lost, while the other is said to be privately owned by the financial magnate Zhou Kangyi. If Bai Ji really had the idea of stealing it from Zhou Kangyi, she is really too whimsical. Do you know who has the second copy? Bai Ji, you are really stupid from reading too much, and you have delusions of grandeur. Ha, if you want to borrow it from Zhou Kangyi to fool Professor Zhang, you will definitely die a miserable death. Zhou Kangyi is such a character that you can only see in textbooks, and ordinary students naturally dare not even think of asking him for help borrowing a book. Wang Jiao had also seen Zhou Kangyi at a top domestic academic forum, but at the time she had only glanced at him from afar. He was the forum's lofty guest of honor, while she was just a sign language interpreter who showed him the way from the school gate to the library. She didn't even have the qualification to enter the venue and hand him a pen and cup of water. Bai Ji thought of the words she had left under his pillow the previous morning. A faint smile lifted her red lips. I wonder if Uncle Zhou has seen that note yet. I wonder if he will think of her when he sees it. The girl's pale, thin silver fork stirred the cake, and the strawberry-flavored cake was scattered with pink crumbs on the plate. Bai Ji was still reminiscing about the face of the man she saw last night, until a small commotion broke out in the crowd. She looked back and saw that tonight's target had finally entered. Zhou Tsong also entered with Luo Fei holding hands, like a perfect couple. She narrowed her eyes and sized up the man. How about we play a game? She suddenly said to Wang Jiao. Wang Jiao was a little confused. What? The man you wouldn't even dream of. I can make him go crazy over me. Bai Ji left this cryptic sentence, ignored Wang Jiao's cursing and swearing, and walked in the direction of Zhou Kangyi. Bai Ji saw that Luo Fei was standing in the crowd, wearing a sexy red split-skirt dress that highlighted her extremely plump figure. She was a head taller than Bai Ji, and her skin had the healthy wheat complexion that was currently the most sought after in North America, like a supermodel walking off the Victoria's Secret runway. Netizen comments all said that Luo Fei's appearance was the look that rich people loved the most. But Bai Ji didn't believe what the internet said about pure lust being worthless in the face of sexiness. At least for this man, Zhou Kangyi, it definitely wasn't. She was sure that Zhou Tsong also had no feelings for Luo Fei. But she also wanted to see what it was like for him to be with another woman. Bai Ji wanted to go straight in between them, but the banquet was packed with people, and before she could get close, Zhou Tsong took the woman's hand and they went up the spiral staircase in the center of the hall to the guest room on the second floor. Bai Ji raised her foot to catch up, but she was pulled by someone else at this time. Bai Ji frowned in annoyance. Ji. Lu Haohong pleaded with her with red eyes. I've been looking for you all day, Ji. The night before last, I really don't know what happened. I love you, I really only love you in this life. Bai Ji's face was expressionless. Really? But you got hard for my best friend. The young man's handsome face instantly blushed with shame. I'm sorry, I did have a physical reaction at the time, but I really kept rejecting her, I can swear on my life. Bai Ji looked impatient, but I feel like vomiting when I think of the image of you getting a hard-on for her, especially now that you dare to come to her birthday party. Then I'll go out now, I'll wait for you outside, can you give me another chance? Bai Ji observed in the corner of her eye that Zhou Tsong upstairs had also entered the room, and that she didn't have much time left. Bai Ji, then go wait for me by the pool outside. He thought that Bai Ji's words meant that there was still room for discussion, and his mood, which had been silent for 2 days, finally recovered a little. Before leaving, he watched the girl quickly go up the hotel's turquoise-carpeted spiral staircase, his eyes full of longing and admiration. In his eyes, Bai Ji was like a noble and arrogant goddess, so smart and so holy. But he would never have guessed that this goddess, who usually swept away all the dust in the school, was about to do something crazy. Su Tian's text message came through at this time. Ji, I've already called my stepmother downstairs. Zhou Kangyi is also alone in his room now, so you'd better hurry. Got it. After replying, Bai Ji put down her phone, took a deep breath, and was already standing at the door to Zhou Kangyi's room. As the stepmother, Luo Fei should have come downstairs to appear at her stepdaughter's birthday party, even if the two of them didn't get along. But it was hard to say how long Su Tian could hold off Luo Fei. Zhou Kangyi had to be taken care of before Luo Fei returned. Bai Ji rang the doorbell and, in the tone of a waitress, said to the man inside, "Hello, Mr. Zhou, turn down service." Her tone was very professional and respectful. But as soon as the man inside opened the door, the girl just stepped right in. Her movements and words became arrogant without any respect, and her eyes stood nakedly by his bed, where she took off her sweater jacket and threw it on his bed. "Uncle Zhou, I've come to get the collar I left on your bed last time," she said. She lifted her neck like a swan. "Would you put it on for me?" She was wearing only a white halter dress, which showed off her shoulders but was conservative enough at the neckline to not reveal a hint of her femininity, leaving only the girl's unique snow-white, slender neck exposed. The man who had just been laughing and joking with the crowd had no warmth on his face at the moment. His coldness penetrating to the bone. "Get out." Bai Ji of course would not go out. She even took a few steps deeper into the room. She went out onto the balcony, spread her arms wide and enjoyed the evening breeze dancing through her skirt. "Uncle Zhou, your room with Auntie Luo is really beautiful. You can even see the pool." She saw Lu Hao standing by the pool, waiting for her with all his heart. Bai Ji felt like she had discovered something new. "Uncle Zhou, look, Lu Hao is here too." If he saw his girlfriend standing next to the bed of his most respected teacher, would he cry? He should be able to find out that the guest in this room tonight is you, Uncle Zhou, right? Bai Ji looked back at him innocently, her finger pressed against her moist lips, without a trace of provocation, but every word she said was undoubtedly dancing wildly around his bottom line. "Uncle Zhou, do you think he can hear me if I shout at him from here? One more step on the bottom line." Sure enough, Bai Ji saw anger appear on that fair and clear face. He stepped forward and tried to personally throw her out, but at that moment, Bai Ji climbed directly onto the protective balcony fence, half of her body exposed, shouting, "Lu Hao! I'm at your poolside." The boy immediately looked up in their direction. But he was not given the chance to see clearly, as a strong and powerful force yanked Bai Ji back. She felt her entire body hanging in the air, her buttocks sitting on the cold metal guardrail. With a quick and agile body, she easily turned around, and was face to face with the man wearing only a thin shirt. Bai Ji's cold hands quickly cupped the man's firm jaw, and she opened her mouth and wrapped her lips around his and sucked him in. She wrapped her lips around him and sucked him in. She wrapped her lips around him and sucked him in. Bai Ji looked disappointed, as if she were eating candy. Zhou Tsong's face had turned black, and the resistance even made her feel pain. The man's arm blocked her mouth, which was still doing whatever it wanted. As he blocked her, Bai Ji screamed again. She fell from the place where her back hung in the air, as if she had been pushed. It was meticulous down to the length of the suspenders, the curve of the neckline. Where the slit of the skirt ended, including, Zhou Tsong could also smell the aroma of her skin, and every detail of each tone of voice was carefully designed by her. She was already beautiful like a demon. What's more, she was now holding on to her life. So it was no surprise to see his reaction next. Zhou Tsong's big hand supported her back as she expected to prevent her from falling. In that instant, she used her legs to hook around his body with ease. Chapter 4. He just had strong feelings for me. Bai Ji wrapped her arms tightly around him. She leaned over his shoulder and started to sob. "Uncle, hug me tight. What if Lu Hao saw me fall and got scared? What if he misunderstood and thought the person he was most grateful to killed the woman he loved the most? He'll be so miserable. What if? This is so exciting, I'm going to die." The young girl's hands gripped the cold, smooth fabric of his shirt, like a plant clinging to another for support. Her only bargaining chip was that Zhou Kanjia would never do anything to hurt Lu Hao. But she was full of talk about sports cars, and what were clearly threats were made to sound as soft as a puddle of water by her. If she had been talking to a young boy with poor self-control like Lu Hao, he probably would have lost his temper long ago. However, Zhou Kanjia looked like he was not reacting at all. The man only glanced downstairs to see Lu Hao, who was constantly peering in their direction. Then he reached out his left hand and turned off the light on the balcony. Upon noticing his action of turning off the light, Bai Ji's red lips became even more enchanting and pure. "Uncle Zhou, the way you turned off the light, it's like we're having an affair." This was the first time Zhou Tsong had looked at her so closely. Next, every word he said was extremely cold. "I stole it, can you handle it?" Bai Ji was momentarily stunned. She admits that for a split second she was confused and forgot what to do or say next. Meanwhile, downstairs, Lu Hao thought he heard Bai Ji's voice. But when he looked up, the light was turned off by the man in the room. He couldn't see anything, except for the silhouette. The man gave him the impression of being similar to his high school liberal arts tutor, Mr. Zhou, but he quickly dismissed the thought. His impression of Mr. Zhou was that he was cold and aloof, but the man on the balcony was now being wrapped in the woman's legs, extremely amorous and lustful. He couldn't even begin to compare with the image of Mr. Zhou Kangyi in his mind. The Liu family had strict household rules, and Liu Hao had always been conservative. He would blush at the sight of a kiss in a movie. When he encountered such a scene, he quickly lowered his head and changed places to wait for Baiji, not daring to look again. What she didn't know was that Baiji was now lying on Zhou Kangyi's shoulder, gasping for breath. It was seduction, but also shock. After all, if Zhou Kangyi hadn't rescued her just now, she was afraid that her head would have already been smashed. She felt that Zhou Kangyi was also pulling her off of him with all his strength, but she wrapped herself around him even more tightly. Suddenly, she noticed something interesting. The girl blinked curiously, looking innocently into his eyes. "Uncle, that doesn't look like a belt. You missed me." Her tone was affirmative, like a child who had won a game and was eager for the promised lollipop. Zhou Kangyi tightened his fingers around her wrist, but he wasn't sure if he was going to drop her or grab her the next second when the sweet doorbell rang. "Kangyi, are you in there?" "Zhongye?" Lu Fei called out to him from outside the door. But Baiji's heels were still stuck to the man's suit trousers. Zhou Zhongye let go of Baiji, walked back into the room, picked up her jacket on the bed and threw it at her. "You'd better think of a reason to explain to her." Words were as unforgiving as actions, and Baiji was a little sore from being thrown around. She put her jacket back on with a face full of grievances. "Isn't Uncle Zhou going to help me explain with Auntie Lu Fei?" Zhou Tsong also gave her a cold, piercing glance, and she fell silent and obedient. "Then I'll go explain to her myself." Baiji tied up her loose hair and walked obediently like a little bird, heading out smartly. Baiji had deliberately picked an inexpensive, very student-like sports jacket to wear outside today, and after putting it on, all the previous allure was covered up tightly. Now she also deliberately put on a mask, covering up her entire pretty face that looked like a demon. She looked like a middle school student who was completely insulated from fashion and beauty. But Luo Fei was not someone who could be fooled so easily. When Luo Fei saw Zhou Tsong's opposite sex also come out of the room, she was first taken aback, and then her voice became more alert and cold. "Stop. Who are you?" Baiji was obedient. "Hello Auntie Luo, I'm Su Tian's classmate. I borrowed a book from Uncle Zhou last time and I'm here to return it." Lu Fei looked her over from head to toe. Lu Fei, who was covered in luxury goods, saw her worn-out sweatshirt and the vigilance in her eyes completely dissipated, replaced by a very light layer of contempt. "So it turns out you're Su Tian's classmate. Why didn't you even wear a dress to the party? I almost thought you were a thief." The lips beneath Baiji's mask began to sneer. "Lu Fei, you are as mean and arrogant as ever." Baiji bit by bit concealed the overwhelming hatred in her eyes. She changed her mind and no longer wanted to pretend to be good. As she passed by Lu Fei, Baiji said in a low voice, "Auntie Lu Fei is right to think that way. I did want to steal. But what I stole wasn't money, it was something even more precious in that house." "What do you mean?" Lu Fei narrowed her eyes. Baiji smiled. "You know very well what I mean, Auntie Luo. You're good at speaking in riddles." Luo Fei reached out and grabbed her, and Baiji stumbled, but her back remained straight. She even looked up to meet her gaze, but the only thing that was clear were the pair of eyes that were exposed, with a hint of madness in their depths. "I came to steal from Uncle Zhou. He had feelings for me just now. I'm afraid he won't marry you this time. Auntie Luo. You're looking for..." The word death was on her lips when Luo Fei raised her hand to slap her, but the door to the room behind her suddenly opened. Zhou Kangyi also walked out of the room. "What happened?" Luo Fei quickly withdrew her hand, but when she turned around, the insolent little bitch had disappeared like a ghost. "It's nothing, just a female student with a bit of a mental disorder. Nobody care." Luo Fei pretended not to mind. But she kept scanning Zhou Kangyi with her peripheral vision, relieved that he was properly dressed and didn't seem to have done anything out of the ordinary. Zhou Kangyi sensed her scrutiny and his expression grew cold. "Do you need something?" "Oh, Kangyi, I came to ask if you want to go to the gym together. The gym at this hotel seems to be pretty good." "It's too late today." Luo Fei muttered. "Is it late?" "It's only 8 o'clock. I want to rest, Lofi." His tone was calm, but it exuded an unyielding strength. Lofi had never dared to cross the line in front of Zhou Kangyi, and after getting a cold shoulder, she sensibly said goodnight and see you tomorrow and left. Luffy returned to her room dejectedly. She prided herself on being sexy and attractive tonight, and several men at the banquet looked at her and reacted. But why did Jo Song still not show any interest in having her stay the night? Not to mention sleeping together, they were about to get married, but they had never even held hands. Even if it was an arranged marriage, she didn't want to be in front of a handsome guy and never be able to kiss or touch him. Thinking about this, Luo Fei also thought of the girl just now. She said that Jo Song also had feelings for her just now. What did she mean exactly? Lu Fei's eyes suddenly filled with hatred, and she sent a text message to her assistant, find out which of the classmates who came with Su Tian tonight snuck into Zhou Kangyi's room. She wants to find out the girl's name and make her life a living hell. Chapter 5 I came here in an open and aboveboard manner. While Lu Fei was making a big fuss and digging up the ground to find the girl in the hoodie from that night, Bai Ji was leisurely walking around campus with a book in her arms. On Monday, there was a class with teacher Zhang Quan. His classroom was always known for being strict, and before the class had even started, a girl ran out of the classroom, covering her face and crying. This homework is so bad. If this is the level of your homework in the future, just don't come to class at all. When Zhang Quan became angry, no one in the classroom dared to breathe. As Bai Ji entered the classroom, she saw Wang Jiao walk up to the podium with her homework. Zhang Quanshui looked at Wang Jiao's homework for a few seconds, and his expression was quite satisfied. Just then, Wang Jiao leaned over and whispered something in his ear. The old man's face suddenly changed, dark clouds gathered, and he coldly looked at Bai Ji, who was standing in the doorway. You two come with me to the office. Bai Ji glanced at Wang Jiao, who was looking forward to the show with a face full of anticipation. Bai Ji knew that most likely Wang Jiao had told Professor Zhang about her losing the Wenxin manuscript. Bai Ji, where is the Wenxin manuscript that I borrowed from you last week? Seeing that Bai Ji was not answering, Zhang Quanshui's face grew increasingly unpleasant. I lent you the most precious manuscript of my life because you are very talented and hardworking, and now you are telling me that you have lost it. Zhang Quanshui is a heavyweight figure at the university. He has a loud voice, and the other young professors in the office are so scared that they dare not speak. Wang Jiao then poured oil on the fire. Bai Ji, you couldn't have lost something so important. You're usually so organized, so think about it. Did you leave it somewhere and forget about it? Seeing that Bai Ji still didn't say anything, Wang Jiao said with ulterior motives, this manuscript is worth tens of millions of dollars. If the police accidentally find it in your possession, you could go to jail for decades. The office teacher's expression changed a little. What Wang Jiao meant was that, explicitly or implicitly, she was calling Bai Ji a thief. Wang Jiao, don't jump to conclusions, maybe we'll find it in a minute. Yes, Bai Ji is such a good student, she couldn't possibly do what you're saying. Seeing that no one believed her, a malicious look flashed across Wang Jiao's face. Bai Ji, I didn't mean to doubt you. I just thought that since you are a poor student, it would be better to find such a valuable thing quickly, so as to avoid gossip. Every word said was to prevent others from gossiping, but every word was pushing Bai Ji into the position of a thief. Finally, Bai Ji, who had been silent, began to fight back for herself. As soon as she spoke, she shocked everyone. Teacher Zhang, I always kept your manuscript of Literary Heart carefully locked in my bookcase, but just the other day someone broke in and stole it. So I found another copy and hope to apologize to you until I find the real thief. After she finished speaking, she took out another identical copy of Manuscript of Literary Heart from her bag. All the teachers in the office, including Wang Jiao, now stared at Bai Ji in disbelief. A second copy of Wenxin manuscript? Shouldn't this be? Zhang Quanshui holding this copy of Wenxin manuscript in his hands, taking a quick look to confirm its authenticity, and only asking, this one, did you take it from Zhou Kangyi? Yes. Okay. Zhang Quanshui said, although you say it was stolen, the thing is that you did lose it, and before you found my copy of Wenxin manuscript, I'll hold on to this one for now. Bai Ji had not consulted with Zhou Kangyi about mortgaging his book to Zhang Quanshui, but she acted as if she had done nothing wrong and was confident that she would catch the real thief. Wang Jiao, who was standing nearby, looked a little flustered as her face turned from pale to red. They left the office. Bai Ji did not go, but playfully tapped her chin and looked at Wang Jiao with a playful expression. Wang Jiao felt uncomfortable at her gaze. What are you looking at me for? I'm thinking about how many years you'll get for stealing the Wenxin manuscript. Wang Jiao's voice trembled slightly. Watch what you say. I haven't even asked you what you used to convince Zhou Song to lend you the book, maybe you stole it too? Ha ha. Bai Shi sneered, her pale face showing a seductive redness at the corners of her eyes. I slept my way to the top. She looked at Wang Jiao's incredulous expression, which had turned white, and her smile became even more radiant and innocent. I slept with him, go tell them. Bai Shi, you're sick in the head. Wang Jiao simply didn't believe that Zhou Zong, who was printed on the book, would be interested in a little girl like Bai Shi. This so-called innocent goddess could deceive male college students, but what would a man at the top of human society want with her? But if it wasn't like she said, why would Zhou Zong give her such a precious thing? Wang Jiao felt a little panicked as she thought about it. Bai Shi came up to her and said in her ear, do you not believe me? If you don't believe me, I'll take you to witness for yourself tonight whether he and I are a good match or not. Wang Jiao was taken aback by her expression and tone. But when she remembered what the occasion was tonight, she quickly shouted, you're crazy. Bai Shi, you're a lunatic. You never tell the truth. The media is full of it, who doesn't know that tonight is Zhou Kongyi and Luo Fei's engagement banquet? Bai Shi actually said that she wanted to be with him at a time like this, she's a complete lunatic. Full of hot air. Perhaps it was because she was guilty, after Wang Jiao finished scolding her, she ran away. At this time, Bai Shi received a phone call, and soon she rushed to the hospital with a solemn face. Hospital corridor. The previously domineering Bai Shi now had fine beads of sweat on her face, and her tone was a little more subdued due to her anxiety. Doctor, my mother just had surgery the day before yesterday, and she hasn't been observed for 7 days yet. Why do you want to discharge her so urgently? The doctor could only give a vague answer, hospital beds are always in short supply. I will explain to you the dosage of the medication and the relevant precautions. Of course, it would be best to hire a home care worker, which would have a similar effect. Hire a home care worker? Bai Shi sneered. Everyone in the department knew about the family's difficulties. Even the surgery and hospital fees had taken a long time to borrow. Some treatment had already been delayed, and now that they had finally got a hospital bed, they were being kicked out again. How could they afford a carer? Doctor, someone must have pulled some strings to get my mother's bed. Bai Ji's unexpected words made the doctor pause. It seemed that he didn't expect a girl of her young age to be so astute, but it was not something he could say outright. Bai Ji watched his reaction and was even more certain of her guess. Doctor, can you tell me the name of the new patient? Chapter 6 The first time she was partial. I'm not really sure, but it's said to be a relative of the hospital director. Little girl, if you want to negotiate, communicate well and don't be impulsive. Thank you, doctor, I know. Bai Ji was obedient and went back to the ward, clutching the strap of her school bag. Her mother must not be thrown out. If she was thrown out now, the consequences would be unimaginable. The girl's thin shoulders were tense as Bai Ji struggled to think of a way out. At that moment, there was a commotion in the corridor, and it sounded as if quite a few people had arrived. Auntie, just rest assured and get your treatment here. This hospital belongs to Songye. You're not feeling well as a mother, and your cousin won't be able to organize the engagement banquet tonight. Oh, don't worry about that. Jingbei City is so short of hospital beds, it wasn't easy for Luo Fei to get one. She probably even had to turn someone else away. So don't even think about it. Hearing this, Bai Shi suddenly came to her senses. Zongye? Luo Fei? Auntie? It was Luo Fei and Zhou Zongye who had turned her mother away. At this time, Bai Ji's mother, who also heard the noise, held her hand. Xiao Ji, did the doctor rush us out? Then let's go quickly, let's go, Mom is fine. Bai Ji quickly helped Wei Li. Since her father died 3 years ago, her mother's eyes have been blinded by crying. This hospitalization has also spread her eye disease to her nerves, showing signs of early eye cancer. Postoperative care of the eyes is particularly important, and it is extremely irresponsible for the hospital to kick her mother out at this time. The mother and daughter were still at a loss as to what to do when the door to the ward opened with a bang. The woman at the head of the group looked a bit like Luo Fei. When she saw Wei Li still lying in bed and Bai Ji by her side, she first frowned and then loudly demanded to know what was going on. Where were the doctors and nurses? Why had the patient in bed 3 not yet left? Wei Li whispered, I'm sorry, miss, I can't see. My daughter is alone and is slow to tidy up, but will be done and gone soon. Shen Shan then turned her head to look at Wei Li. She looked down on them condescendingly, and in front of Bai Ji, she reached out and waved her hand in front of Wei Li's face twice. She really is blind. Then she casually said to the two bodyguards behind her, "You two go bring in my aunt's things first, and then hurry them along." Bai Ji watched Qian Shan's appearance, her fingernails in her cuffed hands leaving white marks on her palms. She held back her surging hatred and pretended to start tidying up. At that moment, Qian Shan saw her profile and thought she looked familiar. "Hey, why do I feel that you look a little familiar, young lady? 3 years ago, weren't you?" 3 years ago, Bai Ji had stood alone in the snow holding a banner under the skyscraper in Jingbei, demanding justice for her tragically dead father. That night, Qian Shan also led a group of security guards to push her down in the snow. Bai Ji was unable to seek justice for her father, was unable to receive compensation, and delayed the best opportunity for her mother's eye treatment, watching her mother become blind. Qian Shan's face, Bai Ji will never forget. But Bai Ji didn't want to be recognized by Qian Shan so soon. The ending she had planned for Qian Shan was to be imprisoned and despised by everyone. "Bai Ji, miss, I'm just tidying up, I'll be done in a minute." Qian Shan then remembered that her aunt was waiting to move in, so she ignored Bai Ji and went to help the two assistants move the things. And it was at this moment that Bai Ji lifted the bedpan that was under the bed. Pretending to be careless, she knocked it onto the luggage that Lofi's mother had just moved in. Ah! The brown liquid stained the goatskin Chanel heels as it soaked through the floor. Qian Shan started screaming like crazy when she saw what it was. "What are you doing? Don't you have eyes?" "I'm sorry, miss, I didn't mean to, Bai Ji had already prepared her mobile phone to record the whole thing. She was fully aware of Qian Shan's lawless character. 3 years ago on a snowy night, she had also slapped Bai Ji and held her down in the snow and beaten her up. But at that time, Bai Ji was still in middle school and did not record the video in advance. Otherwise, the way Qian Shan hit her would have definitely caused a huge uproar. Sure enough, Qian Shan rushed up and gave Bai Ji 2 slaps, leaving fingerprints on the girl's face, which quickly turned red. Bai Ji's mother also heard the noise at this time and immediately begged Qian Shan not to hit her daughter. But Qian Shan lifted her foot and kicked Wei Li, who was blind, and Bai Ji, in a panic, got in front of her and took the kick solidly. Bai Ji was kicked in the stomach, and her face instantly turned pale with pain. She covered her stomach and crouched down. Bai Ji was not unable to avoid Qian Shan's beating, but she did it on purpose. This time, she wanted to record everything Qian Shan said and did and post it online, so that everyone could see Qian Shan's true face. When the accident happened at the hospital, Zhou Song was also sitting in his luxury Maybach. His assistant had reported on all the trips and matters. In the evening, the traffic in Jingbei began to get congested during the evening rush hour. The assistant looked at the time and saw that there was still plenty of time left, so he tentatively mentioned, "Mr. Zhou, Miss Luo's mother arrived in Jingbei this evening. So, where should we reschedule the engagement banquet that was originally cancelled today?" Originally, tonight was the engagement banquet for Zhou Songha and Luo Fei. It was a small affair, and only some business partners and media friends from the same circles were invited. However, Luo Fei's mother had a sudden heart attack last night, so the engagement banquet was rescheduled. The man in the back seat of the Maybach looked out the window, as if pondering the issues discussed in the project meeting just now. Regarding the engagement banquet, he only gave a 2-word reply, "We'll talk about it later." He flipped through his phone and suddenly thought of something. Which hospital is Luo Fei's mother staying at? The third hospital. The Zhou family manages many hospitals, and the third hospital is one of the better ones. Zhou Song thought to himself, hasn't the third hospital always been short of beds? Will she get a bed? The assistant respectfully and subtly said, "Miss Luo must have found someone she knows." Hearing this, Zhou Song also frowned. Luo Fei had not mentioned anything about using her connections to get her mother into the third hospital through the back door. And Zhou Song had always hated using connections behind people's backs. The atmosphere in the car turned cold, and the man's thin lips uttered a few words. "Go to the third hospital now." Zhou Kongyi arrived at the hospital and saw Qian Shani pointing her finger at everyone and yelling at the doctors. The doctors and nurses must have refrained from speaking out because she was a relative of the hospital director, and even the old director in his 50s was scolded by Qian Shani in public. Zhou Kongyi watched his own doctor being insulted by Qian Shani, and his face looked very bad. He took a few steps forward, and the next second, he saw Bai Ji, surrounded by a crowd of people, her face completely swollen, bowing her head and standing in the same place. The man only glanced at her and asked everyone in a cold voice, "What's going on here?" Chief Physician Zhou immediately told Zhou Kongyi the whole story. Zhou Kongyi listened, and his expression never changed much. When he heard that Luo Fei had forcibly evicted a patient who had just undergone eye surgery in order to get his mother admitted to the hospital, the coldness in his brow was like the ice on a mountain. Dismiss the staff member responsible for making this arrangement. Chapter 7 How much is it? Zhou Kangyi's decision was resounding. The doctors felt both relieved and awed. Although Zhou Kangyi himself did not study medicine, many of the top 3 hospitals in Jingbei City were owned by the Zhou family. And he is the undisputed heir to the family business. Many doctors have heard rumors about him, but today they have seen for themselves that he really does have a powerful aura and knows how to separate public and private matters. They naturally feel a surge of respect for him. Xian Shan is getting impatient. Brother-in-law, it was wrong of me to scold the doctor, but how could your hospital take on such a low-quality young girl? Do you know what she just poured on us? Bai Ji is waiting nearby without saying a word. Zhou Kangyi gives her a look and says just one thing. There is no rule in the hospital that says you can throw out a patient once they are already here. I will find you another bed. The unspoken meaning was that they should go. Xian Shan could not believe what she had heard. Brother-in-law, are you sure you want to do this? You want to throw out your future mother-in-law just because of 2 strangers? Zhou Kangyi also looked indifferent. If you don't accept my solution, you can find another hospital yourself. Xian Shan, who had just been so domineering, was speechless. Although Luo Fei's mother was dissatisfied, she did not dare to make a scene in front of Zhou Kangyi. If she annoyed him, it would be a waste to ruin her daughter's marriage. So the old man just remained silent, his eyes silently looking at the mother and daughter who depended on each other. Bai Ji and her daughter had been overly silent throughout the entire process. Wei Li's eyes were unfocused and she kept crying. Bai Ji, who kept her head down, never showed any expression. At that moment, Zhou Tsong also saw the mobile phone camera in the breast pocket of her shirt, flashing infrared dots to the outside. The man frowned, and just as he was about to go up to her and take the phone down that she was recording with, Bai Ji stepped forward and said, "Uncle Zhou and I are not strangers." Everyone's attention was drawn to her words, including Zhou Tsong's. The man's gaze was like black jade, infused with unfathomable danger and a black mist. Bai Ji looked up, her face red and swollen, and met his gaze, speaking word for word. I am the girlfriend of Uncle Zhou's student, and I am also the best friend of his daughter, who is many years younger than me. I also asked him to borrow a book, and he still owes me something. The girl's tone was calm and free of impurities, and to an outsider it sounded like just some trivial nonsense. Xian Shan was now completely dominated by anger, and she simply didn't bother to notice what Bai Ji had said, nor did she have the intelligence or sensitivity to pick up on the details. But only Zhou Tsong and Bai Ji knew the secret beneath the subtext. It was a direct provocation, a blatant seduction. See, it was your student's girlfriend who sucked on your mouth, and it was your niece's best friend who put her legs around your waist. The thing you haven't returned is the cat's collar. Uncle Zhou, do you want to put it around my neck and pull it to hug me and kiss me? Bai Ji and Zhou Tsong also looked at each other and confronted each other. Suddenly, from an angle that no one was paying attention to, she suddenly gave him a devilish smile, revealing a fong. She was arrogant like a thorny queen rose that never bowed its head. Since she knocked over the chamber pot, it had been against her. Her father was dead, and this time, she was determined to take care of her mother. She was not sure whether she was afraid of Bai Ji revealing their secret, or whether she was afraid of the consequences for the Zhou family and the hospital if the matter became public. Zhou Kangyi finally ordered the security guards to invite Qian Shanyan and the others out, without sparing Qian Shanyan or Luo Fei any face. This result was quite gratifying for the doctors and nurses. But Bai Ji obviously wasn't so happy. After the crowd dispersed, she asked the doctor to take Wei Li to rest, while she herself continued to stare at Zhou Kangyi's handsome face with those aggressive eyes, waiting for him to give her punishment. Finally, the man spoke condescendingly, "You come with me." There was no one in the quiet fire escape of the hospital. Zhou Kangyi's hands fell into his suit pants, his high-end leather shoes stood still, and the tall figure cast a shadow that could envelop the entire slender body of Bai Ji. How much? Bai Ji expected him to solve it with money. So she smiled, her face swollen, not quite as doll-like and not quite as pretty, but her eyes and breath were still so lonely and clean. She couldn't get rid of the smell of a young girl and a beauty. Uncle Zhou wanted to pay me a hush money. Was it to keep me quiet about what happened in the hospital or what happened in the hotel that day? The man's face was cold, his dark black eyes looking down at her, not even bothering to pay attention to her provocation, as if the confrontation in the hotel that night was not worthy of his attention. It's the video on your phone. Uncle Zhou saw it all. The girl took out her phone and played the video she had recorded of Qian Shan hitting her, as well as the arrogant things she had said in her rage. This hospital was originally owned by my brother-in-law, and I can make anyone leave if I want. Who the hell are you? What happened just now after the operation? So what if you're blind? You're not worthy to fight me. The young woman pressed pause. The hallway fell silent. How much do you think all this is worth, Uncle Joe? Name your price. If it's just to maintain the hospital's image, 1 million. But if it's to maintain Auntie Luo and Auntie Qian, it's more than that. The man looked at her with indifferent words. What's the difference? Of course there's a difference. Baiji looked up at him, her eyes like gray smoke. I already told you, I like you, Uncle Joe. If you defend other women, I will be very angry. He did not retreat in the face of her advances, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in his eyes. Even though the two were already pressed together, she could already feel the hard bones under his suit. So what? In that moment, Baiji felt like he was a god looking down on her from the heavens. No matter if she was now naked and completely exposed or making a scene, he would always have that expression. It was as if no matter what she did, it would not have the slightest effect on him. But that was not the case. No. She told herself firmly, and continued to move closer, looking up at him little by little, looking up at him. I will tell everyone that you are harder on me. There was a moment of silence in the air. The man narrowed his eyes, and his right hand, which had been in his pocket, pulled out. This was the second time that Baiji had looked at this man so closely. He was even more impersonal than last time, and there was no emotion at all in his eyes. It was just a dark black. Suddenly, he extended his long legs and forced her to the corner in one step. Then what? Will they believe what a little girl like you says? It was too close, and Baiji subconsciously avoided it, but her skirt was still touched by the knee under the suit pants. The girl frowned imperceptibly, and the man's arm directly supported the wall behind her. Even if I fuck you here right now, will anyone believe it if you go out and say it? Chapter 8 Give her some medicine to reduce the swelling. Baiji's fingers were clenched in an invisible place. He must have been sure that she wasn't recording this time, so he dared to be so unrestrained. The girl's face was pale, and her breathing was also extremely tight. The man didn't leave, speaking in a low voice. Although I don't know why you're doing this, Su Tian said that you have good grades. But risking your future for something you're not sure about isn't like something a smart girl would do. Zhou Tsong is also a person of some stature. How could he not see Baiji's targeting of him and Luo Fei, as well as her hostility and hatred that were clearly evident in her seemingly blatant seduction? He just couldn't remember when he had offended such a young girl. What do you think, Baiji? I can make you fall in love with me. The girl's pride was about to snap. After she finished speaking, the air was silent for a few seconds. She slowly realized that she might have said something really stupid. Someone like Zhou Tsong, talking about sex with a girl like her, a poor girl from the bottom of the social ladder, was possible, but talking about love was too much. She thought the man would laugh at her and mock her at this moment, but Zhou Tsong didn't either. He even stopped his forward steps, stopped being aggressive, and returned to his usual indifference and calm. You can try. He left the fire escape with just those words. He gave the doctor outside some instructions. Put some swelling medicine on the little girl's face. Baiji took the man's tacit consent to the fire escape as a direct challenge. If the last battle at the hotel was considered even, then she had lost today's battle. Damn, no matter how she thought about it, it didn't feel right. Baiji, who refused to admit defeat, sent a text message to Su Tian. Su Tian, send me your uncle's phone number. Su Tian had calmed down a bit after these past few days. Su Tian, Gigi, let's give up, I kind of regret messing with my uncle. So you want to be cousins with Zhou Zai? Su Tian. Zhou Zai is Zhou Kangyi's nephew and the boy Su Tian has secretly loved since childhood. If Luo Fei and Zhou Kangyi really become a couple, Zhou Zai will be her nominal cousin in the future. Crap. Su Tian sent Baiji her phone number, 11 digits long, in one go. Gigi, what are you going to send my uncle? It's not a nude photo, is it? Baiji smiled as she looked at the string of numbers. If Yang does it, it's over. I don't believe it, I'll kill him. While Baiji was agonizing over what to send Zhou Kangyi as her first text message, Luo Fei was pondering how to spend her first night with Zhou Kangyi. That night, after visiting her mother, Luo Fei went straight to Shishu. She and Joe Kangi were about to get engaged, but they had never been to his place before. It took a while to persuade the maid to let them in. After entering the house, Lofi took a good look around. It was just as she had imagined, an upscale, money-burning Italian style. The entire villa was huge and luxurious. She sat on the sofa and waited for Joe Kangi for a while. When she saw that he was not coming back, she went up to his bedroom on the second floor. Lufei was full of curiosity, but when she really entered his room, she found that she did not dare to easily move his things. At this time, she suddenly felt like going to the bathroom. Her intuition told her that she should go to the guest bathroom when she first came to someone's house, but she quickly thought that there was no one else around. Moreover, she and Joe Kangi would become husband and wife sooner or later, so she walked towards the bathroom that came with his bedroom. But as soon as she opened the drawer, she froze in place. There were only two things in the drawer. One was a note. The other was a collar. Luf's hands began to tremble. The handwriting on the note was neat and pretty, clearly the handwriting of a student. There was also a collar on it. When she read the contents, Luf's face turned green. Uncle Joe, I want to be slept with by you. ZCY's beloved cat. She instantly remembered the girl who had provoked her in front of the hotel that day. Lufei could hardly imagine that Zhou Tsong would really have a connection with such a little girl. She immediately squatted down and frantically searched for evidence, trying to find out if there were any condoms or other evidence. At this time, the man at the door said coldly, "What are you looking for?" Lufei didn't expect him to come back at this time, and quickly pushed the drawer back. "Kangi, you're back?" "Oh, I was looking for toilet paper." Joe Kangi glanced at the drawer and knew that Lofi was lying. "Do you have something to do tonight?" Lofi frowned. "I heard from Shan Shan that you transferred my mother from the third hospital?" "Yes." "Why?" Joe Kangi obviously would not answer her question. In fact, Lofi was just a formality for him. His upbringing told him to maintain his composure, but in this matter, in his opinion, there was no need to even explain to her. The man simply said, "The new hospital is nice, and the medical level is very good. I found a specialist in cardiology, so you can rest assured." "Okay, I understand." Although Lofi hoped that Zhou Tsong would also favor her and her family, rationally she also understood that there was a difference between hope and delusion. She knew she had no bargaining chips in this matter. If she continued to insist, she was afraid that she would not be able to afford a private hospital. Tonight, more important than the hospital was him. Thinking about this, Lofi cautiously asked, "Sue, I have a meeting nearby tomorrow morning. Can I stay at your place tonight?" Sue has never had anyone stay over before. She wanted to be the first. The man calmly removed his tie in the mirror and said only two words, "No." Lofi gritted her teeth. "Not even the guest room?" "Lofi." The man put down his tie and looked straight at her with eyes as cold as the moon. "Today, she has stepped over the line twice. Don't forget our previous agreement. I helped you get your company through a difficult time, so you mustn't interfere with me, and you mustn't overstep the mark." The woman's face now looks very ugly. The perpetual sweet American smile has disappeared from her face. She can leave the things of other girls in the drawer, but she, the fiancée, is not even allowed to stay in the guest room? Could it be that that girl has already stayed here before, and that's why she left those things behind? A sudden cold light flashed in the woman's eyes. "I remember the rules. I just want to stay here because it's closer to the meeting place tomorrow. If you don't want me to, I'll leave." Her obedience also slightly softened the man's cold attitude just now. "I'll ask my assistant to book a nearby hotel for you." Lufei said yes, and left the place in the same cold manner. Thinking about the collar and note just now, the woman immediately called her assistant after leaving the villa. "I asked you to check the classmates who infiltrated Zhou Tsong and Su Tian last time. Have you found out yet?" "Assistant, I'm not completely sure yet. I should be able to find out tomorrow." Lufei clenched her phone, like a poisonous snake spitting out its fangs in the dark night. "After confirming tomorrow, I'll find some thugs to ruin her." Chapter 9 Revenge. By the hospital bedside. Bai Ji wrote her homework while clutching her phone, thinking and rethinking, finally editing the first text message to Zhou Kangi. Zhou Kangi happened to be taking a shower. He walked out of the shower room, only wearing a towel around his waist, showing off his toned waist and abs. In the mirror was an ascetic face with sharp features. The man reaches into the drawer for the razor, and suddenly remembers the collar he casually put away in the drawer, but for some reason didn't throw away. His subconscious tells him that this object is evidence. Just then, Joe Kangi's phone vibrated twice. A text message from an unknown number popped up. What position do you think you'll use to fuck me the first time? How about from behind? The shaver in his hand buzzed, and the entire bathroom was contrasted as being very quiet. He looked at the text message for 2 seconds, and then clicked delete indifferently. Baiji didn't send any more text messages, as if the previous one was just a spam message sent by mistake. And she sat by the bedside with her phone in her hand and grinned, as if she had finally regained some dignity for herself. Lofi, who saw the note behind the collar on the other side, was like possessed. She couldn't help but start imagining Joe Kangi having sex with the girl in the cheap sweater. In the hotel room and in the bathroom at the villa. Had they done it all? Luffy suddenly realized that, even in her fantasies, she couldn't picture Joe Kangi giving himself up to lust. The man was usually cold as ice. It was said that in his early years studying abroad, not only had he never played with supermodels like the other playboys in the industry, he had never even had a girlfriend or been in a relationship. If even a social butterfly like her, who has been around many business tycoons, can't land him, what magic does that girl have? Or does Jo Tsong have some kind of fetish? Does he like younger women? The more Luo Fei thought about it, the more paranoid she became. Finally, her assistant's phone call came back. Luo, I've found the person you're looking for. Luo Fei clenched her phone in her hand and her voice was tight. What's her name? Her name is Wang Jiao. Her parents are both ordinary company employees. She is a senior from the same year as Su Tianyi, and was also on the banquet list that night. Last night, she also went to the company to look for President Zhou. Do you have a photo? The assistant sent her a photo from Wang Jiao's student ID. Lu Fei enlarged the picture and covered the bottom half of her face with her finger to simulate the appearance of the girl in the sweatshirt wearing a mask that day. Both girls have double eyelids and big eyes, but they don't look quite the same. You said she went to the company yesterday to see Tsong? Yes, it seems to be about borrowing books. That's it. Although it doesn't feel like it, the book thing does match up. Lu Fei looked at the photo of Wang Jiao with growing murderous intent. You know what to do next. The assistant was a little unsure. Mr. Luo, should we scare her a bit? Or beat her up? Lu Fei squeezed the note in her hand. Her tone was indifferent, but the words she spoke were creepy. Use whatever method you can to make her unable to bear children. Isn't that despicable? Then you won't be able to feel anything when you see a man in the future. Baiji didn't hear back from last night's text message until the next day. However, she didn't expect Jo Tsong to reply either. What she wanted was for him to think of her from time to time. If she can just catch a glimpse of his face when he's with Luo Fei, she'll be halfway there. The students had just finished their last afternoon class, and they were streaming out of the teaching building. Baiji and Su Tian walked arm in arm in the crowd, one cool and collected, the other pretty and charming, like the two most beautiful scenes on campus. Su Tian held the mirror on the back of her phone case as she fixed her hair and said, Do you know Wang Jiao from the foreign language department in our junior year? She went to my uncle's place at the Zhou headquarters last night. It is said that she didn't make it back to the dormitory in time because of the curfew, so she stayed up all night at an internet cafe off campus. She was so sleepy today that she didn't even come to class. Ji, was she inspired by the fact that my uncle lent you his books and wanted to volunteer herself? Ha, that's too funny. Unfortunately, my uncle doesn't like her kind of internet celebrity face. Wang Jiao going directly to find Zhou Tsong was also something Baiji didn't expect. But Baiji didn't think that Wang Jiao wanted to seduce Joe Kangi. At most, she had stolen something and was feeling guilty, so she wanted to find Joe Kangi to find out the truth about his relationship with her. Baiji, so did she see your uncle? Su Tian sneered, Hey, of course she didn't. My uncle's company is in the China World Trade Center, and that area is full of foreign companies with strict security. I guess she was stopped at the first gate, and she couldn't even see the receptionist's face, let alone my stepmother, that mean woman, guarding it so strictly. Speaking of Luo Fei, Su Tian's face was full of disdain, and she rolled her eyes. Why? Would Zhou Tsong let Luo Fei interfere with his social life? Su Tian, it's hard to say. When Luo Fei was with my father before, her spies were everywhere in the company. She came from a family of mistresses, so she was wary of other women, and her methods of dealing with them were more and more brutal. How brutal? Baiji was a little curious. Well, let's just say that Su Tian put away her phone and her expression became serious. One day when I was in junior high, I got a phone call at home in the middle of the night. At the time, I didn't know it was a woman from outside provoking me, so I handed the phone to Luo Fei. The next day, that woman was brutally raped by a group of thugs. Damn. Bai Ji listened in silence, and a chill ran down her spine. So Ji, you have Lu Hao. My uncle's place is still relatively safe, but you mustn't let Luo Fei know. Bai Ji. Damn it, why didn't you say so earlier? She even told Luo Fei to his face that her man had feelings for her. Seeing Bai Ji's tense expression, Su Tian thought she was shocked and quickly reassured her, but she couldn't have known about your visit to Shishu that day. My uncle's people are all over the place. My uncle is different from my father. Although he is young, he is much more ruthless than my father. Luo Fei probably won't get any advantages from him. He shouldn't let her do whatever she wants. Bai Ji, I guess so. After all, yesterday Luo Fei wanted to use the back door to grab a bed for her mother, but Zhou Tsong wouldn't allow it. Bai Ji and Su Tian continued walking side by side towards the dormitory. Suddenly, she thought of something. Her face changed. Su, you go back to the dormitory first, I suddenly have something to do. Bai Ji is always calm and rarely gets nervous. Su Tian saw her look of urgency and didn't ask anymore. Okay, you go first, I'll order chicken soup for dinner and eat it together. After Bai Ji said goodbye to Su Tian, a rare rush appeared on her usually calm face, and she hurriedly called Wang Jiao. Sure enough, the other party's phone began to go unanswered. Chapter 10, I want Luo Fei to go to jail. Bai Ji was no saint. But the thought that Wang Jiao had gone to the Zhou family to find Zhou Kangyi because of her made her feel a little uneasy. More importantly, this might be a perfect opportunity to get back at Luo Fei. Bai Ji immediately called another person. Didn't you say you loved me? Ji? Lu Hao waited for Bai Ji by the pool all night that night, but he didn't wait until dawn. Instead, he met teacher Zhou. Zhou Kangyi looked at him with deep eyes at that time, and said something he didn't quite understand. Zhou Kangyi also told him to be cautious about making friends. Lu Hao had a high fever after returning from the birthday party. He sent Bai Ji countless messages but got no reply. Today, he finally got her call, and his illness immediately improved by half. If you want me to continue to talk to you, find out where Wang Jiao is within 10 minutes. Lu Hao is the chairman of the student union and has dozens of groups of 500 people at his fingertips. Ji, don't worry, is Wang Jiao from the foreign language department? I'll find her for you now. Lu Hao mobilized his classmates in the group to look out for Wang Jiao. Within a few minutes, someone had taken a photo of Wang Jiao just stepping out of the school gate and preparing to go to a nearby street for dinner. Bai Ji didn't hesitate and rushed to that location. Ji, are you going to go find her now? The male god Lu Hao was like a dog licking in anticipation of a goddess's approval. Lu Hao, you'll do anything to make me forgive you, right? Of course. I really like you. Okay, you come over now. And, get ready to call the police. She wanted Lu Hao to personally call the police and send Luo Fei to prison. One is the son of his most protected benefactor, and the other is his fiancée. What will Zhou Tsong choose? Bai Ji is already looking forward to it. On the other hand, Wang Jiao, who had stayed up all night outside the school and slept until this hour, was starving. The cafeteria was crowded and she wanted to find a small restaurant outside the school where she could have dinner as soon as possible. But as she passed an alley, she was suddenly pulled backwards with great force. She screamed in fear, but was suddenly gagged. Wang Jia was so scared that she thought she was being robbed. But then she saw in the corner of her eye that the hand covering her mouth belonged to a slender, white-skinned young girl. She turned around in shock and saw that it was Bai Ji. You? Shut up. Bai Ji then led her to hide behind the refrigerator in a small shop, her expression cold and calm. Wang Jiao was shocked by her expression and forgot to resist for a while. Sure enough, a few seconds later, a group of men in leather jackets and jeans ran past the door of the kiosk. Where did they go? They were clearly still here. What a fucking useless bunch of guys, they can't even keep track of a little girl. Hey, have you seen a girl in pink? One of them even stopped passers-by on the street to ask. Wang Jiao's face turned pale when she came to her senses. She had been followed the whole time. But who were these people? The two girls hid behind the drinks fridge in the kiosk and stared at the punks. Just then, the leader said, "Wait." He turned his head and walked towards the kiosk. Wang Jiao was almost scared to faint, tears falling down her face and staining her hands. Bai Ji looked at her hands with disgust and wished she could just throw the girl out. Just as the punks were about to step past the fridge, a few policemen ran over. Freeze! What are you doing? The punks took off running, but they were all caught after just a few steps. Bai Ji let out a sigh of relief. Lu Hao also walked over at this time, looking at her worriedly. Ji, were you okay just now? Bai Ji pushed Wang Jiao, who burst into tears, aside. Her face was calm. Go buy me a pack of disinfectant wipes. Lu Hao, of course, was obedient. After getting the disinfectant wipes, Bai Ji ignored Wang Jiao, who was sobbing beside her, and carefully wiped her fingers. What on earth was going on? Wang Jiao, why did you get involved with such people? Wang Jiao's mind was shattered. The only person she had recently gotten involved with was Bai Ji, and she subconsciously wanted to believe that it must have been Bai Ji's trick. But just now, Bai Ji had clearly saved her despite the danger. If the police had arrived a moment later, the consequences for the two of them would have been unimaginable. Although Bai Ji looked calm, only Wang Jiao, who had been clinging to her back behind the refrigerator at the time, could feel that her hand, which she was covering to muffle her voice, had been cold and was still slightly trembling. Wang Jiao was at a loss for words and was in no state to answer Lu Hao's question. After drying her hands, Bai Ji threw the paper towel into the trash can and asked, "Do you mean what you said about being willing to do anything for me?" Lu Hao sighed and said with deep feeling, "Ji, what do I have to do to make you believe that I really love you as my wife for life?" Bai Ji knew that Wang Jiao had always secretly loved Lu Hao. So, to make Lu Hao say these things in front of her was, in a way, the deepest kind of revenge. After all, when Wang Jiao stole the Wenxin manuscript, she also put Bai Ji in a life-threatening situation. Bai Ji glanced at Wang Jiao and raised the corners of her lips. "But I don't seem to love you anymore. What should I do?" "Lu Hao, it's okay, I'll keep chasing you until the day you love me." "Really?" Wang Jiao's face was already very ugly at this time. Bai Ji straightened her hair on her forehead and said, "Then I want you to do me one last favor." "What?" "It was you, Zhou's fiancé, Luo Fei, who sent these punks over." Bai Ji's black and white eyes stared at him unblinkingly. As she expected, the expression on the handsome young man's face became surprised and stunned. "Bai Ji, I want you to personally be a witness and say that Luo Fei is involved in black evil and send her to jail." Ji, this. What, are you afraid? Lu Hao was torn. "It's not that I'm afraid, it's just that there's no way to prove that Auntie Lu did it, and Zhou Tsong has also done you a favor. Even if it really is Lu Fei, you can't do anything to hurt him, right?" Ji, I. Bai Ji's expression didn't change at all, her smile was still so bewitching. "If you help me this time, I'll continue to be your girlfriend." Lu Hao hesitated. He really liked Bai Ji, ever since he first saw her, many years ago. He also knew that Bai Ji didn't feel the same way about him. She didn't like him at all, and he often felt that she was just using him. But he still wanted to give it a try. He wanted to make up for her as much as possible. Those sins. After a long time, he took a deep breath. If this time really was led by Luo Fei, as long as Mr. Zhou didn't have any objections, I can testify. Bai Ji laughed at the sight of him. She laughed brightly, but coldly. "Mr. Lu, since you said that, why would I still come to you? I might as well just go and become your girlfriend, Miss Shou." After Bai Ji finished speaking, Lu Hao's eyes widened in shock. He suddenly remembered that night by the pool, when he saw Zhou Kongyi with that woman on the railing. It was so ambiguous, but that person was not Luo Fei at all. He could tell. The back view did resemble his Gigi a little. Chapter 11 Under the car. But he would never think in that direction. Now that Bai Ji had said it so boldly, he still found it hard to believe. "Don't ever say things like that about Gigi again. You can dislike me, but Teacher Zhou." "What?" Lu Hao frowned, and after a long while, he whispered. "He is not someone you can mess with." Bai Ji's smile became even more severe and sarcastic, and at that moment, Wang Jiao, whose heart had turned to stone, suddenly sneered mockingly. "How can you be so sure? Do you know that she even got Wenxin manuscript from Zhou Kongyi?" "What?" Lu Hao couldn't believe it and had no idea what was going on. On the other side, Bai Ji took a bottle of cola from the beverage dispenser and looked at him with a flirtatious and cute expression. "Yes, if you don't help us with the certificate, I'll have to go to your teacher Zhou for help." After saying that, she added meaningfully, "What if he likes me?" Although Bai Ji's words made Lu Hao feel his heart jump, like Wang Jiao, in the end, he he still didn't believe that Zhou Kangyi would get involved with Bai Ji, so he didn't take it too seriously. Bai Ji also felt that relying entirely on Lu Hao was a very unreliable thing to do. So, once again, she went to find Zhou Kangyi in person. At a branch of a famous private hospital in the northern part of the city, Luo Fei's mother was having heart surgery today, and Zhou Kangyi was said to be coming to take a look. Chen Shan and Luo Fei were both waiting at the door of the operating room. It was also at this time that Luo Fei received a phone call. "Hello, who are you looking for?" After the other person reported their name and the purpose of the call, Luo Fei's expression instantly froze. It was the police. Luofei glanced at Qian Shan next to her, said one moment, and then walked alone to the other end of the corridor to answer the phone. Zhou Tsong also happened to arrive at the hospital at this time. The man was in the underground garage, just opening the door, when a figure flashed in and sat down in an extremely bold and presumptuous position straddling his lap. She locked the door with her hand behind her back, and the two of them could hear each other breathing in the black Maybach. Her fingertips wrapped around his neck, and the heels of her girly shoes hooked his ankles. "Uncle Zhou, please help me. Someone is after me." She was acting like she was playing a game of pretending to be an agent. She was dressed entirely in black leather and boots, and she was wearing a black mask. The only thing that didn't look like an agent was the black stockings on her legs. How could he not feel that she was rubbing his suit pants with her legs wrapped in stockings? The man thought of the black collar still in the drawer, and the darkness in his eyes darkened a little more. "Uncle Zhou." Bai Ji rubbed against him coquettishly while controlling Zhou Kangyi with the seatbelt. If she hadn't been on guard for 3 hours and simulated it countless times in her mind, this set of actions would not have been so fluid, allowing her to take advantage of the situation. "Do you know who wants to kill me? It's Auntie Luo. Do you know that she has blood on her hands? Although I don't know why they got married, but having taken someone's life is a taboo. It affects 3 generations of politics and judgment." As expected, Zhou Tsong's expression finally loosened up, and Bai Ji was extremely satisfied with his reaction. At this time, upstairs in the hospital, Luo Fei had just finished talking to the police. Luo Fei's entire process of dealing with the police was not easy. She walked around the corner, her face still showing signs of shock. Qian Shan looked at her and felt a little puzzled. "Cousin, you look very nervous. Was it because of that phone call just now?" "Who called?" "No one. I'm worried about the surgery." "Oh." Qian Shan didn't suspect a thing. She didn't see at all the malicious and foreboding look that Luo Fei next door had given her. "Qian Shan, you told me last time that you wanted to work on a project with me. Right now there's an opportunity, as long as you do as I tell you later." Qian Shan had always trusted her cousin implicitly. She never imagined that just now, Luo Fei was preparing to drag her into an infernal hell just to save her own skin. Downstairs, in the car. Or, Luofei had once hired thugs to gang rape another woman, and now he wanted to do the same to me. "Uncle Zhou, do you know? I was so scared that time, hiding behind the refrigerator, and almost, I couldn't have saved the first time for you." Bai Ji leaned her head on Zhou Kangyi's shoulder, and the strap in her hand tightened around him. Finally, the man said his first words in a calm voice. "So this is why you harassed me?" She didn't answer him, but continued talking to herself. Lu Hao was there too, and he was the one who called the police. Bai Ji went back to playing with his tie, his fingers twisting it little by little. She knew that if Zhou Kangyi had put up any resistance, she wouldn't even have gotten into the car today. But he didn't even try to fight back, as if he was taking his time, and she wondered how far she could go. Or maybe he just didn't care. Feeling his calm, Bai Ji suddenly felt a surge of ill will. With her usual cool and innocent tone, she asked him with fluttering eyes. "But why does Auntie Lu suddenly hate me so much? Could it be that you, Uncle Zhou, suddenly shouted my name during sex?" Bai Ji. This was the first time he had shown such an impatient expression in front of her. "You seem to be overconfident in your charm." The next second, he unlocked the car and was about to throw her out. But at that moment, a white light flashed from the basement. Not far away, Luo Fei was walking towards his car with a cell phone flashlight. I don't know if it was the Buddha's compassion that moved him in that instant. Thinking about the girl who was disabled by Luo Fei's people, he didn't even throw Bai Ji out. Instead, he pressed her head down and shoved her under the seat of the car. This action made Bai Ji stunned for a moment. She felt some pain, her hair was pulled, and the pain was so intense that she almost burst into tears. Just as she was about to loudly complain, a faint female voice came from the car window above her head. Luo Fei, I heard the security guard at the door say that your car has arrived. Why didn't you come up when you arrived? Bai Ji recognized the voice as Luo Fei's, and suddenly her whole body became still. Suddenly there was a meeting. The man was calm as usual, his car window only ajar. From this angle, Luo Fei couldn't see it, and there was also a young girl squatting between his legs. Lu Fei must have also been startled by the police earlier, and her thoughts were not as meticulous as usual. So she didn't suspect too much. My mother's surgery should be almost over. Shall we go up together now? You go ahead, I'll have a smoke. Lu Fei thought about it for a moment, then tactfully said yes. After Lu Fei left, Zhou Song also closed the car window, and Bai Ji raised her head from under the seat. Once again, the world was just the man and the young girl. Bai Ji didn't hurry to get up. Her long, beautiful black hair was a little messy, complementing her pure and slightly demonic, slender little face. The disheveled hair added a sense of broken-heartedness, as if she had just done something indescribable for him. And sensing the ambiguity in the air, she deliberately and shamelessly licked her lips twice, like a kitten that had tasted milk. Zhou Song also turned dark. Get up. Bai Ji didn't care about his anger. He pulled out a small, black square from under the seat. Uncle Zhou, I found a funny little thing in your car. Auntie Luo is lying. She's not the security team leader at all. She put a positioning tracker in your car. Look. Chapter 12 3 times. What do elite men like Zhou Kangyi hate the most? Being watched and controlled. Especially things like positioning trackers. It was like walking on his minefield. Bai Ji knew exactly what he was doing, shaking the tracker in his hand like a cat begging for a treat. Uncle Zhou, I found this for you, so can I have a reward? Give me a kiss or stroke my head. He looked at her small head next to the passenger seat of his car, small and delicate, with a fluffy head of hair, really like a pet that was only flattering its owner. But he knew from the start that the girl was anything but obedient. So, if he was moved, it was only for a moment. Without any further action, all relations ended there. He kicked her out of the car. The girl showed no signs of discouragement, but stood outside the car and waved at him. Uncle Zhou, I'll come back for you. There was no way he could get rid of her. Just as when she had just taken the tracker downstairs, she had casually slipped something into his car. She believed that with Luffy's vigilance against women outside, he would discover those things sooner or later. At that time, could their engagement continue? After Bai Ji left, Zhou Song also went upstairs, and Luffy's mother's surgery was just completed at that time. Luffy was the only one standing in the hallway, looking very embarrassed. The doctor said the surgery was a success, and this time thank you, Kangyi. Although Luffy was rich, she had slept her way to the top after all, and the upper echelons of society would not tolerate her. Without Zhou Kangyi, it would be difficult for her mother to find a heavyweight specialist to perform the surgery. Zhou Kangyi didn't say much else, just a single sentence, in the future, just tell me directly about things like this. His words sounded gentle, but Luffy could hear the implied meaning. He was telling her not to engage in underhand dealings in hospitals under his name in the future. Lu Fei said, and then said in a matter-of-fact tone. A few policemen came by a while ago and took Qianshan away. Her expression was strangely calm, and Zhou Song only asked indifferently, really? He wasn't interested in Qianshan's business. But Bai Ji had said that Lu Fei wanted to use the same tactics on her that he had used before. The man probably guessed something, so he waited coldly for her next performance. Because of what? Well, it seems that she is suspected of intimidation. Luffy was still lying. My cousin has been a bit of a loose cannon in recent years. Acting without thinking. She used to bully people in her hometown with her gang. Zone, you don't need to worry about this for me. I think this time if I can teach her a lesson, it will be good. Luffy's face, that of an American sweetheart, wore an understanding smile, revealing her standard, neat set of 8 white teeth. It was said that she had all her teeth done so that she could marry a rich man, and her then boyfriend took out a loan of 300,000 to help her. Unfortunately, she kicked the poor guy out as soon as her teeth were fixed. The guy didn't find out until the end that Luo Fei had been cheating on him and sleeping with older men every night. Zhou Song also knew this past history. He married Luo Fei purely for business planning, and he didn't have the slightest appreciation for her personally. But today, Bai Ji said that she had caused someone's death. That smile suddenly looked vicious and glaring in his eyes. If there's nothing else, I'll be going first. Zhou Kangyi, Luo Fei seemed to want to hold back. Are you going to the company now? Do you want me to drive you? Joe Kongi was also cold. Don't you need to take care of your mother? Luo Fei then realized that he seemed to have been a bit too pushy. Oh, that's right, I wasn't thinking. So let's talk about the engagement banquet date next time? Joe Kongi had originally come up to talk about the engagement banquet. Because of the tracker, he wanted to cancel the engagement banquet for the time being. But seeing as Luffy's mother had just had surgery, it probably wasn't the right time to talk about it. The man grunted and left through the hallway. When he returned to the basement alone and sat in the car, the strange number vibrated again, sending a second text message. Joe Kongi didn't feel like reading it. But sensing that he hadn't replied, Baiji actually called directly. The phone was connected directly to the car's Bluetooth, so Joe Kongi didn't answer, but listened to the message on her phone. The man leaned back in his chair in silence and hit play. The entire confined space was suddenly filled with her soft, sweet voice. Uncle Joe. I also left a few things in your car. Do you want to take a look? A sentence with no beginning or end. Joe Tsong didn't bother to think about what kind of trick she was playing this time. This time, he added her number to the blacklist. And expected him to ignore her reminders. But that made it even more fun. These days, Baiji spent her time at the hospital taking care of Wei. In her spare time, she completed her school group work on the hospital table. Then she sent some random text messages to Joe Kongi. But he didn't reply to any of them. Baiji simply called him, and when she heard a mechanical voice on the other end saying that the line was busy, she realized that she had been blocked. The girl pinched a red ink pen between her fingers and stabbed it hard onto the paper. The tip of the pen was slightly bent, leaving a crimson mark, like blood. She was angry. Uncle Joe, you dare to block me. Baiji, who had been blocked, decided to take revenge. It was very easy to make Joe Kongi and Luo Fei feel sick. She just borrowed an address from the vocational high school next door and anonymously sent a courier to Luo Fei's company. It was the next day at noon when Luo Fei opened the package, which her assistant had delivered to her. When she opened it, she was so angry that she almost threw the entire box on the floor. It was an exact replica of the collar she had seen in the drawer at Shishu that day. There was also a note inside. Written in the same childish handwriting and tone, it said, Auntie Luo, the tracker you put in Uncle Joe's car has been replaced by my little toy. Lu Fei looked at the line of words and felt her head spin. She had finally convinced the police to drop their suspicions about her, and for that she had sacrificed her cousin. She had been afraid to make a move for a few days. And this girl actually dared to provoke her. She had never been the one to intervene in other people's affairs, but what was this little bitch, who actually acted so arrogantly in front of her? Lu Fei wanted to see what she had left in Joe Kongi's car, so she immediately found an excuse to borrow the car from Joe Kongi. After getting the car keys, she went straight to the driver's seat and started searching under the seat. She didn't know if it was just her imagination, but she always felt that the leather seats in the car had a special smell. It smelled sweet, like fruit, like cheap perfume on a girl, and faintly like rubber. The more she tried to get in, the uglier she looked. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't realize when someone had stood behind her. At that moment, Luo Fei's fingers touched something that felt like a few pieces of plastic wrapping. There was a crackling sound when her fingers touched it. When she took it out, she saw that it was actually 3 unopened condom packages. Used. And there were 3 of them. Luo Fei's hands were shaking. She angrily got up and suddenly saw the man standing behind her in the rearview mirror. His expression was extremely cold. Lu Fei didn't care about that, and holding the 3 remaining condom packages, she asked him, "What is this?" Zhou Tsong only glanced at them, and remembering Baiji's message that day, he understood where they came from. The man didn't answer. His cold, dark black eyes just looked at her without any warmth, without the slightest fluctuation. Is this what you call not crossing the line? Look in the drawers, leave the tracker, look under the seats. His patience was running out. Lu Fei gritted her teeth. She didn't care if she was behaving badly or not at the moment, and she pressed him for an answer, word by word. It's true that we're having a contractual marriage, but shouldn't you at least give me the minimum respect? I'm Lu Fei too, and even if you look at it in terms of the 40% of the Su family's shares that I have in my hands, shouldn't you restrain yourself a little in these kinds of matters? Even Lu Fei, who was always at ease in front of men, was a little broken at this moment under the dual onslaught of Baiji's offensive tactics and Zhou Kongi's indifference. Lu Fei, we're both about to get married, and I can't even stay in your guest room, but you brought her home and had sex with her 3 times in the car. Lu Fei really couldn't say anything else. She was so angry. But what she never expected was Zhou Kangyi's next reaction. The man's expressionless face said, "If you feel aggrieved, the engagement can be cancelled at any time." Chapter 13 The poor have one life, the rich have two shoes. Lu Fei could hardly believe what she had just heard. Almost reflexively, she thought of the words the girl in the hotel had used to provoke her. "I'm afraid he won't marry you this time. Auntie Luo." The first time someone had called her auntie, Lu Fei knew for the first time what it felt like to be unsure and panicked. Especially as Zhou Kangjia had now said that the marriage contract could be cancelled. Lu Fei's face changed in the space of a second. "Zhongye, I didn't mean it like that. I'm not feeling aggrieved, I just can't believe you would do something like this. I've calmed down now and think that you wouldn't like that type of person either. I was reckless today, I'm sorry." The man didn't say anything about her advances, just said, "Never again." This meant both the emotional outburst and the ransacking of the drawers and the tracking device, no more. Lu Fei could only leave the villa with a dark face. She is now increasingly confused about Zhou Kangyi's thoughts. If it weren't for the recent police scrutiny, she would really like to get rid of that girl Wang Jiao. Lu Fei had just left the villa when a phone call came in. Xian Shan was crying on the phone, "Cousin, I have already told the police what you said, but they told me that this is not an ordinary economic dispute, but intentional injury? Cousin, what is going on? When can I go home?" Xian Shan still hadn't realized the seriousness of the situation. When Luo Fei married a wealthy man at the age of 19 and started wearing gold and silver, Xian Shan was only in junior high school. Envious of Luo Fei's luxurious lifestyle, Xian Shan didn't continue her studies in high school, determined to marry a wealthy man as her long-term goal. However, Xian Shan obviously didn't have Luo Fei's good brain. Although Qian Shan was also domineering and fierce, her depth and knowledge completely failed to keep up, which is why she was tricked by Luo Fei into recording a statement that backfired on her. At this time, Luo Fei was also full of annoyance because of Zhou Kangyi's incident. She stopped coaxing her and revealed her true colors. "Does it matter?" Xian Shan was completely confused. "Cousin, how can this not matter? This is a matter that can get you sent to prison. You promised me that you would just say a few words and find someone to get me out. Why haven't your people arrived yet? Luo Fei, don't call me again unless it's an emergency. You want 2 million just for saying a few words? Money isn't that easy to come by, Xian Shan." "Lofi, what do you mean?" Xian Shan suddenly felt that something was wrong. But it was already too late. Lofi just started her Porsche and coldly said, "I will transfer the promised money to your parents in installments, and you can spend it after you get out. But if you don't listen, even if you are my dearest sister, I can't save you." After saying that, Lofi hung up. Lu Fei knew that this time, Wang Jiao had not really been harmed, and even if she had to go to jail, it would probably not be for long. But no matter how long the sentence was, it would be fatal for Lu Fei. She was a semi-public figure and the fiancée of Zhou Kangyi. If she had a criminal record, her marriage to Zhou Kangyi would be completely off. At that time, not only would the Zhou family not want her, but even ordinary families with aspirations to enter the system would not want her. So she took the risk of losing everyone's support and pushed Qian Shan out. She knew that this would undoubtedly completely destroy Qian Shan's dream of marrying into a wealthy family, but Qian Shan would never be able to marry a wealthy man. The more talented she is, the easier she can be controlled, and the more she can do things for herself. And Luo Fei will also be more respectable in front of his relatives and friends. Qian Shan was so angry that she wanted to kill Luo Fei. But it was already too late. The statement had been taken, and Luo Fei had also done some work on the outside. Qian Shan's guilt was already a foregone conclusion. Bai Ji waited outside the police station until late at night for this result. Late at night, a warm spring rain fell rarely in the dry Jingbei city. A police officer in uniform came out and said to the 3 students, "The result is out. The suspect is under our control and will probably be sentenced to 1.5 years. You can go back to school with peace of mind." "So soon?" This time, Lu Hao did not point the finger directly at Luo Fei as Bai Ji had hoped, but that was also because he really had no evidence to show that it was Luo Fei who did it. He had cooperated 100% with Bai Ji in the complex events before and after. Including now, he had also missed tonight's evening study session and was waiting with Bai Ji under an umbrella at the entrance to the police station. Lu Hao asked, "Would you mind telling us who that person is?" "A Ms. Qian. Do you know her?" Bai Ji's pupils suddenly contracted when she saw the photo in the register. "Qian Shan?" How could it be her? This must be another plot by Luo Fei. The night rain outside the umbrella grew heavier and heavier, and the whole sky was so dark that not a ray of light could escape. Lu Hao took a look at Chen Shan's photo and said he didn't know the person. Then he asked Wang Jiao on the side, "Do you know her?" Wang Jiao also shook her head. "Wang Jiao, this woman looks quite pretty, but I never thought she had such a vicious heart." Only Bai Ji stood silently in the same place. Her black umbrella hid her eyes and expression. The sound of the drizzling rain grew louder and louder, just like the darkness in her eyes. "I'll go back first." The girl's voice was cold and indifferent to the extreme. Seeing Bai Ji leaving, Lu Hao immediately chased after her with an umbrella. "Ji, let me give you a ride, okay?" At this moment, a ray of light suddenly flashed in Bai Ji's gloomy mood. "Okay." Lu Hao didn't expect Bai Ji to agree, and his heart was filled with excitement. A milk-faced smile appeared on his handsome face. "So, Ji, are you going back to the dormitory now? How about I take a taxi to drop you off?" "No." Bai Ji said, "I want to go for a drink." The Lu family has been in the medical profession for generations, and things like alcohol have never appeared in Lu Hao's world since he was a child. But Gigi said she wanted to go, and Lu Hao didn't hesitate to go with her. In the bar, although he didn't drink a single drop and didn't know the difference between bars or the price range of drinks, he just followed her around without complaint, using his unlimited credit card to pay the bill. Bai Ji looked at him as he swiped the card, and just found it a little funny. "Lu Xiao, you seem like the young master in Dream of the Red Chamber who first goes out of the Grand View Garden and doesn't even know how to weigh silver." Lu Hao felt a little ashamed. "Is that so? Are these drinks expensive or cheap?" "They're not too cheap, and they're about the same price as the luxury clothes he usually wears and the luxury school bag he carries. But if you're talking about expensive, when his uncles drink for entertainment, they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars at each meal." Bai Ji sneered coldly, 20 yuan for 50-degree Jiangxi Abai, and 800 yuan for a bottle of mineral water here. Which is cheaper? The few bottles of wine Bai Ji just ordered would be enough to cover the living expenses of an ordinary student for a year. And in the year she was 17, she alone rushed to the bottom of a skyscraper to pull down a banner, and was knocked unconscious in the snow by Qian Shan's people, lying there all night almost freezing to death. All for this 20,872 yuan. She later saw Lu Hao for the first time in the university cafeteria. He was surrounded by a few basketball team guys, like a celebrity. The girls at the next table were screaming, and they said that the shoes on his feet were some kind of Jordan collaboration model. Bai Ji later searched for them on the school computer and found out that they cost more than 30,000 yuan. The mouse in her hand was almost deformed from pinching. She remembered that it was because she couldn't pay the final medical bill of 20,872 yuan, and the doctor refused to give her a 2-hour grace period, personally unplugging her father's oxygen tank. At that time, she realized that her father's life was not as valuable as the shoes under the doctor's son's feet. Bai Ji squeezed the glass in her hand, just as she had squeezed the mouse in the library that day. She forced herself to sober up a little from the alcohol, while Lu Hao muttered to himself. Chapter 14 Hug me for him. "Sorry, this is my first time in a bar, I'm not very experienced, I won't be so ignorant next time." "Ji, what don't you like about me?" I'll change, okay?" She smiled faintly. "Forget it, you can't change. Can you change your background? Can you stop being the son of the doctor who unplugged my father's oxygen tank? You can't." Bai Ji knew that Lu Hao was the apple of the Lu family's eye, so the best way to get back at the Lu family was to make Lu Hao fall in love with her. But she also knew that Lu Hao's feelings for her were genuine, so she didn't want to hurt him too much. So she added, "What I mean is that I don't like good boys like you. You should stop wasting your time on me. I thought you just didn't like doctors." Lu Hao, however, felt that this was a breakthrough. He looked up earnestly and asked, "So, Gigi, what kind of man do you like?" "I like you, Teacher Zhou." Hearing her say Zhou Kongyi's name again, Lu Hao's heart sank. "Gigi, don't be ridiculous." For the sake of the two families' friendship, Zhou Kongyi would occasionally tutor Lu Hao in his studies. A giant in the humanities field, he tutored him in composition in junior high and high school. Lu Hao has been afraid of his teacher Zhou since childhood. "Bai Ji, I just like him that way. But Teacher Zhou obviously has many hospitals and pharmaceutical companies under his name." A cold flash of light in Bai Ji's eyes. After a second, she suppressed this chill. At this time, she happened to see a familiar face at the end of the crowd. Zhou Kongyi. He was here tonight. Zhou Kangyi occasionally came to this bar, and Bai Ji had also managed to find out about it. The bar had a high minimum charge of at least 1,000 yuan per person, and if it wasn't for Lu Hao, she couldn't really afford it herself. Fortunately, she just wanted to take a chance today, and she actually ran into him. Bai Ji picked up her glass and looked across the room at Zhou Kangyi, wiggling her fingers and the studded wristband on her wrist at him flirtatiously. Lu Hao had been facing the bar and hadn't seen who was coming up behind him. He heard the ice in Bai Ji's glass clinking and she said in his ear, "Mr. Zhou, he has sexual charisma." "Do you?" After that, Bai Ji lifted her foot and prepared to leave. "Ji. Don't follow me, I need to go to the bathroom." Bai Ji left those words and left Lu Hao behind. In the bathroom, Bai Ji recalled the moment they had locked eyes, and she was sure that Zhou Tsong had seen the leather bracelet on her wrist. She took out the new number she had prepared and continued to send him text messages. "Uncle, do you know that your name is also inside my bracelet? Your name is written all over me, in my underwear, I am yours." Zhou Kangyi had just seen not only Bai Ji, but also Lu Hao. At the bar, the boy and girl were standing close together. But the next second, a text like this came to his phone. Zhou Kangyi's face was very bad. He completely ignored this reckless girl and walked straight up the stairs to a high-class box surrounded by glass on all sides like an ice cube. In the box sat several other children from the compound who had grown up playing with him. Everyone had grown up now, some were engaged in venture capital, others in the internet, and there were experts in the field of artificial intelligence. Only Zhou Tsong had also studied the liberal arts, which didn't seem to be very profitable. But everyone knew that he, who studied law and philosophy, was the king of this circle. Some people say that studying the liberal arts is an unwritten symbol of being a top billionaire. Because the humanities and social sciences circles in foreign schools are full of political leaders or crown princes from various countries, they go to school not just to learn knowledge, but also to make connections. You can't major in these subjects unless you're rich. After Zhou Tsong sat down, the mood in the box became a little more subdued. But then someone looked out the glass and exclaimed at the sudden appearance of a woman. "Wow, this girl is so pure." The woman seemed to be looking at them too, standing in the light and shadow of the art glass, taking advantage of the atmosphere and her fantasy. The people in the box saw her one after the other and also praised her repeatedly. Gingbei hadn't seen such a pure and fresh dish in a long time. Those rich girls learn about Asian ABG every day, but when they take off their makeup, their skin looks as rough as a ghost's. What are the Chinese learning about foreigners for? Bai Ji didn't hide her beauty from the wolves and tigers' gaze. She was still wearing that white dress today. With a sweater on, she looked like a literary campus goddess, but without it, she was a high-minded and dangerous midnight tulip. When she decided to come to the second floor to find Zhou Kangyi, she left her sweater downstairs in the bathroom. She only wore a long, thin, minimalist-style dress that didn't reveal much, especially in such a boisterous place. The white silk was so clean that it seemed to reflect light, and it felt like it would break if you bent it. She leaned against the glass partition of the private room, leaving a slender figure in the shadows. Suddenly, she opened her fingers and supported herself on the glass in front of her. And 10 fingerprints slowly emerged from her chest, emitting the heat of her body temperature. "Fuck, she's a master." Zhou Kangyi sighed. A young man couldn't help but curse out loud. "Fucking pure lust world, the ceiling is here, it's not one of you who caused it, is it? I want to cause one of these dishes too, but Kangyi, why do I feel like she's looking at you?" Zhou Kangyi's surroundings have always been very clean, and now he is about to get engaged, so no one thinks much of him. He has never cared about his surroundings, and it was only when the other person mentioned himself that he glanced at the girl outside the glass. Through the haze of the cigarette in his hand and the filigree art of the glass, her face was actually a little blurry in his field of vision. But that was it, and he guessed who the person was in just a second. At the same time, the phone on the table next to his knees vibrated twice again. "Uncle Zhou, I think it's you I'm looking at. You and Auntie Luo had a fight tonight, didn't you?" I don't know if it was the nicotine or the hormones in the bar, but Zhou Tsong also remembered a white Persian cat he had when he was a child. The cat used to cling to him like this, but he was busy with his studies, and apart from going to school, he often had to study equestrian sports and art, so he didn't have a lot of time to spend with the cat at home. Later, the cat learned to deliberately distance itself from him. From time to time, she would seduce him into playing, and when he went to play with her, she would proudly dart under the sofa. But after a while, the cat was killed. The cause of death was unknown, but it seemed that she had been maliciously poisoned. She was lying in a pool of blood, her white fur stained with the blood she had vomited. He knelt in a corner of the garden that his parents didn't know about and buried her with his own hands. The feeling that Bai Ji gave him was sometimes very similar to that of the cat. So, by some strange coincidence, he responded to her text for the first time. There was no reply. He answered the question asking if he had quarreled with Lofi. The man said 2 words and then smoked his cigarette without saying anything else. After a few minutes, when Jo Song looked up again, there was no longer a young girl's figure in the glass. He thought she had left, and the people around him stopped talking about her. The man had another drink. Feeling listless, he left for the parking lot. Since it was a personal trip, Jo Kanggi didn't bring a driver tonight, and he turned on his phone to prepare to call a designated driver. At this time, the girl who had just disappeared reappeared in front of him. "Uncle, are you waiting for a designated driver?" Jo Kanggi looked at Bai Ji. Without the barrier of glass, her face was more clearly visible. The man took a drag on his cigarette and leaned against the car door and said lightly, "Do you know how to drive?" "Bai Ji, I can, and I can drive more excitingly than a designated driver." The man frowned and wanted to say no. But the words didn't come out. The girl in front of him suddenly took a step forward. The flirtatious demon he saw in the bar just now suddenly hung her tears. And the tears were surprisingly not fake, with a bit of restrained stubbornness. Her eyes were red from the rim to the whites, as if she had suffered a great injustice. "Uncle Zhou, I'm very sad tonight." At a certain moment, he actually believed that she was sincere when she said she was sad. The way she tugged at the corner of his shirt, longing for pity. It was really like a desperate plea to a merciful God. It was as if he was her last straw and her only hope. The cigarette in his hand dropped some ash. Once the seed of curiosity sprouts, it can never be contained. "Why are you sad?" "Because Lofi got away with it again, and she feels like she's fighting a battle she can never win. But of course she won't tell the truth. It's only a split second before she wipes away her tears and suddenly starts talking about something completely unrelated. Uncle Joe, do you know what? It's the 4th year since my father passed away, and today is the anniversary of his death. I really miss him so much. Will you give him a hug for me?" Jo Song could also tell at a glance that she was lying. Whenever she lied, the pretense of vulnerability and subservience in her eyes was particularly obvious, unlike the expression of genuine and stubborn sadness she had just shown. This girl was so arrogant that she didn't even bother to pretend. But the movements of her hands were so bold. He felt those snake-like hands reach into the pocket of his suit jacket. Her fingers continued to explore the fabric of his clothes, just as they had on the glass earlier. The man's patience seemed to have reached its limit, and his gaze hardened completely. He grabbed her wrist with one hand and flipped her over, pressing her against the door of the Bentley. His knee slammed against her side. "You like me that much? I'll give you a chance, then, huh?" Chapter 15 The first time he took the initiative to find her. "You want to have a one-night stand with me? Now get undressed and get in the car. You don't need to make a fuss about your father's death. What do you think?" His tone was as calm as ever. The chill in his eyes spread to Bai Ji's face. There was not the slightest hint of ambiguity or desire. She sneered, looked at him, and said icily, "If I get undressed and get in, will you follow suit?" The man laughed and let her go. "You can try, but I'll be the first to fall, and you won't be able to play alone." He had already seen through her bottom line. Underneath the seemingly wild and crazy exterior, she was just a paper tiger with no experience in bluffing. That night, Jo Song did not continue to stand up to Bai Ji. Soon, the designated driver arrived. He left her behind and got into the Bentley, which still retained the warmth of her back. Before getting into the car, he pulled his tie in a gentlemanly manner, as if to mock her. "Go back to the dormitory early and remember to go to class tomorrow." The best student at the university? Bai Ji also pulled her lips back and, in front of the designated driver, adjusted the straps of her skirt. "And you, mister, please remember to wash off the scent of me from your body, so that when you go home after cheating on your girlfriend, Auntie Luo doesn't find out." Sure enough, Jo Kanggi's face turned ashen in an instant. Bai Ji was very satisfied with her handiwork. The designated driver on the side was shocked. Even the way he looked at Jo Kanggi had a few more points of scrutiny for the pervert. Jo Kanggi saw the expression on the designated driver's face as he looked at himself, and his face tightened even more. After getting into the car, the man said nothing and permanently uninstalled the designated driver platform. Bai Ji did not return to the dormitory in the second half of the night, but sat on a bench in the city park next to the bar all night. Lu Hao also stayed out late. He hadn't seen Bai Ji since she went to the bathroom, and she hadn't replied to his messages, so he went to the bathroom to look for her. The men's and women's bathrooms at the bar were shared, and Lu Hao didn't find Bai Ji, but he did find her sweatshirt, which she had left in the corner. Worried that something had happened to Bai, Lu Hao was beside himself with worry. He grabbed the bartender at the door and asked if he had seen a girl wearing a white skirt, but the bartender said the girl had already left. The school gate closes at 6 p.m., and it was only before Bai Ji returned to her dormitory that she remembered she had forgotten Lu Hao. She sent him a message saying she had returned to her dormitory, and he replied almost immediately, "Okay, I'll go to bed too. Good night." "Good night, Gigi." Bai Ji thought Lu Hao had gone home early, but in fact, he had been waiting for her at the bar door, hugging the sweater she had picked up from the corner. He didn't feel relieved until she told him she had arrived safely at the dormitory. Lu Hao arrived home at 7 a.m. In the large villa, Lu Jiang and Lu Mingyue were already having breakfast. They were both surprised that he had stayed out all night. Hao, why didn't you come home last night?" asked his mother, Lu Mingyue. Lu Hao had already dealt with the smell of alcohol and smoke on his body before he returned home. He was always obedient, so no one would suspect him if he lied. "Recently, there was a big assignment at school, so I stayed up all night in the art studio." "Dad, Mom, I'm going to go upstairs and rest, I'm a little tired." "Go ahead, when you wake up in a while, drink some of the soup that Mrs. Li made. It'll replenish your body." "Okay, Mom." After Lu Hao went upstairs, Lu Jiang's expression was not very good. He actually knew where Lu Hao had been last night. Lu Hao's credit card showed that he had spent money on drinks and food, so he was definitely not at school. But he didn't say much to Lu Mingyue either. "Lu Jiang, I'm playing golf with Tsung this afternoon, and I won't be back for dinner." Lu Mingyue, "Okay." Lu Jiang is half a businessman, but he never drinks. Seeing that the person he's meeting is Zhou Song, Lu Mingyue isn't worried even if he's late. But Lu Jiang has a long face all day. It was only when he saw Zhou Kangyi that his expression eased a little. After golf, the two went to a state banquet-level Huayan restaurant for dinner. In the private room, Lu Jiang toasted Zhou Kangyi with tea instead of wine. "Congratulations, Kangyi. Although it's not a match made in heaven, it's still a strong alliance. I wish you even greater success in the future. Everyone in this circle has 1,000 years of experience." When the news of Zhou Kangyi and Lu Ofei's engagement first broke, many people in the industry couldn't believe it. But anyone who has done any business can understand that no matter how scandalous Lu Ofei is, she is the widow of Su Jianxiong. And Su Jianxiong was an extremely rare romantic in the rich and powerful. Instead of leaving his fortune to his biological daughter, Su Tian, he left it to Lu Ofei, a mistress who had not even given birth to a child. Zhou Kanjia had also just returned to China and needed to consolidate his position among the dozen or so descendants of the Zhou family, so the billions of cash and 40% of the shares in Lu Ofei's possession were particularly important. But aside from these external factors, just looking at Lu Ofei and Zhou Kangyi themselves, they are not only incompatible, they are poles apart. Zhou Kangyi is not arrogant. When it comes to this marriage, he doesn't ridicule or disparage Lu Ofei's status, but just takes a sip of tea, each takes what they need. "Unlike you, I'm not so blessed, with a sister-in-law who is free in her marriage and with whom I have a mutual understanding. Don't mention it, it's also a pile of troubles." Hao's heart has become more and more wild since he started university, and he is not as understanding as when you taught him. Zhou Kangyi also said, "Lu Hao is also in his 20s this year, and he should have his own ideas." Lu Jiang shook his head. "However, you don't know, he lied to me and his mother this morning. He stayed out all night last night, and the text message showing his consumption indicated that he was at a bar. He even said that he had a lot of homework and stayed up all night in the art studio." Zhou Kangyi blew the steam from the tea, never showing any expression. When he heard the sentence that he stayed out all night, half of his face fell into the shadows under the overhead light, making his features even more three-dimensional and obscure. Lu Jiang frowned, leaning against the high-end mahogany Chinese-style chair behind him and crossing his fingers. "I heard that he's recently fallen in love. I don't know which girl it is, but I hope it's not some kind of unscrupulous female student at the university who's after his money. If that's the case, the two of them will just stay in hotel rooms all the time and neglect their studies and health." Zhou Tsong also listened to Lu Jiang's words, and his expression became a little cold at some point. He didn't say a word on the topic. Lu Jiang didn't continue either. The two men talked about some topics related to medical equipment cooperation. Before they parted, Lu Jiang said to him, "Zhongya, I have a humble request." "Dean Lu, you don't need to be polite." "Lu Jiang, I recently want to invite a foreign brain expert to give a lecture at my hospital. He is an avid fan of Chinese culture. So, I would like to borrow your Wenqin manuscript for a day so that he can take a look. Is that convenient for you?" Although Wenqin manuscript is a book, its value and irreproducibility are extremely precious. Even Lu Jiang and Zhou Song, who have been friends for generations, must be cautious when borrowing Wenqin manuscript. Unexpectedly, Zhou Song also readily agreed. "Of course, I will send it to the Lu residence tomorrow night." "Hey, that's embarrassing. I must have someone go to your house to fetch it." "Kangyi, thank you in advance this time, really." "You're welcome." After bidding farewell to Lu Jiang, he returned to the villa. Kangyi went to the study to look for the Wenqin manuscript, but found that the book, which had been carefully stored in a box, was gone. Apart from Baiji, no one had been here in the past few days. He guessed almost immediately that she had the book. At the same time, the words "Lu Hao didn't come home last night," which Lu Jiang said in the dining room just now, flashed through his mind. The man's eyes were so dark that they looked like they could hold ink. He obviously wanted the Wenqin manuscript, so he could just send a secretary to get it. But he sat in the study and looked at his phone for a full 10 seconds. Then, personally, on his own initiative, he sent a text message to that string of numbers with no note. At school? Chapter 16 The Clinic. Baiji slept through the whole school day. But now she was awake again. Zhou Kangyi's text message had come as a surprise, but she soon realized that he was not asking whether she was at school because he was concerned about her. "No. Is there something Uncle Zhou wants with me?" "Zhou Kangyi, address, I'll come and get my things." He thought she had only borrowed the most ordinary books, and Su Tian had only told him about a few hard-to-find English original literature books, but he never imagined that she was carrying away the entire Wenqin manuscript. Baiji, of course, did not have the Wenqin manuscript on hand, but she still sent him the address of a hospital. Zhou Kangyi soon carefully discovered that this was not the hospital where Wei Li had her eyes examined. The small hospital Baiji was now at was more like a clinic, located on a street in a suburban township. Naturally, Zhou Kangyi didn't have such an establishment either. He drove for a full 2 hours before finding this clinic. The road had become rugged from the moment he got off the highway, and a lot of mud and dust had stained the shiny black Maybach. If it weren't for Baiji, Zhou Kangyi would probably never have known that there was such a place full of yellow soil in the bustling city of Jingbei. And when he entered the clinic, the man's expression became even more complicated. The walls, with their peeling green paint, still had signs posted advertising safe abortion. There were few people in the clinic, and occasionally a few nurses in blue sterile gowns walked out. They all found it strange to see a man like Zhou Kangyi, who looked so refined and wealthy, here, and they kept looking back. The further he walked in, the darker Zhou Kangyi's face became. It really looked like one of those black abortion clinics in small towns he had seen on TV. Finally, Zhou Tsong also saw Baiji in a ward with cheap green velvet curtains. The girl was sitting with her legs hanging on a stainless steel folding bed, wearing a white sports sweatshirt and a white pleated skirt. Her eyes were pitiful and tearful. "Uncle Zhou, my stomach hurts." She did have a stomachache, because she was afraid that she could not afford the medical fees and examination fees at a major hospital, so she took the 3-hour bus ride here. Zhou Tsong also came to pick up a book, and her abdominal health was not within his scope of concern. It's just that the location is so ambiguous that it is impossible not to associate it with the kind of surgery that is posted on a small note outside the door. His lips were pursed tightly, and he asked nonchalantly, "Do you know the cause?" "I don't know, it just hurts, piercing pain." "Will I be unable to have children in the future, Uncle Zhou?" Baiji said, and her big, watery eyes began to shed tears. Zhou Tsong also knew that this girl would talk nonsense after 3 sentences, and when he thought about the fact that she had stayed out with Lu Hao last night, his eyes and emotions became inscrutable. At this time, the nurse walked in. "Little girl, the results are in. It's just a trauma from kicking and bruising, and it hasn't hurt your internal organs." Baiji asked seriously, "Nurse, am I really not pregnant?" The nurse was speechless. "How can you, a young girl, not know anything? How can you get pregnant when you're still menstruating? How can you be pregnant?" After she finished speaking, Baiji's face turned red, and she lowered her head like a budding flower. Meanwhile, she secretly sized up Zhou Kangyi's reaction. The nurse also glanced at Zhou Kangyi. Normally, the person who would accompany someone to the hospital at a time like this would be their boyfriend, but the man's aura was too strong and cold. When the two of them were placed together, they didn't look like boyfriend and girlfriend, but more like teacher and elder. The nurse couldn't quite figure out their relationship, so she could only vaguely say, if you're worried about pregnancy, just remember to take precautions with your boyfriend in the future. Don't be paranoid. Okay, thank you, nurse. I'm glad I'm not pregnant. After the nurse left, the room was left with just the young girl and the man. The clinic was not a nice place, but the sunlight was bright. Baiji propped herself up on her elbows on the bed and looked up at Joe Kangi sweetly. Did you hear that, Uncle Joe? The doctor said that in the future, we just need to take precautions. Uncle Joe, you're not just thinking about yourself and not giving me any precautions, are you? Joe Kangi was also very cold. Can I have my book back? Baiji pursed her lips. You're so fierce, I didn't say I wouldn't give it back to you. After saying that, Baiji covered her stomach and got up from the bed, walked over to her bag by the side and took it, trembling with each step, looking very painful. Jotsong also turned his gaze away from the window, not wanting to watch her put on a show any longer. But just then, Baiji suddenly turned around. The young body threw Jotsong also and sat down on the wooden chair next to the wooden table, with her calves and white stockings hanging down around the hem of his trousers. She used all her strength to throw such a man, who was almost 1.9 meters tall, to the ground. She sat on top of him, both hands wrapped tightly around Joe Kangi's neck. Her short skirt was pushed up onto the upper part of her thighs, and her body, covered in a sweatshirt, pressed tightly against his. She gasped for breath in little pants. Baiji. Baiji ignored his warning and rubbed her nose against the suit on his shoulder. Tears dripped onto his body, and she kept rubbing against him. It hurts, the whole area is bruised. Uncle Joe, I was kicked in your hospital, you are responsible for me. Joe Kangi's forehead veins were throbbing. He undoubtedly felt annoyed and irritable, but this annoyance was not only physical, but also psychological. The words that Lu Jiang had said were playing out in his mind again at this moment. Staying out all night. And spending the whole day in hotel rooms. The man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, those cold, dark eyes were already filled with an indelible darkness and intensity. It hurts. Did you stay out all night again last night? Baiji froze for a moment. She didn't know how Jotsong knew that she had stayed out all night, and the girl instinctively and impulsively raised her lips to kiss him, but he avoided her. Baiji's big eyes stared at her. Uncle Joe, you're jealous, aren't you? Jotsong didn't bother to argue with her whether this was mockery or jealousy. Prepared mentally, this time he was unmoved by the girl's provocation. Baiji also noticed that this time, despite the contact and posture being even more intimate than the previous time on the railing, the man didn't react at all. She even felt it on purpose. The girl was a little frustrated, pouting her lips and unbridledly spitting out, Uncle Joe, why can't you get hard? Arrogance to this extent is not simply a matter of lust or not lust, it is like setting off dynamite in a man's face. A successful man like him cannot allow himself to be so recklessly offended by a student. Jotsong's hand also became red with veins, and suddenly he grabbed the hem of her skirt. The strength in the man's fingertips was so great that it seemed to penetrate the paper, and it was soaked with violence. Baiji was shocked, feeling the swiftness and brutality of this strength. She instinctively tightened her grip around his neck. The girl looked at him from close up. It was obvious that this man, from his eyes to his movements, was not the least bit moved, but his next words made her blush. I like the back. Do you dare? Baiji felt awkward, but she stubbornly smiled. Okay. Not the kind of back you mean. Do you dare? The girl slightly furrowed her eyebrows. What's the difference? Back, in the back? For the first time, she felt that even though she had done a lot of preparation and was far more mature than her peers, in front of this man who was 14 years her senior, she was still as naive as a piece of paper. The two expressions kept jumping around in her head for a long time. It took her a long time to realize what he meant. It was pea. Grass. After Baiji reacted, the hand resting on her but became a hot potato. She jumped off his lap like she had seen a ghost, took her school bag and backed away to the wall. Perverted old man. Pervert. Those round eyes instantly lost all flirtatiousness, leaving only warning and vigilance, like a deer on guard in the forest. Baiji looked at him for 2 seconds, then quickly ran away with her school bag. Jotsong also watched her do so, and it was only after a few seconds that he got up from his chair and began slowly straightening the suit and pants he had crumpled. Then, without even realizing it himself, he raised the corner of his mouth and smiled. She probably wouldn't dare provoke him again for a while. An indescribable feeling of pleasure and satisfaction welled up in the man's heart, and he sent a message to his assistant. Find a girl named Bai Ji and bring back the Wenxin manuscript. Chapter 17. Go back to the dormitory early. Bai Ji was so shocked that she went straight back to school. She was also confused by Zhou Tsang's actions. She felt a little lost. The girl sat alone on a playground bench, staring into the night. After a while, she sent a message to Su Tian. Su Tian, let me ask you something. Huh? Bai Ji typed into the phone, wondering if her uncle had any special fetishes. But before she could think of how to phrase her question, Su Tian directly forwarded a trending search and cursed. Shit. They're not having an engagement banquet, they're getting married. Next month. What the fuck are we going to do, Zhizhe? Bai Ji's doubts were suddenly interrupted by this news. In the headline, Zhou Tsanghe and Luo Fei's photos were edited together. Although it wasn't a personal response, such news must have been approved and confirmed by the person themselves. They were getting married. Bai Ji's face gradually turned gloomy. The question she had wanted to ask suddenly seemed unimportant. At that moment, a few boys in front of her suddenly patted the basketball and walked towards her. Bai Ji didn't return to her senses, and a ball was thrown at her feet. It wasn't hard, but it was very intimidating. The young girl squinted and looked up, her long, black, silky hair gently swaying in the evening breeze. However, she coldly spat out 3 words, looking for death? Chinese department, Bai Ji, you're the one looking for death, aren't you? Playing split-legged and playing with us Lu Hao? Do you have any face? Bai Ji then remembered that these people seemed to be Lu Hao's teammates and roommates on the basketball team. When she and Lu Hao had announced their relationship in the past, these people had treated her quite well, calling her sister-in-law. Bai Ji, I don't understand what you're talking about. Each of the 4 boys was over 185 centimeters tall, pounding the basketball and surrounding her in the middle. Other students had already gathered in the playground. Still playing dumb with me? You said you were going to the bar, but you left first. Lu Hao waited for you at the door all night, but now he has the flu and is at home with a high fever. Have you even bothered to check on him? Is this any way to treat a girlfriend? Bai Ji frowned. She really didn't know that Lu Hao had waited for her all night. What does that have to do with you? She looked haughty and cold, like an untouchable iceberg. Her friends all knew that this was the kind of girl Lu Hao liked, and they sneered. A Chinese literature major, a genius, a goddess. You can fool Lu Hao with your innocent act, but why pretend with us? Heh, at school you look so unapproachable, but when you go into a bar and see those rich old men, you'd probably take off your underwear and kneel down to serve them. Don't think no one saw you like that last night? Bai Ji's expressionless, very calm. Lu Hao and his friends are also the famous second-generation rich kids from Jingbei. They usually like to go to nightclubs and bars after school. She thought that they probably saw what happened outside Zhou Kangyi's private room that night. Ordinary female students who are humiliated to this extent would have blushed long ago. Bai Ji didn't retreat at all. She even laughed out loud, walked up to her directly, picked her hair, and looked cold and intimidating. Who are you calling old? Zhou Kangyi? He's not old. He is young and in good shape. He is much better than you softies who either indulge in sex or play video games all night. Several boys were dumbfounded. On the one hand, they didn't expect her to admit it so readily. On the other hand, they were also thinking about the person she was referring to. Zhou what? Zhou Kangyi? The next second, there was an outburst of laughter in the crowd. The girl studying literature really dares to think, Zhou Kangyi, what are you a toad doing eating swan's meat? A poor student like you, Lu Hao can only look at you because he has the genes of his parents' doctors. A doctor has a benevolent heart, do you understand? It's called compassion. We all feel cheated that he can look at you, and you still dare to think about Zhou Kangyi? Do you know who Zhou Kangyi's fiancée is? She is worth billions. What are you comparing yourself to, your front-of-the-body airport? The boys were also feeling guilty, and the more they said, the more outrageous they became. Bai Ji didn't bother to argue with these losers. They were just rich second-generation masters who thought they could do whatever they wanted. One day, she would make them kneel at her feet and beg for their lives. The girl picked up her school bag and prepared to go back to her dormitory. However, the boys surrounded her and wouldn't let her go, and one of them even tried to pull her. At that moment, a stern voice suddenly sounded from a distance. What are you doing? Stop. Several boys subconsciously let go and looked at the person who spoke. The person across from them was wearing a dark suit in navy blue, and it was obvious that he was not from the school. Someone quickly recognized that the logo in front of him was the logo of the Joe Group, the largest multinational company in Jingbei. And his employee name tag was the most senior in the Joe headquarters. This person is Joe Kongi's personal assistant. Although Baiji didn't recognize the other person's identity, she could tell that he was no ordinary person, as she saw that the spoiled brats had calmed down. Joe Kongi's assistant had been sent to fetch the Wunshin manuscript, and he had never expected to run into Baiji like this. He walked towards Baiji in front of the boys, nodded with businesslike respect, and said, "Good evening, Miss Bai, I've come to fetch the book that Mr. Joe lent you to read last time." The boys continued to be stunned. No way? Joe Tsong really had an affair with Baiji? Baiji, on the other hand, gave the shocked young men a cool glance, looked up at her assistant, and spoke proudly and arrogantly, "Tell Uncle Joe that I haven't finished reading the book yet, and I'll deliver it to his home in person tomorrow morning, in perfect condition." The assistant's task was to take back the manuscript of Literary Heart tonight. He was a little unsure, so he said to Baiji, "Please wait a moment, I'll call and ask Mr. Joe." Baiji didn't have the book on hand, so she definitely couldn't return it that night. The boys didn't leave either. They wanted to stay and watch the show. It was as if they wanted to confirm whether Joe Tsong and Baiji were really in a relationship like she said. And Baiji wasn't so sure in her heart at this moment. After all, if the man simply told his assistant that if he didn't get her tonight, he would take her to the police station, all her little tricks would be for nothing. Not only would the lie be exposed, but this time, she might even be charged with theft. She was gambling again. Gambling that Joe Tsoni would not be tempted by her, even for a moment, not even the slightest bit. The assistant walked over to make a phone call. It had been about a minute, and it had been the longest minute in Baiji's life. She couldn't remember how she had survived it. Finally, the assistant returned, and there was a subtle change in the way she looked at Baiji. Baiji stood with her arms folded, doing her best to look calm as she flicked a stray hair from her forehead with her finger. What did he say? Did he agree? This time, the assistant treated Baiji with even more respect and bowed to her. "Mr. Joe said it's okay, so I'll come back to get it from you in the morning." Baiji let out a sigh of relief. At that moment, the assistant added something else. Mr. Joe also said, "For your own good, go back to your dormitory early in the evening in the future." Chapter 18 Retrieving the Manuscript. Amid the air, a sense of intrigue was fermenting. Several boys who had spoken recklessly instantly fell silent. Baiji remained silent for a second, then laughed out. Among the shocked expressions around her, she was radiant like a pleased child. In the night, she appeared even more dazzling in pure white. She knew it. From the first time he reacted to her, pushed her back under the car, and replied to her text, she knew that lofty Buddha boy would one day be dragged down to the bottom of the mud with her, to fall and be lost in the sea of lust. The girl's slightly reddened eyes innocently squeezed out a hint of sweetness. "Thank you, assistant uncle. Please tell Uncle Joe that I'll go back to my dormitory now and I'll be very obedient." Okay. The assistant felt that there was something strange about the girl in front of him. But this was the boss's personal business, and he dared not ask any questions or say anything more than he had to, so he just followed orders. After Baiji left, several boys were still standing in the playground, in a state of shattered values. What was the meaning of this? Is she Joe Kongi's mistress? Joe Kongi is not married yet, so she can't be his mistress yet, right? Are you guys missing the point? The point is, how is Joe Kongi with Baiji? They're probably not together. Didn't you hear her call him uncle? Maybe she's his distant niece? The boy who led the scolding of Baiji just now cursed. How would Joe Kongi have a niece like Baiji, who only has those two outfits for spring, summer, autumn and winter? Everyone at the university knows that she is a well-known poor student. Compared to a niece, they feel that the possibility of a young mistress is greater. So, Uncle Joe? Is this the kind of fun rich people have? They sure know how to have fun. The second generation were still arrogant, but after witnessing Baiji's respectful attitude towards Joe Kongi's senior secretary, they didn't dare to trouble Baiji again. After returning to the dormitory building, Baiji didn't go straight to her room to rest. Instead, she went to the next floor and found Wang Jiao. Wang Jiao has been a bit jumpy these past few days, afraid of running into the same kind of trouble as last time with those thugs, and has not been going to class for a few days. At the door, Baiji is watching her. Bai Ji's attitude is not as friendly as it was the previous 2 times. Zhou Kongyi also came to ask for a book, and she could only say to Wang Jiao without arguing, "Give me back the Wenxin manuscript." Wang Jiao's fingers are clutching her pajamas tightly, and she looks like she wants to deny it. Bai Ji, however, said directly, "Either you admit that you stole the Wenxin manuscript and accept the punishment, or you will be regarded as Luo Fei's mistress in her eyes and wait for her to retaliate against you even more severely. Don't forget, I'm the one who saved your life." Bai Ji was right in every word. When Wang Jiao stole the Wenxin manuscript, she wanted to frame Bai Ji for the theft. The Wenxin manuscript is priceless, and if Bai Ji hadn't found Zhou Cong to help her, she would have been sentenced to at least 5 years in prison. But now, Bai Ji just told her to go to her teacher and admit her mistake, and she would only be given a demerit. Although a demerit for stealing will also be recorded in the file, and she will never be able to be evaluated for awards or merit, and it may even be difficult for her to find a job after graduate school. But it's still much better than going to jail. Wang Jiao was reluctant, but after what happened last time, she also feared Luo Fei deeply. "Can you really make Luo Fei stop doubting me? Just give me back the book." "Okay then." Wang Jiao was really scared too. Bai Ji was crazy, and along with her, all the crazy people and crazy things around her. She didn't want to get involved with any of them anymore. Wang Jiao returned to her dorm room and opened a metal box with a key from a corner where no one could see her. She wrapped the Wenxin manuscript in many plastic bags, hiding it so well that no one could tell that it was a priceless antique. Wang Jiao handed the object to Bai Ji. "It's here." Bai Ji checked the object and, after confirming that it was correct, her tone became even colder. "Go to Zhongquanshui tomorrow and turn yourself in. I'll help you solve your problems." Wang Jiao, okay. At this time, Su Tian happened to return from school. The beautiful Su was carrying 2 cups of milk tea, one for Bai Ji and one for herself. Seeing Bai Ji with Wang Jiao, Su Tian looked disgusted, and even a little jealous. "Ji, you don't even reply to my WeChat, and now you're chatting with this bad woman?" "Bai Ji, we weren't chatting. I told her to turn herself in." "Oh, that's good." Then she took Bai Ji's hand, looked triumphant and said to Wang Jiao, "You heard her, turn yourself in." "Wang Jiao? Didn't you break up?" Wang Jiao looked at the two of them in confusion. She remembered clearly that Su Tian and Lu Hao seemed to be involved in an affair, and Bai Ji had told her personally at Su Tian's birthday party that they had broken up. But at the moment, they were acting like they were best friends again? Bai Ji looked indifferent. They made up again. "Wang Jiao? Can you make up with your boyfriend cheating on you and your best friend?" She has seen the 2 best friends become friends again, but she has never seen a man that they can share. Wang Jiao is still in a state of shock. Su Da's daughter, however, takes the initiative to stick even closer to Bai Ji. Her face, which could be compared to a celebrity's, is full of provocation and contempt as she looks at her. It is obvious that the 2 of them have not been affected by the Lu Hao incident in the slightest. "Ji and I are the best in the world, what is Lu Hao? How could there be anything as important as sisters? Right, Ji? Bai Ji. After saying that, Su Tian, with a sweet face, took Bai Ji and walked towards their own dormitory, leaving Wang Jiao alone. Wang Jiao gritted her teeth and suddenly shouted at Bai Ji's back, "Bai Ji, in fact, you don't like Lu Hao at all, right? Then what are you doing with him, playing with him?" Wang Jiao's voice was not that loud. In the corridor, many girls who passed by heard it and looked at them. Bai Ji's steps stopped. Suddenly, she turned her head and looked at Wang Jiao with a cold smile. "Even if I really want to play with him, so what? Isn't he the noble and kind son of the Lu family, a benevolent doctor? Isn't a pair of shoes more important than my father's life? Isn't he compassionate? Then you have to play with your palm-sized heart and flesh. Only in this way can you see who can outplay the other." Wang Jiao glared at her angrily. "Bai Ji, I really didn't think you were this kind of person. You're really despicable. Despicable." Su Tian, who was over 1.7 meters tall and wearing high heels, had a temper and directly scolded her. "I'm warning you, Wang Jiao, if you like Lu Hao, go after him yourself. Ji didn't call the police and send you to the police station only because you're still in school. If you dare to scold Ji again, I'll tear your mouth apart." Wang Jiao stood still and sarcastically said, "Plastic sisterhood, I thought it was so touching. It's just bullying Lu Hao because he's honest and you think it's funny, right? I wish you two would fight over men until you're bloody and sooner or later you'll crash and burn." Bai Ji rolled her eyes and said, "Before wishing someone else luck, Don't forget to go to the office tomorrow and get yourself a punishment. You. Wang Jiao was so angry she could spit blood. Baiji raised her eyebrows and shook the Wenxin manuscript in her hand at her, before turning her head away with a cold face the next second. Chapter 19 Don't shout. The next morning. Before returning the Wenxin manuscript to Zhou Cong's assistant, Baiji took a picture of it on purpose. This photo was taken for Wang Jiao. Just an hour ago, Wang Jiao went to Zhang Quanshui to turn herself in. Baiji was also there and saw her explain the whole thing. The school took the matter very seriously and gave Wang Jiao a severe punishment. Baiji kept her word and was prepared to clear Wang Jiao's name of Luo Fei's misunderstanding. This matter had nothing to do with Wang Jiao in the first place. She wanted to take revenge herself. After leaving this picture, Baiji prepared to send a message to Luo Fei using an anonymous account. This morning, Su Tian and Baiji did not have any classes, and they were the only two people in the dormitory. Suddenly, Su Tian, who was originally lying in bed playing with her phone in the next bunk, swore. Damn it, it's Luo Fei again. What did she do now? Su Tian flipped her hand and turned to an internal chat log from the Su group. No one knows who first leaked this chat log. Baiji almost vomited when she saw the bloody pictures in it. What's going on? Baiji asked. Su Tian said coldly, Lofi did it. She fired her assistant last night. That person had a wife and children to support, and his wife was hanging on by a thread thanks to expensive imported medicine. He was carrying a heavy mortgage and suffering from severe anxiety. Lofi fired the person without warning, driving them to their death. Now something's happened. The person jumped off the roof of the headquarters building and killed themselves. Lofi is really fucking evil. It's a human life. Baiji wondered if Luo Fei was taking out his anger on his assistant because things weren't going well for him at Jokongi's. Baiji sat at her desk and combed her hair. Her black hair was already very soft, but she combed it anyway. She looked at herself in the mirror with cold eyes. Back then, her father had also fallen off a construction site because Luo Fei had insisted on cutting corners to save costs. She thought about her father and the assistant, continued combing her hair in silence, probably hundreds of times. In the end, with an expressionless face, she sent a few text messages to Luo Fei with an anonymous number. Auntie Luo, I heard that you forced another person to commit suicide. I'm not Wang Jiao at all, and I only found out that I had taken revenge on the wrong person after I had cheated my cousin. Aren't you angry? How many more innocent people do you have to harm before you can find me? And how many Qianshan are there around you to take the blame for you? Luo Fei, it seems that the older you get, the less clever you are than when you were young. After saying that, Baiji sent a photo of Wenxin manuscript with Zhou Cong's name written on it to prove himself. The words not young and clever hit home, poking Luo Fei at the points she cared about the most. Sure enough, Luo Fei was so angry when she saw those text messages that her lungs almost exploded. Lu Fei really didn't expect that a little tramp would have been so brazen in front of her for so long. She also didn't expect that the assistant would jump off a building just because she said so. Now the company is in a mess, and she can only order to block this news and then privately find out who else was at Su Tian's birthday party that night. This is a rare night when Lu Fei goes on a date with Zhou Cong. She can't hold back anymore, and shows Zhou Cong the provocative text messages one by one. Zongya, is this your book? Look at this little girl provoking me endlessly. Who is she? Zhou Zong also knew Luo Fei's tactics against women, so he just glanced at it indifferently, the daughter of a business partner, young and not very understanding. Which business partner's daughter is so inconsiderate? Do I know this person? Zhou Zong also just glanced at her indifferently, and Luo Fei was quiet. She knew that she had upset him again. The atmosphere at the table turned cold. Luo Fei didn't want to spoil this rare date, so she immediately changed the subject. I met her once, but I didn't think she looked like the daughter of any rich family. After all, the clothes she was wearing couldn't be described as ordinary, but rather cheap and plastic. Although she was very upset, she thought about how last night Zhou Congyi had also proposed that they could get married right away, and she felt that she had to remain calm at this critical moment. Forget it, I'd better not take her seriously. What kind of splash can an ordinary girl make? Don't you agree, Congyi? Zhou Congyi took a sip of red wine and did not deny her words, but neither did he admit them. Lofi smiled charmingly at him and ordered another bottle of champagne from the waiter. When the waiter handed over the champagne, Luo Fei noticed that the waiter was very handsome. She began to mutter, such a handsome guy doesn't look like a waiter at all. At this time, Zhou Kangyi said in an ambiguous tone, judging people by appearances is your biggest weakness, Luo Fei. Luo Fei had also drunk a little wine at this time, and her mind was already a little dull. Really? She didn't realize that Zhou Kangyi's words contained a double entendre. It was just that in such a candlelit and romantic setting, she was completely infatuated with Zhou Kangyi's good looks and charisma. She gave a flirtatious smile and said, then just consider me a person who judges a book by its cover, Kangyi. I was very impressed by you from the moment I first saw you. You don't judge a book by its cover, and you're not a womanizer, unlike the others. You're hundreds of times better than those old men I used to deal with. Those men, when they saw her, all wanted to jump her. Only Zhou Kangyi, no matter how she hinted, seemed to be uninterested. Although she occasionally felt a sense of loss, a man like him, who kept himself pure, was even more able to arouse her desire to conquer. But the man opposite still looked cool and indifferent. He put down his glass and said in a detached tone, I told you, Luo Fei, judging people by appearances is your biggest weakness. He emphasized it again, referring to the fact that he kept himself pure. He is not entirely without lust. It's just that the threshold for wanting to enter his eyes will be very high. At present, only one person can do it. Lofi, who is already completely immersed in the halo of alcohol and happiness, does not feel anything wrong. Over there, Zhou Kangyi's phone vibrated again, an email. Multinational companies are used to communicating matters of work by email, and Zhou Kangyi routinely opens it to check. He clicked on the email titled New Products of the Quarter. And the next second, a photo of a young girl in a suspender belt in the bathroom of her dormitory popped up. In the photo, Baiji's hair was half wet, and she was sometimes hugging her chest, sometimes leaning against the shower, sometimes biting a candy. The only thing that remained unchanged was her eyes, which kept staring straight at the camera, full of sex/suggestion. Zhou Kangyi only looked at it for a few seconds before she sent a text message over. Baiji, these are all the photos that Sweetie took for me tonight. Uncle Zhou, do you think they look good? Zhou Kangyi even wondered if this bad girl knew that he was currently dating Luo Fei and deliberately sent these photos. Across the table, Luo Fei was carefully cutting the foie gras. He never looked up. The man replied to the other end of the text with 4 words. Not for you. After sending it, he put away his phone. In his mind, a normal person who had their photo taken should be ashamed after being criticized so bluntly and would stop messing around. But what he didn't expect was that almost immediately, his phone vibrated again. She had taken a new photo and sent it. Is this suitable? Zhou Tsong didn't deliberately click on it, and the photo loaded directly in a small picture. It wasn't taken by him, and it was a very standard selfie of her facing the camera sideways. The only difference was that she was naked in the photo. Although the important parts were covered by her arms, the degree of exposure could still be described as unbearable. Zhou Tsong also looked very embarrassed, and he deleted the photo with the back of his hand. Lofi over there also realized that he seemed to have been looking at his phone the whole time. Kangyi, is there something wrong with the company? The man didn't answer, and he didn't bother to lie. He said indifferently, some news. Then you go back to your messages first, don't worry about me. Lofi felt that it was normal for a solid entrepreneur like Zhou Kangyi to be busy. As long as he can take over the Zhou family, it's fine if he's a little busy and neglects her a little. After all, there's no such thing as perfection in life, and it would be truly terrifying if a man wasn't busy. Lu Fei really didn't bother and started eating alone. Over there, facing the increasingly arrogant Baiji, the man's desire to win was completely aroused. Why hide the nude photos? Like a seasoned lover, he kept stepping on the bottom line of her pride and self-respect, waiting for her to give in and show her weakness. Sure enough, this time, the girl no longer dared to post those kinds of photos. Instead, she sent a text message back. You have to explore it for yourself to find out more, right? Zhou Kangyi had deep wrinkles between his eyebrows. Don't yell. Baiji, I'm not yelling. If I were to yell, I would of course whisper it in your ear. Zhou Kangyi. Ah. Chapter 20 Go ice skating with me. Zhou Kangyi's current expression cannot be described as difficult to look at. He did intend to scare this presumptuous girl away with his strength and intimidation, but who knew that she would now become more and more aggressive, even going so far as to seduce him. Do you want to be blocked again? After he said that, the commotion died down. Baiji didn't send any new messages afterwards. It was already 9:30 p.m. when Zhou Kangyi and Luo Fei finished eating. Luo Fei had had a little wine and was braver than usual. Kangi, it seems like the weather forecast is for heavy rain tonight. There are a few overpasses in Shishu that fill with water during heavy rain every year. To be safe, why don't we stay at a hotel tonight? Since we can't stay at the villa, can we at least stay together? Luo Fei wanted to see what kind of excuse he could come up with this time. Zhou Kangi also glanced at the sky. The moon was hidden in the dark clouds, and it really looked like it was about to pour. He was fully aware and knew Luo Fei's little game, but he didn't refuse, and there was no need to. Zhou Tsong also had his assistant book a room, naturally the newest and most luxurious 5-star hotel in Jingbei City. Lu Fei felt so happy that it was hard to believe. It wasn't until they reached the door to the room that she realized that Zhou Tsong had also had his assistant book a presidential suite. It was very luxurious indeed. The cheapest room in this hotel costs more than 4,000 yuan a night, and a suite like this would cost at least 6 figures a night. But Lu Fei was still very disappointed. Because the suite is more than 300 square meters and has more than one room, not to mention that Zhou Tsong is clearly not planning to sleep in the same room as her, even if it is 2 separate rooms, with a living room and a parlor in between, separated by a distance of several dozen meters, she even doubts that he would hear her if she shouted at him. Lu Fei looked at the room and her beautiful dreams were suddenly interrupted. The man over there just looked cold. I have a meeting in the morning, so I won't disturb you while you rest. Lu Fei could only reluctantly say okay. She watched as the man closed the door and went back to his own bedroom, and for a moment she couldn't tell if their relationship had taken a step forward or backward. Bai Ji found out about their hotel room that afternoon. It was a coincidence that they had just checked out when she received a notice from the hotel that she could start working in the guest room department. She had sent her resume before Wei Li's surgery. Since Wei Li had just had surgery and had a lot of expenses for follow-up maintenance and reviews, Bai Ji found a part-time job in addition to her studies. The hotel pays well and the working hours are relatively regular. It was Su Tian who helped her get the job through her connections. However, after she started, Bai Ji could only start from the logistics of the guest rooms, and only after she became familiar with the work could she go to the front desk where the salary was higher. On her first day of work, the head waiter asked her to first familiarize herself with the differences between the various room types and the personal preferences of the VLP guests. When she arrived at the presidential suite, Bai Ji saw that the name of the person who checked in last night was written in bold, Zhou Kangi. The head waitress didn't notice the girl's eyes darken as she carefully introduced her. You see, this is last night's guest, Mr. Zhou, who is also a big customer of our hotel. This Luo Fei is the person who checked in with him. We will record the preferences of these two people in the hotel's back-end records, and we will be ready in advance the next time they come. For example, Mr. Zhou has high security requirements, and he needs the guards to check the room in advance and stand guard before he checks in. Miss Luo, on the other hand, requires 24-hour constant oxygen, temperature and humidity control, and the bedding and bathtub must. Bai Ji obediently agreed. No one knew what she was thinking. When the maid entered the suite to start cleaning, Bai Ji suddenly went into the bathroom without saying a word, and started cleaning the trash. This move surprised the head maid. She had heard that this young girl was also recommended by an acquaintance. The hotel had previously had the sons and daughters of several shareholders who majored in hotel management come here to gain internship experience. It was not to find a job, but to become a master. Especially when she saw Bai Ji's clean and slender appearance, the head waiter didn't believe she was the type of person who would do manual labor seriously. It wasn't until she saw that her first destination was the toilet, which no one wanted to go to, that the head waiter let out a sigh of relief. It seems that she is a good child who is not afraid of getting dirty or tired, and is not pretending to be good. The head waiter nodded with satisfaction. Then you guys go ahead and I'll go check out the rest of the place. Okay, go ahead, I'll take care of this. The ant with the white branch is very hardworking and has a good attitude. She is also very responsible and attentive when teaching things. Only Bai Ji knows that she came to the bathroom for something else. She just wanted to know if they had sex last night. In theory, this is not within the scope of her revenge plan, but for some reason, she subconsciously wanted to know if Zhou Tsong and Luo Fei could really go through with it. Fortunately, there were no suspicious items in the trash cans in any of the bathrooms. From the bed to the carpet in the living room and the sofa, there was not a trace, not even a single hair, in those places where it was easy to get intimate. If it weren't for the creases on each of the two beds, you couldn't tell that someone had stayed in this room last night. It was more or less what she had guessed. Zhou Tsong and Luo Fei were just in a contractual marriage, and the two of them probably didn't even have much to talk about when they were together. Bai Ji's heart, which had been hanging in the balance, settled a little. It was like a drowning man who had finally grasped a piece of driftwood in the dark, boundless ocean. After seeing their hotel room records, Baishi felt like she had found a way to make her move, and she intensified her advances on Joe Kongi. She decided that from now on, she could no longer just flirt with him in such a crude and sexually suggestive way. Instead, she would attack his heart. Joe Kongi received a text message from Baishi right after the meeting. A rare, relatively normal text message. Uncle Joe, would you like to come ice skating with me after work today? It's at the ice rink in the mall downstairs from your office, it's really close. I miss you. Joe Kongi glanced at the message and didn't reply. Of course he wasn't going to go. The date of his wedding to Luo Fei was drawing near, and they were going to book the wedding dress that Wednesday. The man didn't take the two messages seriously. As a result, that afternoon, Baishi posted the video of Qian Shan hitting people and looking down on the poor in the hospital on Weibo. The wording was quite subtle, and she was a top student in the top 2 Chinese departments in the country, so it was very easy for her to incite online public opinion to sympathize. The video was reposted online tens of thousands of times that afternoon. Netizens were outraged. Holy shit, who is this in the video, so arrogant? Which hospital is this? Did they kick someone out before they were even well enough to recover? Sounds like someone from Jingbei, a big city, what a big shame. An uproar has already broken out on the internet. Joe's public relations department has issued an emergency response plan. The assistant walks up to Joe Kongi's office door, ready to submit a plan for him to respond to the public opinion. But he finds that the president has long since left the office. The shopping mall downstairs. As the evening approaches, there are some mothers with young children and college students out for fun. The man in the black suit walks expressionlessly through the noisy crowd. Finally, he stops outside the glass of the ice skating rink. There were not many people in the ice skating rink, and at a glance, one could see a young and beautiful girl in the middle. Baishi was wearing a pink flannelette short skirt, the color was very tender, and her slender legs were covered in a layer of white stockings. Her movements on the ice skating rink were not very familiar, and she even seemed to be having a hard time walking on the ice, as if she was going to fall over at any moment. This made people instinctively want to go up to her and give her a hand. Jotsong also pursed his thin lips, and his black eyes narrowed slightly. It was as if she had just come from the glacier, with the danger of the black fog and the coldness of the blue ice, just standing there quietly. Until he saw someone he knew very well. Lu Hao was wearing skates and chasing after Baishi in the ice rink. He reached out and held her waist, looking at her with adoring eyes. Chapter 21 Glass Lipstick. On the other side. Lu Fei, who was caught up in the scandal of forcing an employee to jump off a building, had never stopped searching for the girl who had provoked her. Her new assistant gave her a long list. Lu Fei, the names of everyone who attended the lady's birthday banquet that night are here. According to my investigation over the past few days, one person is highly suspicious. Who? The new assistant had studied detective work in North America before and was poached by Lu Fei at a great price. The other person held up a finger and pressed it against the black hair and blank expression of Baishi's 1-inch photo. It was her. For some reason, when Luo Fei saw Baishi's face, her heart inexplicably trembled, and a feeling of certainty suddenly arose. The girl in the photo was cold and arrogant, and you couldn't tell from her appearance whether she was the same person as the girl wearing a mask that day. But her intuition told her that they looked alike. It's too similar. Lofi's current mood can be described as wanting to devour her flesh and blood. Okay, I got it. The new assistant is very efficient. Seeing the hatred in her eyes overflowing, she said lightly, she is now skating at the ice rink in the shopping mall downstairs from the Zhou headquarters building. As far as I know, President Zhou just left the office 10 minutes ago and went to the mall. The implication is obvious. If you want to catch the scene, now is the perfect time. Lu Fei glanced out the window. It was just after dusk in Jingbei, and the evening air was beginning to cool. The woman was playing with the lipstick in her hand, and a sense of ruthlessness and hostility was oozing from every pore. She gave a hideous smile and spat out one word, go. Baishi deliberately asked Lu Hao to come here to skate. She also deliberately wanted Jotsong to see how she looked with Lu Hao. They rented a couple's costume, hers pink, his sky blue, even the skates they wore were the same. It was so sweet, it looked like they were in a school idol drama. Baishi wasn't very good at skating, so Lu Hao let her. In order to maintain her balance, the two bodies inevitably pressed close together at times. Her skirt was short, occasionally revealing her thighs wrapped in white stockings. Lu Hao's handsome face had long since turned red as if it could drip blood. The ice rink was filled with the occasional crisp and pleasant laughter of young girls. At one moment, she saw the figure of a man in a suit outside the rink. She raised the corners of her lips and said to Lu Hao, I'm thirsty, I want milk tea. Lu Hao, of course, was at her beck and call. Sure, which one do you want, and what flavor? Bai Ji deliberately reported the name of the milk tea shop that was the farthest from the ice rink in the mall. It was on the 5th floor, and it would take at least 20 minutes to get there and back. Lu Hao hurriedly went. As soon as Lu Hao left, the girl turned to look at Zhou Kangyi. She looked at him for a few seconds, then suddenly smiled sweetly, swung her legs, and slid over to where he was standing. Zhou Kangyi watched her slide towards him expressionlessly. When Bai Ji stopped, there was only a sheet of glass between them. Bai Ji put both hands on the railing at the edge of the rink, and the next second, blatantly, she stuck out her lips and left a pink lipstick mark on the glass directly in front of Zhou Kangyi. She kissed him through the glass. The lipstick mark on the glass was plump in shape, with a slit in the middle. It was so clear that you could see the direction of the lipstick lines. Although there weren't many people around the skating rink at the moment, there were still some. Anyone who looked over could see that the girl who had just been skating with her boyfriend had turned her head to kiss another man. Zhou Tsong also remained silent, looking at her without emotion. A shape like that stood between the man and the young girl. It was as erotic as it could get, and she smiled even more brightly. With her hands on the railing, Bai Ji tilted her head from side to side, staring at him, her skirt floating gently. There was no trace of the fear she had shown him at the clinic that day. Zhou Tsong's breathing also quickened, and the shadows under his eyes grew deeper. After a long while, he lifted his finger and pointed at the lipstick stain on the front of her head. He told her to wipe it off. Neither of them opened their mouths to say a word, communicating with gestures the entire time through the glass. Zhou Tsong was also 2 heads taller than her, and their body types were very different. Holding his arms, he looked like a teacher pointing. Bai Ji, on the other hand, after pouting in dissatisfaction, carefully used the cuff of her sleeve to start wiping the lipstick mark off the glass, using the ice skates on the soles of her shoes. She looked completely like an ignorant little girl. Only Zhou Tsongja himself knew how uncontrollably she made him bleed when she kissed him on the glass, looked at her delicate face, and the moment her face was squeezed by the glass, he wanted to rush in and strangle her, to make this demon, who kept pushing his desire to the breaking point, submit to him, to make her cry, to make her mess up, to taste her tears, to hear her plead. To trap her in his icy prison. Never to let her out. Never to let her go. Forever, she would be his. Good girl. Over there, Bai Ji was concentrating on wiping off the lipstick, pretending not to notice the way Zhou Kangyi was looking at her. Suddenly, the ice skate under her feet loses its balance and she falls towards the ground. The man instinctively reaches out his right hand, but she is on the other side of the glass, and the man's hand is halfway up when it is timely retracted. In its place is the hand of the young man on the other side of the glass. Lu Hao is holding a cup of taro bubble milk tea in his left hand, and he is embracing the unsteady Bai Ji with his right arm. He didn't know when he had returned, but Bai Ji was almost completely snuggled in his arms. Lu Hao blushed and asked, "You didn't twist your ankle, did you, Ji?" After saying that, he looked up and saw the man outside the glass, a little surprised. Teacher Zhou? But soon, he saw the figure of another person behind Zhou Kangyi. Lu Hao muttered, "Auntie Luo." Luo Fei and Lu Hao had just arrived. They hadn't seen the earlier scene. What they saw was just an elegant and noble-looking man standing outside the rink, while inside the rink, there was a young boy and girl dressed in matching outfits. Luo Fei recognized Bai Ji at a glance, and Bai Ji looked no different from the photo. Bai Ji felt her staring at her, but she pretended not to see them as she leaned in to drink the milk tea in Lu Hao's hands. She was obedient in Lu Hao's arms like a cat, as if there were no problems at all. Lu Fei also knew Lu Hao. The only son of the Lu family, it turned out that Kangyi had also tutored him for a few years. Lu Hao was the same age as Zhou Zai, Zhou Tsong's nephew who was studying in the United States, and the two families were on good terms, so he was almost like a half-nephew. Lu Fei just looked at Bai Ji for a second without being noticed, and then said to Zhou Tsong, "Kangyi, did you come to watch Hao skate?" "Ah." The man's response was very indifferent. Lu Fei, "So, is this his girlfriend?" Zhou Tsong also remained expressionless, unobtrusive, and said another "ah." Lu Fei finally let out a sigh of relief. But over there, Bai Ji found it very interesting. She looked blatantly at Zhou Tsong and Lu Fei, as if the next second, she was going to do something shocking. Chapter 22 Locked. Although when looking at the photo, Baiji felt that she looked a lot like the girl who had provoked her the other day, now that she had met the real person, she didn't feel that similar anymore. The girl in front of her looked very well behaved, and she was wearing a baby pink velvet ice skating skirt and top. Her neckline was superior, like that of a white swan. Where was there any trace of a poor student? Especially when standing next to Lu Hao, the two of them looked so perfect together, she would believe they were the daughters of some wealthy family. She doesn't look like the kind of girl who would send such a mean text. It's probably just another mistake by the assistant. Lu Fei didn't want to think about it. Over there, Lu Hao used his phone to call Zhou Kangyi, because it was hard to hear over the glass. "Teacher Zhou, why are you here?" Zhou Kangyi naturally wouldn't say that he was here to talk to Baiji about the video, and said lightly, "The person in charge of the mall said they saw you over here." Oh. Lu Hao has always been grateful to Zhou Kangyi. Without Mr. Zhou, he would not have been able to rank first in the country in the cultural subjects of the art exam. Lu Hao also waved to Luo Fei to say hello. "Are you here shopping with Auntie Luo?" Zhou Kangyi saw that when Lu Hao asked this question, the girl next to him glanced at him. Well. Zhou Kangyi looked at Baiji and added that they could just pick out the wedding rings to be used at the wedding. Lu Fei was of course very excited to hear about the wedding rings. Although she had already been married, Su Jianxiong had bought her everything, including a pair of diamond rings with pigeon eggs for the wedding, but what Zhou Kangyi bought was still different. Zhou Kangyi was young and handsome, and no woman could resist. Marrying him was the only way to truly feel like getting married. Even if it was just for the sake of preparing the wedding rings, Lu Fei was very satisfied. Lu Fei couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and smile, and she deliberately smiled at Baiji in a friendly manner. Baiji smiled back, but deep down, dark emotions were about to gush out like splashed ink. It wasn't long before Zhou Tsong and Luo Fei walked side by side. Baiji looked at their backs, her expression not good. Lu Hao seemed to be still immersed in the romance of her marriage fantasy, not noticing her change in mood. He took her hand and said with full anticipation, "Ji, do you want to go look at the wedding rings later?" Baiji was not interested. "No, we're not getting married. It's okay to look, and if you like one, you can buy a pair as a token of love between boyfriends and girlfriends. I'll buy it for you. Do you like Cartier or Tiffany? Or do you think it's tacky? How about we buy it from Shangpin?" Baiji was impatient. She was not interested in such things at all. Apart from the brand premium, these things were just worthless pieces of scrap metal in her eyes. "Baiji, I'm tired and don't want to waste energy on something uncertain. What's more, Lu Hao, have you forgotten that I'm a poor student on a grant? I don't know any of those brands you mentioned." After Baiji finished speaking, she took her milk tea and went into the women's dressing room alone. Lu Hao was the only one standing still. He hated himself for what he had just said. How could he say such stupid things? First floor of the mall. While Zhou Tsong was also selecting a pair of wedding rings, a text like this was sent from the women's changing room downstairs to the man's phone in the global top luxury jewelry VLP room. "Uncle Joe just now looked at my lip print as if he wanted to kill me." She was like a cat with its tail stepped on, as text messages came in one after the other in retaliation. "If Uncle Joe buys a pair of wedding rings with her, I will post the video with the picture version online. I will also tell everyone about your reaction to me. I'll tell everyone. You're mine, and I'll take your finger. You can't wear a pair of rings with someone else's initials on them, or else there'll be serious consequences." While Zhou Tsong was receiving these text messages, Luo Fei was trying on this season's high-end jewelry necklaces in front of another mirror not far away. On his side, there was a royal red velvet tray in front of him, with various platinum, rose gold, and diamond jewelry rings on it. The saleswoman, wearing black gloves, introduced to him the design ideas and meanings of each series one by one. He didn't care, didn't ask questions, and didn't respond. In the end, he and Luo Fei decided on a signature series that many newlyweds like to wear, and they bought the full diamond version. The saleswoman, of course, helped them wrap it up with honeyed words, and the box was a pear, with a box of preserved flowers next to it to symbolize blessings of love. It looked like a pair in love for a long time. However, just like Lofi, who was only interested in trying on necklaces, Zhou Tsong also completely ignored the saleswoman's introduction when choosing a wedding ring. Instead, his mind was filled with the hand that Lu Hao had just hugged her with. His mind was filled with it. No man would have expected that scene to upset him so much. So, almost subconsciously, he took a photo of the table of items. He sent it to Baiji. It's already been bought. Bai Ji was very angry after seeing this picture. Uncle Joe, you disobeyed me, so I'm going to punish you. What kind of punishment? It's a very serious and terrible punishment. Over there, Luo Fei was still lingering over the luxury jewelry, trying on set after set. 10 carats of sapphires, 20 million yuan, it's so beautiful. Even Su Jinxiong had never bought her such extravagant things before, and she was calculating that next time she would have to beg Zhou Kangyi to buy her a set out of the kindness of his heart. While she was thinking about how to ask, Zhou Tsong also casually replied 2 words to Bai Ji's very serious and terrible punishment. Try it. Bai Ji, first, I want to take back the collar I gave Uncle Joe. Is this terrible? Since Uncle Joe is not afraid, I will go get it from you tonight. Bai Ji attacked step by step. The man looked like he was smiling. But the next second, a sentence cut off all her thoughts. It's already been thrown away. Bai Ji raised an eyebrow. She slowly put away her phone and didn't reply. If she wasn't going to the villa, she wasn't going. There were so many places to pick up men, hotels, cars, fun places, why did it have to be at his place? What she didn't know was that after Zhou Kangyi returned to the villa, the first thing he did was go into the bathroom upstairs. Zhou Kangyi usually went to the study room first after returning home, but today, he just turned on the shower and showered under the sound of the rushing water. The water droplets spread across the glass, outlining an ambiguous atmosphere. The water seemed to be concealing something, and it was possible to hear intermittently the man's suppressed and repressed breathing. After a while, the shower and the water stopped, and Zhou Kangyi's entire body was clean, and his appearance was meticulously groomed. The man returned to his usual cold and aloof appearance, from his hair to his eyes. Then, slowly, he picked up the razor and began shaving in the mirror. With a click, his slender fingers firmly locked the drawer with the first compartment containing her apron and note. He would not pick it up again, but neither would he discard it. Chapter 23 for you. After returning from the ice rink, Luo Fei asked her assistant to re-examine the new suspect. She didn't believe that Bai Ji was the girl at the hotel that day. However, the assistant there said, Bai Ji is not some rich girl's daughter, she even works part-time at the Bali Hotel and is a poor student receiving financial aid from the normal university. This was something Luo Fei hadn't thought of. But she quickly said, you just need to meet her in person to know that it's impossible. She's very obedient and has a good relationship with Lu Hao. When they greeted each other at the ice rink, Lu Hao's arm was around her waist the whole time. Song is also so possessive, so how could he tolerate someone else holding him like that? It's impossible no matter how you think about it. But President Luo's assistant still wanted to remind her not to take it lightly, but at this moment, Luo Fei suddenly smiled as she sat on the desk. She interrupted him. Lu Fei said to herself, Lu Hao is such a silly, adorable boy. How could his parents possibly agree to a girl in his condition? And yet he's fallen for her. It's fine to play around and sleep together, isn't it? Lu Fei asked her assistant, who was at a loss for words. Since she didn't suspect a thing, the assistant couldn't say anything. After all, her last assistant had been driven to jump to his death by her. The assistant agreed and left the office respectfully. Lu Fei laughed to herself as she continued to cross her legs and twirl her pen. Suddenly, she thought of something. She called Zhou Kangyi, Kangyi, I just tried on wedding dresses and sent you the photos. Which one do you think looks better? As long as you like it. A man like Zhou Kangyi, who doesn't love her, would never accompany her to look at wedding dresses. The so-called wedding is just a place for social activities for people in the same circle, just going through the motions. She knows her place, and takes this opportunity to test the waters. I heard that Lu Hao's girlfriend works at the Bali Hotel, and we didn't even know it last time we stayed there. The steakhouse at the Bali Hotel is very good, shall we go for steak tonight? I'm a bit busy tonight. Zhou Tsong also tried to sound as polite as possible. But a date for dinner was fundamentally impossible. The last time they had dinner together had been the most he had done to be polite before the wedding. Lu Fei was not surprised. Okay, Kangyi, if you're busy, I won't bother you. Do you think it's appropriate for me to invite Hao Hao to go there for a meal? As the future mother-in-law, I should invite him to dinner, right? You decide. I'll ask him then. Luo Fei looked very happy. I thought if I got along with Hao Hao first, it would be easier for Ziyi to get along with me when she returned from the United States in the future. After all, it wouldn't be as difficult as getting along with Su Jianxiong's ill-mannered daughter. When mentioning Su Tian, Luo Fei's tone was contemptuous. Zhou Kangyi, however, frowned over there. Zui Zhou was no better to get along with than Sweet Sue. In a word, she was rejecting the comments that Luffy had just made about everyone. But the next sentence even more pointedly revealed her true identity. Luffy, our marriage is just an agreement, so you don't need to worry about getting along with my family, and they won't mind. What she meant was that neither Ziyue Zhou nor the rest of the Zhou family would care about her attitude at all. To put it bluntly, they simply didn't consider her one of their own. How could Luo Fei not understand? Her smile on her face was a little dry, but in the end, she hung up the phone very peacefully. She then contacted Lu Hao. Although Lu Hao was surprised that Luo Fei would contact her, out of respect for Zhou Kangyi, she gladly agreed to meet with Luo Fei. The two of them made an appointment at a high-class restaurant on the top floor of a hotel. Luo Fei ordered a 4,000-odd yuan wagyu beef meal, which would cost at least 10,000 to 20,000 yuan for the whole meal. Sitting by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the night view of Jingbei City, a waiter from the restaurant soon recognized the heroine as the recently rumored in the news about to get married and causing a sensation, the wealthy widow and celebrity, Luo Fei. Bai Ji was resting in the workroom of her guest room when she heard two employees from the catering department discussing this matter as they pushed their food trolleys down the corridor. I heard my colleague from the Western restaurant say, Luo Fei is here. That super celebrity who inherited billions after her husband died. Oh my god, really? Yes, and she was sitting opposite a super handsome guy who looked young and didn't seem to be her fiancé. My colleague even took a photo, so don't tell anyone. Bai Ji was intrigued. She pushed open the door to her workroom and walked out, looking gently and harmlessly at the two members of the catering department. I'm the new intern in the housekeeping department, let me help you push the trolley. Food and beverage and housekeeping are two of the most physically demanding departments. The two girls were of course grateful to see someone willing to help with the food deliveries. Trust and friendship were instantly established. Bai Ji, can I see the photo you just took? You've also heard about the recent marriage of a rich family, come and see if this guy is really her husband. Bai Ji pretended to be completely ignorant and went along for the ride. When she looked at the photo, she knew the boy in the denim jacket very well. Is that Zhou Kangyi? It's actually Lu Hao. This is really interesting. After delivering the dinner, Bai Ji was alone in the workroom and directly called Zhou Kangyi. She usually sends text messages most of the time, so this time, when she saw the caller ID of the number, the man looked at it for a few seconds before picking up. She didn't take the initiative to speak, letting him hear her barely audible breathing. He calmly and sternly called her name. Bai Ji. What kind of tricks are you planning to play this time? The young woman sat in the utility room and kicked her high heels against the cleaning pail. Why do you always think I'm playing tricks? Don't you suspect that your fiancé is cheating on you? The man laughed. You saw her having dinner with your boyfriend? Bai Ji didn't expect him to know everything. Pouting her lips, she looked at the closed door of the utility room. The black stockings under her work clothes kicked a few times against the high heels on her feet, half hanging on the instep. Yes, they are having dinner. I wonder if they will go to a hotel next. Uncle Zhou, do you want me to keep an eye on them for you? The man on the other end of the phone didn't say anything. A few seconds later, he said with interest. If they go to a hotel, are you still happy? Bai Ji smiles, yes, but Lu Hao doesn't like your fiancé's type. He likes the innocent and harmless type like me. Is it fun to toy with other people's feelings, Bai Ji? After all, she was Lu Hao's teacher, and he would never allow her to do whatever she wanted. But she would never take his teacher's tone, and said willfully, he knows I don't like him, and it's a mutual thing, so what can I do? But Uncle Zhou, I'm really angry when you say things like that. I'm obviously sincere with you. What if I put something in the food at Luffy's later, turn their room into a double room, and then yell cheating? Oh yes, Uncle Zhou, Auntie Luo definitely can't hold back when it comes to men. She has that addiction, you know? It must be exciting to send out some amazing photos before marriage. Zhou Tsong didn't say anything, but Bai Ji could feel that the atmosphere on the phone could already be described as terrifying. He didn't believe that a young girl like her could be so capable. After all, if he said the word, he could have the manager of the Bali Hotel fire Bai Ji and kick her out right now. But he knew how much she was willing to give up. If she couldn't drug him, she could still do 1,000 other crazy things. Sure enough, she provoked again. Uncle Zhou, I'll do anything to get you. Don't you believe me? After a long silence, the man said indifferently, go ahead, tell me what you want this time. Baiji's fingers twined around her hair as she said innocently, "The presidential suite you stayed in is vacant tonight. Uncle Joe, would you like to stay there again tonight?" Chapter 24. This time, she didn't bring any tricks. Her tone was innocent, really like a little girl who longed for the company of an adult. But how could he not know her tricks? She is now in the guest room department, and as long as she greets the lead worker, she can get a pass card. She might even come and sleep in his bed at night. Jotsong would not play along. "Do you know how much the presidential suite on the top floor of the Bali Hotel costs per night?" 888,000, Baiji answered like she was answering a math question. "How could I not know as an employee, Mr. Zhou? You know I have always studied hard and my grades are very good." A mess of titles came one after the other. The man laughed. "Our relationship is not yet such that I would pay for over 800,000 yuan just because you said so?" "You will pay," Baiji said, "because if you come over tonight, we can forget about the video. You are a businessman, you should know how good a deal this is, Uncle Zhou. Although I am a businessman, I never take advantage of my students. So no." When Baiji heard this, she really thought there was no hope. But his next sentence took her by surprise. "Zhou Kangyi, I can come over, but I just need you to stop sending me those kinds of photos in the future." "Okay, uncle, I promise. And I won't take any more photos like that either." She was so obedient and soft. "I won't take any more photos in the future." "Uncle Zhou, is there anything else you want to promise?" "Not for now." "Okay, I've written it all down. I won't send them to you and I won't take any more photos." She generously conceded. "But it's okay, she'll take it back somewhere else." On the other side of the hotel, Luo Fei and Lu Hao finished their meal and took the elevator down from the restaurant. The moment they got out of the elevator, they saw a very familiar figure walk into the elevator next door. Luo Fei frowned and asked Lu Hao, "Do you think that person looks like your teacher, Joe?" "What?" When Lu Hao curiously turned around, the gilded, jet-black elevator doors had already closed, and the two of them didn't get a good look at anything. Lu frowned and thought about it, but gave up the idea of chasing after them. If she really wanted to know if Jo Seon was also staying at the hotel, she could just ask the hotel staff and find out, so why rush up to them now and get upset? Lu shook her head and said to Lu Hao with a smile, "I must have been mistaken. Where are you going? Back to school or home?" Lu Hao politely said, "I'm going home, Auntie Lu." "Do you need a ride?" "I drove today." "Okay, I won't see you off. Take care on the way." "Okay, bye, Auntie Luo." Luo Fei felt that the title of auntie was a bit old-fashioned, but she thought it would be fine to wait until she and Joseon got married before Luo Hao changed his title. Thinking about this, she went happily to the outdoor parking lot to get the car. What she didn't know at all was that as she left the hotel, Joseon's elevator had just arrived at the top floor. The heavy suite door opened with a creak, and black handmade custom leather shoes stepped on the soft carpet. It was like opening a magic door. He presented an extremely restrained posture. It was as if he was already prepared to avoid, for example, the moment the door opened, some presumptuous person would directly pounce on him. He was already used to her sneak attacks like this, so as soon as he entered the room, he carefully checked every corner. After making sure there was no one around, he called the front desk again, hoping that only the room card in his hand could open the suite door and that he would not be disturbed by anyone. The front desk, of course, confirmed everything with great care and especially instructed that all room cards would be deactivated tonight and could not enter the presidential suite. After everything was ready, the man expressionlessly used the central control system to turn on classical music to relax. The gentle sound of violins intertwined with the most beautiful night view in the capital city. The room was cleaned meticulously and everything was of the highest standard of cleanliness. At this point, he walked over to the bed in the master bedroom. This was the suite he had stayed in the night he and Luo Fei had lived together. So he was still somewhat familiar with the place. However, when he came here today, he only glanced at the bed and felt that something was wrong. It was the color of the light. The bed, which was originally illuminated by a light that was precisely controlled to a certain warm white tone, for some reason tonight looked faintly gray. It was a very subtle difference, but he had still noticed it. The man in a suit stood by the bed and just looked at it for a few seconds. Then he reached out. Crash! The big hand with bulging veins lifted the quilt. Underneath the quilt, on the bedsheet, there was a sentence written densely in running script, cursive script, regular script, official script, and various other styles. Bai Shi is Zhou Kangyi's beloved cat. Bai Shi is Zhou Kangyi's beloved cat. Bai Ji is. It had been written thousands of times. The man stared at the words for a full minute, his emotions indescribable. At that moment, a pair of soft arms encircled him from behind like a ghost. Bai Ji was wearing the hotel's dark blue work uniform, with black stockings required by the hotel beneath the skirt that hugged her hips, looking mature and charming in a way that was completely different from her usual appearance. Her long, dark black hair was falling behind him. Uncle only forbids me from posting that kind of photo again, so I can still hug you like this, right? And I can still kiss you, and... Joe Kongi also remained in the same place without moving. He had checked that the room was unoccupied. Until he saw the curtains floating slightly outside. And the window that had just been opened, he understood. She had entered from here. Joe Kongi narrowed his eyes. So, you were standing outside the whole time? Yes. Bai Ji's voice and the corners of her eyes were tinged with endless grievance again. I stood for half an hour on the external air conditioner on the 66th floor, waiting for you, and my legs went numb. What's the point? Joe Kongi's voice was very dark and deep. Of course it's for you, Uncle Joe. I told you, I want to be slept with by you. The next second, Bai Ji felt a dizzying spin. She didn't expect to be picked up by him, and the speed was so fast that she couldn't breathe. The arm around her waist also squeezed her painfully. For safety reasons, the windows in high-rise hotel rooms cannot be opened fully, and they are bottom-hung windows. She was also thin enough to fit into children's clothing before she could climb in through such a narrow place. At the moment, the muscular man held her tightly against the window, with both hands pressed against the glass. He was holding on for dear life. Bai Ji was close to him. She saw a faint trace of madness in the eyes of this calm and self-possessed man. You really want to sleep with me? You're willing to risk your life? She gritted her teeth and said calmly, I already told you, I'll do anything for you. Oh, maybe I missed a word, I need to out of sleep. Jotsong also clasped his hands tighter and took a step forward. With his other hand, he began to touch her jacket. Tell me, where is the hidden camera? She smiled and said, I didn't bring it this time. Why? Isn't your goal to break up Lofi and me? I do want to break you up. But this is our first time, and I want to make a good impression on you. She is truly fearless, like a just-made-up goblin. Looking into his increasingly crazed eyes, his arrogant words continued, I'm sure you'll still come to me in the future. By then, it won't be too late for me to record it again. Before the words were finished, he suddenly attacked, like a beast occupying territory, and with incredible speed, he pressed down on her with a fierce kiss. Bai Ji's eyes widened, and she was completely unable to resist, allowing him to punish her without any trace of affection. His kiss was not romantic in the least, but was instead brutal and domineering, as if purely intended to make her afraid and make her retreat. She frowned in pain until her lips overflowed with the smell of blood. Only then did he let go, whispering in her ear, if I never intend to separate from her, would you still do it? Chapter 25 My righteous way is for you. Not to feel aggrieved? Jotsong also asked her. Bai Ji clenched her fists and looked up at this man who was much older and bigger than her in both stature and age. The corners of the girl's mouth were stained with crimson blood. She stubbornly bit her lips. How could it be? She tightened her smile and said, I can do it with you until you want to separate from her. Jotsong also frowned. This expression of hers was exactly the same as the last time she said at the hospital that she could make him fall in love with her. It looked calm, but underneath the surface, she was on the verge of breaking down. In fact, the only time she really showed her weakness in front of him was that time at the clinic, and he only said he liked it the next time. A man in his 30s can see through a 20-year-old girl like no one else. After several encounters, Joe Kongi had long since figured out Bai Ji's weak points and breaking points. But this time he didn't spare her face. The man reached out his thumb and stroked the bloodstains at the corner of her mouth. So, what preparations did Miss Bai make in advance for tonight? You should know that talent and hard work are both necessary to make something like this pleasurable. Bai Ji suddenly laughed when she heard this, and boldly hooked her neck around Joe Kongi's. I'm an honors student, and I prefer to improvise. Saying this, she went to kiss his neck. However, he grabbed her nape of the neck with his free hand and put her back where she was originally leaning against the window. He scolded her like a cat, in a serious tone, stand properly. Bai Ji stood unsteadily, leaning against the windowsill like a limp snake. Uncle Joe, what are you playing at, punishing me with military drills? Zhou Kangyi had been placed in a military camp by the Zhou family to be trained for a period of time before reaching adulthood, so both his figure and bearing had a kind of uprightness and righteousness that ordinary men did not have. Bai Ji knew from the first moment she saw Zhou Kangyi that the man had been in the military. "You should be glad that I'm not your university military training instructor, otherwise you, a hypocritical good student, would be physically punished by me until you cry." Bai Ji's pink lips flirted. "Wouldn't it be a treat to be physically punished by such a handsome instructor until you cry, as long as it's in bed?" Probably feeling safe, the girl's verbal abuse began again one after the other. In the course of this verbal sparring, the sexual tension between the man and woman that had been brewing in the air dissipated quite a bit, and it turned into a playful banter instead. Zhou Tsong also suddenly snorted. He tapped her chin with his finger. "See, I told you, it takes a bit of talent to do that. Rule number 1, men don't like women who talk too much in bed." Bai Ji narrowed her eyes. "So what do you like a lot of?" He didn't take the bait. "There are a lot of tutorials like this online." The girl pouted. "But Uncle Zhou, I don't have the money to buy a computer." His smile turned even colder, and he retreated completely, keeping his distance from her. "You're the one who's trying to seduce me, there's no reason for me to teach you." Bai Ji realized after seeing him walk away that there was no way she would get anywhere tonight. This dead old man is really cunning, leading her step by step into the ditch. She was so hot-headed that she just argued with him, forgetting about the main task. He had returned to his usual stern self. "If you leave now, I won't report you to Polygroup for trespassing." "You need this job, don't you?" Zhou Tsong also began to fix his cuffs, as if he were not the same person who had pressed her against the window and kissed her until she bled. Bai Ji really couldn't afford to lose this job. She gave a sly smile, then walked to the door and gave him the finger. "Uncle Zhou, for stealing a kiss from me today, I'll make you beg me to kiss you back on your knees." After saying that, she walked away haughtily. Even though she was the one being thrown out of the room, she didn't look the least bit embarrassed, her back straight. The next morning, Bai Ji had already returned to school and was preparing to go to class for morning study. Zhou Tsong, on the other hand, had called his assistant to the hotel. At 5 o'clock, the assistant thought something major had happened at the company. In the end, Zhou Kangyi asked him to deal with the bedsheets. The bedsheets, which were covered in Bai Ji's handwriting, saying that Zhou Kangyi loved cats, Zhou Kangyi did not hand over to the hotel housekeeping department for cleaning, nor did he report it to the hotel management. When the assistant saw the bed sheets, his eyes nearly fell to the ground. The boss and Bai Xiaoli were actually in that kind of relationship. He could not imagine that the cold-hearted CEO would actually be lying on a bed covered in Bai Xiaoli's handwriting. The assistant desperately pressed the pause button on the train of thoughts racing through her head. But it must have taken at least a few hours to write all this stuff, right? President Zhou is so perverted. Ms. Bai is at least a few years old, and instead of making good use of the beautiful spring night to do something adults like, he is forcing her to practice her handwriting here. Is this a punishment for her not coming home last time? The more the assistant thought about it, the more exciting it felt. When she pulled the bedsheet, she didn't know where to put her hands, and she only dared to squeeze the edges and corners. Her face felt like it was suffocating. Zhou Tsong also saw that the assistant's face was as green as spinach juice. After pausing in her work, she gave a light command. "Handle it neatly." "Yes, Mr. Zhou, I understand." Zhou Tsong also glanced over. The assistant immediately corrected herself. No, Mr. Zhou, what I meant was that I know that the sheets have to be clean so that no one can see them." "Oh, no. The more I explain, the worse it gets." The assistant was very rarely anxious. Over there, Zhou Tsong also quietly flipped through a page of information and said imperceptibly, "Check to see what time Bai Ji returned to school last night." "Oh, so the boss wasn't with Bai Ji last night?" "No. Wait. Isn't it even more suspicious if you didn't spend the night together?" The boss was so lonely that he wrote Bai Ji's name all over the sheets. The assistant looked like an old man from the subway, quickly rolled up the thing and didn't dare to look at it. He stuffed it into the trash can. Zhou Tsong also saw him like that and knew that the misunderstanding was getting deeper and deeper, and it was basically impossible to explain it completely. He could only pout his face, and the action of signing with the capacitive pen was even more forceful and rude. It was at this time that the girl's arrogant messages and pictures popped up again on Zhou Tsong's tablet full of financial statements. "Bai Ji, did Uncle Zhou sleep well last night, holding me in his arms?" Afterwards, he sent a photo of him lying in bed, hugging her. This level of photo editing, did he fail his computer exam? Bai Ji pouted with anger when she saw his reply. The photo was indeed edited, but she could not stand it when she was questioned about her grades, although she could admit that she was good at other things. She got full marks in programming classes at university, didn't she? Who edited their computer exam photos? By Xi. So, what do you think? Is my calligraphy good? I was the first in my elementary school in the city in hard pen calligraphy. I also won second prize in soft pen calligraphy. You should treasure that bedsheet. She completely disregarded his busy schedule and kept sending him spam text messages on this precious morning. Usually, the bosses of listed companies are afraid of wasting Zhou Song's time by sending him an email with a sentence of nonsense. However, Bai Ji, a poor female college student, did not understand anything at all. She was like a milk snake, winding around him, clinging to him. His tone became cold and hard. You should spend all this energy on the right path. My right path is you. At this, the man directly closed the work page and lectured her in the manner of someone in a high position. Do you know how much the sheets in the presidential suite of the Bali Hotel cost? A sentence of destruction of public property can not only get you fired, it can also get you sent to jail. You don't care about your own future, but you should also consider your mother's situation, shouldn't you? His words were a bit harsh, but that was because he didn't want to see her burn again. She really dared to write with ink on bedsheets worth more than 100,000 yuan. Zhou Song also didn't plan to reply after sending this message. However, her next sentence made him slightly stunned. What's so scary about going to jail? My mother's eyes were blinded by you people, Uncle Zhou. After saying that, she even added a cat tilting its head expression. Chapter 26 Save. Bai Shi sent the message purely out of a mischievous mood. She was in class, sleepy, and the crazy gene in her blood was stirring. But after she sent it, she regretted it a little. She shouldn't have aroused his suspicion so early. Sure enough, after reading the message, Zhou Song frowned deeply. After reading it for a few seconds, he sent 3 words in a serious tone. Explain it clearly. Bai Shi, it's not directed at you, I was just joking, all capitalists are the same. She giggled in a joking manner, but the man was obviously not so easily fooled. Zhou Kongyi also looked at the incomplete text message and pondered for a second, then said to his assistant, who was still tidying the bedsheets. Find out about Bai Ji's mother's eyes. Bai Ji's mother's eyes? The assistant didn't react for a while. Zhou Kongyi, find out how her mother went blind and which hospital she went to at the time. It should all be in the medical records. This was the easiest thing in the world for Zhou Kongyi. 85% of the hospitals in Jingbei City were within his network. The assistant understood. At this time, he also tidied up the unsightly bed sheet. Mr. Zhou, the boss said that this thing should be disposed of properly, so it definitely can't be simply thrown away in the trash. Burn it? Or destroy it in some other way? Zhou Kongyi reopened the financial report and didn't even glance in that direction. But he said with a smile. Send it back to Shishu. Assistant? This may cause problems in the future. The assistant couldn't believe that this was the boss's decision. Wouldn't Miss Luo go crazy if the boss kept this? Before the assistant could finish speaking, Zhou Kongyi coldly and forcefully said, You've packed it so neatly, it's a pity to throw it away. Assistant. Now, the assistant didn't dare to question the boss's decision at all. He took the shopping bag, packed it up nicely, made it look like a gift, and returned it to the villa. Gigi, I was wrong last time. I shouldn't have spoken to you in such a vulgar tone. On the campus of the normal university, Lu Hao was again pestering Bai Ji. I bought the books you like to read. Shall we go to the library together this afternoon? It was early spring, and flowers were blooming one after the other on the dry branches. However, the weather was still a bit cool, as it inevitably was. Maybe you don't want to go to the library. I'll come to your dormitory this afternoon and give you the book. Take a look, you might like it. As they talked, they happened to pass by the playground. At that moment, an unexpected figure appeared before Bai Ji's eyes. Amidst a sea of middle-aged Mediterranean men, a young woman in a light tweed suit and high heels stood out among the group of school trustees. It was none other than Luo Fei. Lu Fei seemed to be discussing investment matters with a few school directors. There had long been rumors that she wanted to enter the education sector to wash away the stigma of being a mistress. Lu Fei saw them too at this moment and nodded to them in acknowledgement. Then she continued chatting with the school directors. Lu Hao was a little excited. Ji, look, it's Auntie Lu Fei. She told me last time that she wanted to donate money to our school to build a tennis court and a swimming pool. Last time? Bai Ji pretended not to know and frowned, saying, when did you meet? Lu Hao, just yesterday, she invited me to dinner. It was at the Boli Hotel. I wanted to ask you to come with me, but you didn't reply to my message. Bai Ji sneered, Lu Hao, I can't tell that you often hang out with women in hotels. Lu Hao became anxious, how is it hanging out? She is my future mother-in-law and your future senior. We really just had dinner. Bai Ji's smile became more and more mocking, really? She paused and looked at him coldly, do you know how Luo Fei seduced Su Tian's father back then? It was also at a company dinner. While her boss was in the bathroom, she barged into the men's room. At the time, Su Tian was only 13 years old, and her parents had not yet divorced. It was also what you call a normal dinner. Bai Ji said these words in a very flat tone. But Lu Hao's face was blood red. He had never come into contact with this before, and he had never seen the structure of a woman from childhood to adulthood, nor had he seen any pictures. He was so ashamed that his throat tightened. I didn't know about this, I'm sorry, Ji. You'd better not follow me anymore, Lu Hao. We are not people from the same world, and it's impossible anymore. In fact, Bai Ji didn't intentionally pull Lu Hao. She subconsciously began to distance herself from him. She didn't want to watch him sink deeper and deeper. To get back at Lu Jiang, she could simply ask Lu Jiang and Lu Mingyue. But Lu Hao was unwilling to do that. As he watched Bai Ji's back grow further and further away, his heart ached. His clear eyes were tinged with soft red. Ji, why can't you continue to use me? Maybe if you keep using me, you'll develop feelings for me. What do I have to do to make up for the hurt in your heart? A gust of wind blew, and Lu Hao's eyes itched painfully. Tears almost fell from his eyes when a hand with cherry-red nail polish rested on his left shoulder. He subconsciously flinched in surprise, only to realize it was Luo Fei. She had finished chatting with the school directors and came up behind him. Luo Fei saw the tears in his eyes and glanced at Bai Ji's back not far away. With a half-smile, she asked, did you have a fight? Lu Hao sniffed, Ji wants to break up with me. Break up? Lu Fei couldn't believe it. With Ji's qualifications, how could she bear to let go of Lu Hao, a young master who had a silver spoon in his mouth? So soon she thought of a reason she knew. Lu Fei patted him on the shoulder and comforted him in the tone of someone who had been there, don't worry, she won't break up with you. Without you, where would she find a boyfriend with better qualifications than you? The Lu family is a medical family. Money may not be the most, but the social status is awesome, and they are truly part of the upper class in Beijing. Because of this connection, she even treats Lu Hao with a certain degree of politeness. But he doesn't appreciate it, Auntie Luo, she's not the materialistic girl you think she is. Luo Fei sneers. Then aren't you stupid for not being able to see through it? If she's not materialistic, why does she keep dangling you on the line like this? Isn't the point to keep you head over heels for her? Luo Fei felt that this Lu Hao was really stupid. She also became a little more vigilant towards the girl named Bai Ji. She had heard that this young master of the Lu family had always been pure of heart and had no desires, and that apart from studying, he wasn't even interested in online games. That girl really has some skills, and at such a young age she can make Lu Hao spin around. At this moment, a calculating look flashed in Luo Fei's eyes. How, since you are your teacher Zhou's only student, why don't you let Auntie Lu help you this time? Lu Hao subconsciously wanted to say yes. But when he thought about what Ji had just said about Luo Fei's stories, Ji was originally angry because she had seen Luo Fei. After thinking about it, Lu Hao still shook his head, don't bother, I want to pursue Ji myself, thank you, Auntie Luo. Luo Fei was insulted, and although she encouraged Lu Hao on the surface, she was of course very unhappy. After bidding farewell to Lu Hao, the more she thought about this Bai Ji, the more puzzled she felt. What methods did she use to captivate Lu Hao, the Lu family's well-cultivated and outstanding youngest son? Did Lu Jiang and Lu Mingyue know about this? Since Lu Hao himself was not appreciative, she did not want to sever this relationship with the Lu family. So Luo Fei called Lu Mingyue, Lu Hao's mother. Hello, Mrs. Lu, this is Luo Fei, we met at the reception last time. I was at Normal University today to discuss cooperation, and guess who I saw? Chapter 27 Getting Sick. Both Lu Mingyue and Lu Jiang knew that Lu Hao had recently fallen in love, but they had no idea what kind of girl he was dating. Therefore, even though Lu Mingyue usually had an average relationship with Luo Fei, she didn't really think much of her. But when she said she had seen Lu Hao's girlfriend, out of concern for her son, Lu Mingyue still invited Luo Fei to a nearby hotel for afternoon tea that afternoon. Of course, Luo Fei also wanted to establish a relationship with the Lu family, so she used Lu Hao as an excuse. But she knew that Mr. and Mrs. Lu were not to be fooled, especially intellectuals like them, who were most proud. So Luo Fei also tried to behave with restraint and courtesy, and did not directly and positively comment on Bai Ji's various aspects. She just learned the elegant and arrogant tone of intellectuals like them, and mentioned it in an obvious and subtle way. Bai Ji is a girl with very good grades, and she should also be filial, but her family is having some difficulties and she cleans this hotel. Lu Mingyue's face visibly turned pale. After returning home, Lu Mingyue also told her husband about this matter. Lu Jiang also frowned when he heard about it. Tell me again, what is the name of that girl? Bai Ji, white is in the color white, and Ji is in branch, said Lu Mingyue. Lu Jiang, I understand, I will handle this matter. A girl like this should not be in Hao Hao's scope of choosing a spouse. On the other side, Bai Ji and Lu Hao did not know what Luo Fei had done today. Bai Ji instinctively had a bad feeling. But she couldn't figure out what was wrong. However, since she had to hand in an important group assignment that Friday, she had been busy with her part-time job and hadn't finished it yet. So for the next 3 days, Bai Ji devoted herself to her work and didn't have any energy left to think about Luo Fei's appearance at their school. For 3 days, she also ignored Zhou Tsong. Over there, Zhou Tsong was also busy with work. During those 3 days, he went on a business trip to Europe to discuss a very important project. When he returned, the man got off his private jet and got into his luxury car, checking his email and messages as usual. But at some point, he suddenly realized that she had not bothered him for 3 days. The man pressed the lock screen expressionlessly. His assistant was sitting in the front seat, reporting on the work he had done in China over the past 3 days. It wasn't until the assistant had finished that the man asked, seemingly casually, "Have you found out about the thing I asked you to look into last time?" The assistant understood immediately. "Mr. Zhou, Ms. Bai Ji's mother's medical records are very strange. There is no record of her medical treatment before this year." Then the cause of the blindness? The assistant lowered his head. "I looked at the diagnosis given by the doctors at the 3 hospitals this time. Ms. Bai Ji's mother worked in the textile industry in her early years and had chronic cervical spondylosis, which itself tends to cause pressure on the eyes. This, combined with the fact that she cried for a long time sometime 4 years ago, triggered glaucoma that was not treated in time, which caused irreversible loss of vision." The deeper Zhou Kanjia heard the story, the deeper the crease between his eyebrows became. "Crying for a long time?" he asked. "Yes." The man pondered for a moment, and then remembered something that Bai Ji had said in front of a bar 4 years ago. She said it was the anniversary of her father's death 4 years ago. Now it seems that she wasn't entirely lying. The man said calmly, "Okay, I understand. You go about your business." "Okay. Mr. Zhou, your schedule is full from today to Friday. You have an appointment with the wedding company with Miss Luo on Saturday morning, and the afternoon is your personal time." Understood. Zhou Tsong also had little rest during these 3 days. There was an important press conference in the afternoon, and now he was sitting in the back seat of the luxury car, beginning to close his eyes to rest. Over there, Bai Ji was also very sleepy. It was 11 p.m. on Thursday night, and there was still an hour until the assignment deadline. Bai Ji's assignment is a research paper on the American Beat Generation, for which there is a lot of literature to read. But the literature is difficult and obscure, and even if it is just a group assignment, it still requires a lot of effort to do well. In addition, she has fallen behind schedule, so she is now working overtime. In the past 3 days, she has had less than 10 hours of sleep in total. Even her young body can't take it anymore. Her head kept falling down from sleep, but she couldn't afford to drink coffee, so she can only keep her hands and feet in cold water to refresh herself. Su Tian went to a model photo shoot today. When she returned to the dormitory, she saw Bai Ji sitting alone at the table. Her hands were already red from the cold, and her 2 pale little feet were so battered that she couldn't bear to look at them. Su Tian saw the basin of ice water next to her and immediately realized that Bai Ji was refreshing herself in this way again. Su Tian didn't say a word, and she went over and poured out her ice water, and put a brand new cup of hot chocolate mocha next to her book. "Here, have it." Before Bai Ji could say anything, Su Tian interrupted, "Don't say no, because I didn't buy it for you specifically." I bought it because I remembered that I had a filming assignment at the weekend and I was afraid of gaining weight. Here, drink it. After saying that, she left Bai Ji with the cup of mocha, and turned around to take off her shirt and get ready to go take a bath. Bai Ji looked at the mocha, her eyes slightly watering. Su Tian had always been the only bright spot in her life since she was 17, and would always help and care for her in various ways that protected her pride. So even if it wasn't to avenge her father, just to avenge the humiliation she had suffered at Luo Fei's hands over the years, she wouldn't let Luo Fei get away with it. Thinking about this, Bai Ji wiped away the hot tears in her eyes. This kind of life will not continue forever, this kind of life of suffocating in ice water. She studied desperately, becoming a full-mark myth at the normal university, just to end this kind of life. She must pull herself together, for her mother and Su Tian, and for herself. Thinking of this, she finished writing the last word of her homework. She pressed submit on the webpage on her phone. She had always been talented, and worked so hard that she was easily isolated to a degree. Bai Ji's homework, which she had written with all her might, would undoubtedly be an excellent example that would shock her teacher and classmates when she handed it in. After handing in her homework, Bai Ji let out a sigh of relief. She closed her eyes and fell asleep somehow. When Su Tian came out of the bathroom, she found Bai Ji had fallen asleep on the table from exhaustion. Su Tian covered her with her own jacket with concern. At that moment, Bai Ji suddenly woke up and grabbed Su Tian's wrist. "Sweetie, do you know what? Uncle Joe kissed me 3 days ago." Su Tian was stunned for a moment, and then her face, which was more beautiful than any movie star, was agitated with emotion. "Holy shit! Really? He kissed you on his own initiative? A mistake?" Bai Ji was exhausted and disoriented, but now she was especially clear-headed. "No," she said decisively. "He pressed me against the window, his fingers pinching my waist, and he stuck out his tongue." She licked her lips, lingering a moment on the lipstick she had on her own pale lips. Here, just the other day, there was still the blood he had bitten out. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Su Tian really almost fainted at this point. Is this fucking ridiculous? Help! She knew how Zhou Kongyi was. She never expected it. Her uncle Zhou, when he went crazy, was such a horny man. Bai Ji laughed innocently. "So you're saying I should take advantage of the situation and sleep with him, right? He said that this not only requires talent, but also hard work, and told me to do my homework well. Which means he wants to do it too, right? But it's so hard. I have to do homework again. So much homework, why so much homework?" Bai Ji became more and more depressed as she spoke, and her voice even carried a hint of a sob. She was rarely so vulnerable, and her voice was a little muffled, which was quite unusual. Su Tian then felt something was wrong. "Hey, Ji, what's wrong with you?" She noticed that Bai Ji's face seemed very red. "Ji, are you sick?" She reached out to feel Bai Ji's forehead, and the temperature was shockingly high. Chapter 28. Su Tian was shocked by her temperature. Recently, there has been a lot of talk about the flu at school. Neither of them had any medicine on hand, and it was inconvenient to go to another dormitory late at night to borrow medicine. Su Tian immediately reassured her, "Ji, don't be afraid, you must have a fever. I'll take you to the school clinic right now." Saying this, Su Tian squatted on the ground and found socks and shoes to help Bai Ji put them on one by one. She helped Bai Ji up from the chair and took off the thick clothes on her body and put them on her. However, she realized that there was nearly a kilometer between the dormitory building and the school clinic. It was definitely not enough for her to support Bai Ji alone, and she was afraid that the sick person would not have the strength to walk the road. At this critical moment, she could not care about so many things. Su Tian called Lu Hao, but no one answered the phone. Su Tian tried Bai Ji's phone again, but there was also a busy signal. Su Tian angrily cursed the dogman, then gritted her teeth and personally carried Bai Ji on her back, running towards the school infirmary. Su Tian is a part-time model, 1.75 meters tall, but her weight has always been maintained at 90 pounds. It took a lot of effort for her to carry Bai Ji to the school infirmary. She did not dare to delay on the way at all, and by the time she arrived at the school infirmary, her throat already had a slightly fishy and sweet smell of blood. Su Tian panted while knocking on the door. "Teacher, my friend has a high fever. Can you take a look at her?" The school nurse quickly opened the door and saw the dizzy Bai Ji, so she quickly asked her to lie down. Then she began to register the information. Su Tian reported her student number and name. However, at this time, the school nurse's expression was a little hesitant. She took Baiji's temperature and listened to her heart. She said sternly, 40 degrees of high fever. It is recommended to go to the hospital for an influenza test. There is no time to delay. Su Tian frowned, but she is very uncomfortable right now. Is there any fever or pain medication she can take first? The school nurse, however, began to prevaricate. The flu has been so severe lately that taking medication without understanding the situation first would not be the right approach. The medication might even interfere with the treatment to come, and with such a high fever, it is still recommended that she go to the hospital. Su Tian became a little anxious, but it's so late, the school gates are closed, and she is so uncomfortable, how can she go to the hospital? The school nurse obviously didn't want to help anymore. She sat there and started organizing something else. Don't you have any other classmates to help? The school nurse asked lightly. Su Tian thought again of the unreliable Lu Hao, and she wanted to curse him a million times to explode. At that moment, she suddenly thought of another person. Su Tian also had the mentality of treating a dead horse as a live horse. After all, it was so late, and an elite man like Zhou Tsong also had a bit of refined egoism. You can kiss me, and buy me expensive gifts. But taking me to the hospital in the middle of the night is a privilege only a woman you truly love can get, not even your wife or girlfriend can do that. Su Tian didn't dare use her own phone number, so she opened Baiji's phone and prepared to send him a text message. When she opened it, the first thing that popped up was Baiji's provocative selfie. Su Tian felt like she had been struck by lightning. Especially after scanning some of the other content, her eyes nearly popped out of her head. I can't believe it. These two. Usually one is more cold and aloof than the other, but in private they're actually having sex. And they're making even an old hand like me blush. Su Tian covered her eyes, wishing for eyes that didn't see those messages. Ignoring the explosive content, she imitated Baiji's tone and sent a message to Zhou Tsong. Uncle Zhou, I'm sick, 40 degrees, the school nurse won't help me. Can you come pick me up and take me to the hospital? I feel so bad. After editing the message, Su Tian clicked send. Su Tian was so nervous. She really didn't mean to read those messages. But Gigi really has a great body. Even she, as a girl, was drooling. After Su Tian sent the message, she started counting the time. If there was no reply for more than 30 seconds, she planned to just call 120. But after almost 2 seconds, Zhou Kongyi's message came through. Meet me at the school gate in 20 minutes. Su Tian thought she was hallucinating when she saw the text message. But the shock continued the next second. The man who was always cold as ice had sent another message. Forget it, just stay where you are. Zhou Kongyi had really made a rare personal appearance. But Su Tian still felt a little strange. The school gate was closed, so if they didn't go to the school gate, how was Zhou Kongyi going to pick them up? 20 minutes later. Just as Su Tian was wondering how Zhou Tsong was going to get into the school, the black Maybach had already pulled up to the empty concrete lot in front of the school nurse's office. Zhou Tsong had also called the principal, and then directly opened the school gate and drove in to pick up Baiji. When Su Tian saw him, her mouth was still in a state where she could fit an egg. The man had a powerful aura, and the moment he stepped onto the steps, Su Tian obediently stood up like a little schoolgirl. Uncle. Zhou Tsong also nodded in response. Then he asked Su Tian, is she asleep? Su Tian, she just woke up. I guess she was in so much pain that she passed out from the fever. The school nurse came out of the restroom at this time and, seeing that Zhou Tsong was also here, said, are you a relative of this student? The child has a high fever, so you should take her to the hospital quickly. The school nurse was also genuinely concerned about Baiji. However, Zhou Tsong's expression was not very good. He ignored the school doctor. Instead, his expression was even a little cold. The next second, the man strode forward. He picked up the girl, who was limp and leaning against the side of the table, and carried her horizontally, putting her in the passenger seat of the car, and even fastened her seatbelt. Su Tian looked at this scene, completely dumbfounded. At this time, Zhou Kongyi looked at Su Tian and said, shouldn't the dormitory be locked at this time? Yes. I'll take her to the hospital first, together? Zhou Kongyi's eyes were cold as stars. Su Tian had regarded him as an uncle since she was little. She was still digesting the idea of her best friend really taking her uncle, and said stupidly, is that okay? Isn't the villa not meant for people to stay overnight? After Su Tian had finished asking, she saw Zhou Kongyi pull the corners of his mouth up in a rare smile. He didn't answer whether or not he was taking them back to the villa. He just mocked with a hint of coldness. Didn't your best friend tell you that she successfully stayed the night on the first night you introduced her here? Su Tian. Oh my god. If Uncle knows, he must know everything. He guessed that it was a conspiracy between the two sisters. Su Tian has been extremely afraid of Zhou Kangyi since she was a child. Lu Hao, the top art student in the country, was afraid of him, let alone a poor student like her. Along the way, Su Tian sat in the back seat, not daring to make a sound. She was as good as a chicken. Zhou Kangyi also didn't say a word. That feeling made the impatient Su Tian hate being suffocated, and she would rather be given a quick death. Finally, they arrived at the hospital. The doctor tested Bai Ji, and after she was hooked up to the floor, her temperature began to drop. After confirming that she was fine, Su Tian planned to run away. Uncle Zhou, my friend asked me to go drinking, so I'll go first. It's impossible to go back to Shishu with them, no way. Just now, when Uncle looked at her, he wanted to kill her with a knife. Zhou Tsong only glanced at her, didn't comment on her going drinking at this hour, and just said, go. Then Su Tian took off. After getting the 4 drip, Bai Ji felt a little better. But she had been seriously sleep deprived recently, and the pressure of her part-time job and studies had left her physically exhausted. She woke up confused for a moment, then fell asleep again. When she regained a little consciousness, she was on a big, soft bed. The bed was so big that she had never slept on a bed wider than 1 meter, and she instantly felt very relaxed. Bai Ji felt someone by the bedside who seemed to have been taking care of her. She remembered sweetly giving her a mocha and helping her get dressed. So she grabbed the person's hand and babbled nonsense. He kissed me and told me to do my homework. He wants me, doesn't he? He wants me like crazy. Chapter 29 Ice Cream. Zhou Kangyi was also sitting next to her, monitoring her temperature. The result was that she was first caught by the wrist, and the arrogant words were what he heard. His face suddenly turned black. He pulled his hand away. Really? It's 40 degrees Celsius, and you're still thinking about this? How can I see people? You're the one with a big appetite for food. Zhou Kangyi had not had much rest these past few days either. Sitting in the dim light, he soon felt drowsy. He didn't know when he fell asleep. When he woke up, he felt an itch in the palm of his hand. The girl in the bed was wide awake. Her clear eyes looked at him like a little animal. Her small, white hand took his hand, and her little finger hooked his palm. Zhou Kangyi's dark eyes focused instantly, and he pulled his hand back. If you're awake, go back to school. Bai Ji is not going back to school. She was clearly cold like a Buddha's disciple even though he carried her home. She surveyed the surroundings and muttered, "This is the room I stayed in last time, right? Uncle Zhou, you're letting me stay the night at Shishu again. It seems like you've been making exceptions for me all along." She had just recovered from a fever, but was already trying her best to flirt with him. Not only was this young girl dedicated, she also had quite the spirit of a wolf. But he didn't want to see her tire herself out again and get sick. So he left directly from the room and made a phone call. Someone should have said something about the fact that the school doctor's office at Shida University refused to treat students. The student had a high fever in the middle of the night, but the school doctor didn't care. Of course, a small school doctor doesn't have that kind of nerve. I'm afraid he was given someone's orders. Sure enough, the assistant gave feedback in a few minutes. It was Dean Liu. He found a middle-level leader at the school and wanted to make things difficult for Miss Bai Ji at the school. In addition, Miss Luo Fei went to the normal university a few days ago to talk about investment and met Dean Liu's wife that afternoon. The whole thing seems to be connected in this way. Zhou Tsong also pondered for a second and said, "I see." After hanging up the phone, the man pulled his lips indifferently. There was a hint of coolness. A mere middle-level leader dared to joke about a matter of life and death. Although he did not study medicine, he is also a leader in the medical industry. Such scum, of course, he saw one and eliminated one. The next day, the outsourced school doctor was fired. At the same time, the department head Lu Jiang was also interviewed by the principal. It caused a lot of noise in the education sector. Zhou Tsong is also very prestigious in the education and medical circles in Beijing. The Zhou family has invested in countless hospitals and schools across the country. The fact that Zhou Tsong also personally rectified the school's ethos quickly spread. It reached Lu Jiang's ears. Lu Jiang was very dissatisfied when he heard about it. He didn't doubt that Zhou Kangyi and Bai Ji had an unusual relationship. He just thought that since Zhou Kangyi also had a stake in the normal university, Zhou Kangyi should set things right and rectify the evil trends among the teachers. But Lu Jiang himself was not so relaxed. Even though he was nearly 20 years older than Zhou Kangyi, in front of Zhou Kangyi, he was completely passive. He also knew how upright Zhou Kangyi usually was and how much he hated such underhanded tricks. It was precisely for this reason that Zhou Kangyi didn't bother to use unscrupulous means to fight for the Zhou family's inheritance. Otherwise, controlling the entire Zhou family would be a breeze for him. Lu Jiang was restless all morning, fearing that it would affect his cooperation and friendship with himself. So he made a phone call to ask Lu Mingyue where the news came from. You said that Hao Hao's girlfriend is a poor student with no background. Is this information reliable? Lu Mingyue, Luo Fei said it herself. For someone like her, how could she not be able to find out about someone? Lu Jiang's tone turned cold. Do you know that last night, when we sent Hao Hao away to the neighboring provincial capital, the girl had a high fever, and who took her to the hospital? Who? Zhou Tsong also personally called the principal of the normal university. The person who answered the phone personally took her to the hospital. Lu Mingyue suddenly fell silent. Although Lu Jiang did not lose his temper on the phone, she sensed that he was blaming her for not acting prudently this time. Bai Ji and Zhou Tsong also had a friendship, so how did she not find out about this? Lu Mingyue hung up the phone, and the more she thought about it, the more annoyed she became. From her perspective, what had she done wrong? Could it be that this was a plot by Luo Fei? Did Luo Fei dislike this girl and deliberately use the Lu family to trip her up? When she thought about this, Lu Mingyue exploded. She had taken all her anger out on Lu Jiang, and now she wanted to take it all out on Luo Fei. Luo Fei was in her office when she received the call, and the first thing she heard was Lu Mingyue's taunts. Miss Luo, you're playing a clever game, playing both the overt and covert strategies, and now it's come back to haunt us, the Lu family. I'm warning you, the Lu and Zhou families have been friends for 3 generations, and you, a woman who relies on men to get ahead, can't cause any trouble. Luo Fei was completely confused. Mrs. Lu? Is there some kind of misunderstanding? Lu Mingyue had never looked up to Luo Fei. After this incident, it was completely impossible for her to make friends with Luo Fei. That little bit of contempt in her heart was completely torn apart. Lu Mingyue snorted, I advise you, apart from polishing your appearance, women should also read more and polish their brains. That Bai student is not only young and beautiful, she was also the top scorer in the college entrance exam that year. Such a girl, even if she comes from a poor background, is a potential asset. No wonder Zhou Tsong drove her to the hospital in the middle of the night. You should pay more attention to this capable little girl, Luo Fei. Shishu. Zhou Kangyi returned home in the evening and found that the little girl had not left. Bai Ji was sitting blatantly on the sofa watching TV while constantly gulping down water. She was wearing his t-shirt, which barely covered her thighs. Uncle Zhou, you're home? She gave him a look of welcome like a little animal upon seeing him return home. There's nothing to eat in the fridge, so I didn't cook. Can you take me out to eat? Bai Ji came up to him and took hold of his arm, as if she were a spoiled child asking for a treat. Before Zhou Kangyi could refuse, she pouted and covered her stomach. She was hungry and hadn't eaten all day. The man frowned. Why hadn't you eaten? Bai Ji pouted. I don't have any money. The school cafeteria is subsidized, and a meal costs just 7 yuan. How can takeaways from restaurants outside be so affordable? Zhou Kangyi suddenly remembered that her family was poor, and the nanny in Shishu had returned to her hometown in the past few days. There was no bus or subway station nearby, so she couldn't go back to school and couldn't afford to buy food. Thinking about this, a faint sense of guilt welled up in the man's heart. What do you want to eat? I want to eat McDonald's. She's easy to feed. Zhou Kangyi took out his phone to order takeaway, but Bai Ji said, I want something freshly fried. Can you take me out to eat? As if she was afraid that he would say no, she said carefully, I've checked on my phone, and there's a McDonald's about a kilometer from here. Zhou Tsong had driven past it sometimes, and did remember there was a McDonald's nearby. The man glanced at the time. It was already 10 o'clock at night. In other words, she hadn't eaten for at least 24 hours. And she was still sick. The man didn't know how he'd agreed, and just said, after you eat at McDonald's, we'll go back to the dormitory. Okay. Bai Ji agreed happily. Food like McDonald's seemed like a luxury to her. In the past, when her father was still alive, he would take her to McDonald's for her birthday every year. When they arrived at the restaurant, she ordered a chicken nugget and a codfish burger, along with a Coke. Sitting on a stool, she ate bite by bite, like a squirrel carefully storing up food. Because she hadn't washed her clothes yesterday, Baiji was now wearing Joe Kangi's clothes. Her lower body was covered in washed vintage skinny jeans, and her hair was tied into a bun on top of her head, making her look even more like a vibrant middle school student. "Do you want some ice cream?" Suddenly, he asked without warning. Chapter 30. After eating, he went back to his dormitory. Baiji was a little flattered. The next second, her big, watery eyes looked at him. "Me, can I?" Jo Song also did not answer her. He just walked over to the counter with his phone, tall and graceful, and told the waiter to get an ice cream cone. It was already late, and there were not many people in the restaurant. The man in a suit with an elite air standing here was even more conspicuous. The waiter, who had been dozing on the night shift, perked up when he saw the celebrity-like face. He said enthusiastically, "The second one is half price. Do you want another one?" Of course, he didn't need sweets. He glanced back at the girl sitting at the table, eating her burger with all her heart, and said, "MMM." Finally, Jo Song also returned to his seat with 2 original flavored cones. "Here." Baiji didn't expect him to buy 2, so she took one and took a lick. He added, "This one is for you too." "Thank you, uncle. When I get paid for my next part-time job, I'll buy you McDonald's too." Jo Song also wanted to say no. But seeing her joy overflowing as she held the ice cream cone, he didn't want to be the boring adult who dampened the mood. "Mm-mm," he responded indifferently. After finishing their McDonald's, the man drove her back to her dormitory. The girl sat in the passenger seat of the black Maybach. Jo Kangi also drove expressionlessly. She held an ice cream in each hand and ate from one and then the other. She looked like a happy child going on a spring outing. Jo Kangi deliberately didn't look at her happy expression in the rearview mirror. It was only when they were approaching the entrance to the normal university that the man casually mentioned, "When is your mother's next eye examination?" "The day after tomorrow, at the weekend." "Jo Kangi, I've booked an appointment for you with a specialist, after someone else's. Just go to the queue with your medical card." Baiji knew that he would not do what Luo Fei had done and cut the queue. But adding an appointment for her was already a mercy from God. "Jo Kangi, don't worry about the cost, the hospital will charge you the normal fee, which your income from your part-time job at the Bully Hotel can easily afford." After saying that, he looked at her and calmly said, "The condition of her eyes is a bit complicated, so she needs to see a better doctor." It was just before 10:30 p.m., and since it was the weekend, the school didn't lock the doors until 11 p.m. At the entrance, many college students who had been playing outside also returned to school one after the other. The Maybach stopped at the school entrance. Baiji, holding the unfinished ice cream, muttered to him, "Will Uncle Joe accompany me the day after tomorrow?" Jo Song didn't say yes or no, but only left 2 words. "Let's talk about it later." Before the man could finish speaking, a kiss landed on his lips. It was a kiss from a girl, and it left a faint sweetness on his lips, a light milky fragrance. Pure and seductive. "Uncle Zoe, thank you. Thank you for making me feel loved by the world." Jo Song froze for half a second, and when he came back to his senses, the girl had already got out of the car, waved at him, and beamed with emotion. Then she walked towards the school gate with her ice cream. Jo Kangi also sat in the car alone for a while after seeing Baiji off. After an unknown period of time, he slowly lit a cigarette and rested with his eyes closed against the backrest of the car seat. It seemed that he was trying to use the nicotine in the cigarette to cover up the sweet taste at the corner of his mouth, which had left a deep mark in his heart. However, he found that no matter how hard he tried, he could not cover up the emotions about to burst out of his heart. After taking Baiji back to school, Jo Song also did not return to Shishu that night, but stayed at the office directly. He stayed until the next morning. Since it was Saturday, there were not many people at the office the next morning. Jo Song also sat in front of the monitor watching the data trend, and before he knew it, it was 10 o'clock in the morning when Luo Fei's phone call came in. "Song, did you forget that we made a plan to go to the wedding company together today?" The man glanced at the schedule and realized that he had indeed forgotten about it. He could afford to forget about the wedding dress and rings. But the venue and catering for the wedding involved the experience of all the guests. It was an important business event, a banquet for all the important business partners. This was the one area where he still had to personally attend to things. "I'll come over now." Lu Fei couldn't say anything to the man's lukewarm response. But of course she was secretly very unhappy. She thought he was just busy with something important, which was why he was 2 hours late. She didn't expect him to simply forget about it. Lofi sat alone on the sofa in the wedding company, her face looking very bad, feeling very humiliated. The more she thought about it, the more her aura became gloomy and terrifying. She sent a text message to her assistant, Baiji is someone you should continue to keep an eye on. The more I think about it, the more suspicious I become. The assistant thought to herself that she had finally come to her senses. Boss, so what actions do you need to take to punish her? Don't alert the enemy first. The girl who provoked her hasn't shown up for a few days either. But the storm at the police station has not yet subsided. They have already lost Qianshan, and they cannot afford to make the same mistake again. School. After Baiji returned to her dormitory, Su Tian followed up with her question after question. Ji, were you at my uncle's house the past 2 days? Oh my god, did he take care of you personally? Baiji nodded as she remembered Zhou Kangyi sitting by her bed that night. Oh my god, you are amazing. My uncle has never taken care of anyone. He must have fallen for you. I think there's a chance for this to work out. Damn, that bitch Lofi, I never thought she'd end up like this. Baiji also knew that Zhou Kangyi had fallen for her. But for an elite man like that, how much value did falling in love have? He wouldn't ruin his prospects as the heir to the Zhou family or give up the billions he had with Lofi for this. As she was sitting in her bedroom thinking about this, Baiji received a message from the hotel catering department girl she had added last time. We've seen Lofi again, and this time she's with her real fiancé. The two of them are in the banquet hall with the wedding planning team discussing the banquet and decorations. One of them even sent over a photo. In the photo, the man and woman are sitting on a white velvet sofa. Although they don't look close, they still look like a perfect match of upper-class people. Especially Lofi's expression on her face, she looked so pleased with herself, so smug. Baiji zoomed in on the photo and saw that she was still wearing a large diamond ring on her hand. The girl pursed her lips. Thinking back to last night, the man had bought her ice cream. He bought her ice cream, but gave Luo Fei such a big diamond ring. It's so annoying. Baiji's pale lips pursed, her eyes reddened, and she whispered into the screen. Uncle Zhou, I'm going to give you a very, very terrible punishment right now. For the wedding venue decoration, Lofi liked a dark blue European retro style plan. The whole scene design was luxurious and romantic. Just the scene decorations alone cost more than 1 million yuan. But this plan was also rejected by Zhou Kangyi. Lofi thought he was just saying it was too expensive. Unexpectedly, the man said, the pattern is too complicated and not grand enough. Let's change it to this white crystal version. The people who came that day were some of the most important business executives in the Zhou family, and Zhou Kangyi's goal was to maintain cooperation with them. The brighter and more spacious the wedding venue, the more suitable it is for business discussions. But Luo Fei couldn't believe it. This version in white crystal costs more than 5 million yuan in total. This price is already quite extravagant for a wedding banquet scene. It costs more than 5 million yuan just for the decorations, not to mention the drinks, gifts, etc. It's a real grand wedding. Even though she liked the blue model at first glance, she was very happy to accept it as long as the price was reasonable. Luf was extremely excited. Kanjia, thank you, I love. Before you can say it, a girl from the hotel housekeeping department comes up to Zhou Kangyi and hands him a white cosmetic bag. Mr. Zhou, this is something you left behind when you checked in on the 12th. My colleague asked me to give it to you. The 12th? Lu Fei's joyful smile suddenly froze at the corners of her mouth.